Hogwarts on Ice. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, since I'm not the owner of these characters, I may do things with them that you don't like or agree with. Sorry in advance, but that's the nature of fan fiction. To do otherwise kind of defeats the purpose of fan fiction, and copying JKR word for word would certainly see a lawsuit heading in my direction. Chapter 50. Neville was taking a good-natured ribbing from the Weasley twins. Surely you can tell us now, we're on our way there. We hate surprises, Neville, unless it's us that's supplying them. Sorry guys, I told you I can't help. The three of them were arranging it all. Padma wanted it to be a surprise for me too. You were serious about that. We thought you were pulling our leg. What do Harry and Padma know about Christmas? They've only celebrated it once. These are the people you let organize our Christmas party. I'm really disappointed in you, Neville. Fred, it may have escaped your notice, but this party is for the first years. You're both invited along to help out. We know, and we will. It's just that we never get invited anywhere. Quote ellipsis. And we intend to make the most of it. The rest of the first-year Gryffindors were following on behind, and of course listening to every word. Ginny couldn't help but interrupt. Is it any wonder you two don't get invited anywhere? This is my first Christmas party, and if you spoil it with any of your pranks, you'll both be sorry. You don't need to worry, Ginny, we'll be on our best behavior. Yeah, Hermione's already passed out that warning. No offense, sis, she's a lot scarier than you. They reached the doors and found they were the first to arrive, apart from the Ravenclaw trio of course who had set the room up. Neville led them in and then stopped dead in his tracks, leading to a lot of pushing behind him. The Gryffindors were soon all inside, and all now standing there with wide eyes and open mouths. Padma nervously approached them, she was watching for Neville's reaction. Welcome to the party, what do you think of our idea? Neville was having trouble getting his mouth to work, it was as if his eyes had commandeered all his brain power to absorb the wondrous sight that currently greeted him. Two sides of the room had tables along their edge, tables that would hold about 6 people each. The eating area was separated from the rest of the room by a railing that had a gap to be used as an entrance. Going through that entrance would lead you onto an ice rink. Harry and Hermione were currently skating around the massive fully decorated Christmas tree that commanded the center of the rink. There was music playing and snow gently falling as the laughing couple sped toward them, stopping at the railing. Well, what do they think? I don't know, Harry, they haven't said a word yet. Ginny was almost hyperventilating as she tried to answer for the shocked Gryffindors. A couple of years ago our pond froze enough to let us try skating, it was nothing like this though, this is simply beautiful. It was then Neville got his mouth to work, though his brain still hadn't quite caught up yet. I can't skate, I mean, I've never tried to skate. This saw Padma smile. That's why there's a railing around the entire rink, or you could always hold on to me. Oh, and there's a cushioning charm on the ice, we didn't want anyone getting hurt. There are sets of skates at every table, the room will resize them to fit. The idea was to do some skating and then stop for food, followed by more skating. At that, the Ravenclaws arrived and Luna emitted a squeal of delight. I absolutely love skating. Oh, this is just amazing, where are the skates? That started a rush to the tables. When falling on your bum didn't hurt, everyone was determined to give ice skating a try. Colin of course had his camera and was soon busy taking pictures, his family would never believe this. The tables and chairs appeared to be made out of ice, yet were warm to the touch. The snow falling on the rink was also amazing, since it didn't build up and appeared to just be absorbed into the ice. The other two houses had now arrived and the room, or should that be Ice Cavern, rang with the sound of excited laughter. The rink was filling up fast with skaters moving in a clockwise direction around the sparkling tree to avoid collisions. There were all levels of skating on display, from a few too nervous to leave the security of the railing to those performing spins and turns. Jake, a muggle-born Hufflepuff, was clearly a very good skater and was soon trying to teach some of the others the tricks he could do. Henrika had taken one glance at the room, and headed straight back out. She returned with all 4 heads of house and Augusta. Well, was it worth leaving dinner to see this? Phileas was practically bouncing with excitement. Oh, this is wonderful. Do you think they would allow me to join in? This had Henrika laughing. Phileas, I'm sure they would love for you to join them. As he shot off to find a pair of skates, Henrika spoke to the remaining staff. The minute I saw this, I thought it was far too good to just be used for one night. If we could get some staff volunteers, we could open this every evening until they head home for the holidays. Minerva thought that was a fantastic idea but wanted to add to it. What if we made each evening for a specific year group? Watching all the first years mixed together is something I'll never tire of looking at. We could probably easily do the same thing for the second years tomorrow, 3rd on Thursday, 4th Friday. If we give 5th Saturday, we can have 6th and 7th on Sunday. Will Harry need to be here to open the room? Their discussion was interrupted by loud cheering coming from the rink. The students were all clapping and shouting as Phileas happily sped around the Christmas tree too. Yes, but after people were inside, he could leave. The room will disappear as the last person exits. At that, they were joined by a glowing Harry and Hermione, both of whom were clearly having a great time. Good evening, professors, what do you think of our party? Emma and Dan took the 3 of us skating in London last Christmas and we loved it, and are planning to take everyone there again this Christmas. Won't you join us? We're just about to eat. Minerva was delighted, glimpsing a side of Harry she'd never seen before. Here was a young man just enjoying skating with his girlfriend, the serious student who was Centurion Crow was nowhere in sight. Centurion, we would love to. They had barely moved to the nearest table when food and drink appeared. Hermione was bursting to explain their choices. We wanted to offer something different, so my mum had Dobby bring a selection of party foods to the kitchen. These are the ones the Hogwarts elves could produce. There were platters of all different foods on the table, from pork pies and sausage rolls to pizza and nachos with a melted cheese dip. There were also jugs of hot chocolate, butterbeer and goblin ale to choose from. As the skaters began making their way to the tables, Henrika, Sprout and Slughorn began mingling with the excited students. Augusta and Minerva sat with Harry and Hermione, soon being joined by Neville and Padma, both of whom were just as excited as their best friends. Nachos and goblin ale, you three really know how to throw a party. You've had these before, Neville. Oh yes, Gran, I mean. It's okay, Neville, this is a party so, Gran, is appropriate. Thanks, Gran, I first had nachos in Florida, not with goblin ale though. Minerva then put forward Henrika's idea, and got a very enthusiastic response. You mean we could do this again tomorrow? Harry, say yes. Hey, Patil, save passing out the orders for your own boyfriend. Harry, say yes. Won't it interfere with our studies, Hermione? It took a moment for the other three to realize that their legs were being pulled. Professor McGonagall, I would be delighted to let the rest of Hogwarts try this. Do you want to keep the food part too? I don't know if we could get enough ale for the whole of Hogwarts though. Since Minerva had just tried her first slice of pizza, she was keen for the rest of the school to sample these different things too. She avoided the hot dogs though, purely on the basis of their name. That would be excellent, Centurion. I think we can pencil Professor Flitwick in to be here every night. This had the three Ravenclaws chuckling at their head of house. He was clearly enjoying himself on the ice. If you'll excuse us, I think we should join him. Are you ready, Hermione? Both left, and were soon followed by their two friends, leaving Minerva and Augusta sitting watching their students having a great time. It really does this old heart of mine the world of good to see Harry behaving in a manner that would be considered normal for someone his age. Minerva, I holidayed with them over the summer and know exactly what you mean. Harry and Hermione would run for miles every morning, then start practicing with those swords of theirs. Neville and Padma would join in when they were practicing magical dueling. Their concentration levels were frightening for one so young. Then they would dive into the sea and four kids would suddenly take their place. As you can see, they do know how to relax and have fun. Put yourself down for tomorrow night and you'll see them even more relaxed. This is still Crow's Marauders in here, and they're still watching closely to make sure everyone is having a good time. They were joined by the rest of the staff present as all the students were once more making their way back onto the ice, though the head of Ravenclaw would appear to have had enough, for now. A flushed Phileas quickly downed a mug of goblin ale before releasing a sigh of contentment. I haven't had as much fun in years, nor connected as well with my students. Albus's standoffish policy seems to have filtered down through all of us too, and for that I'm ashamed. He hid himself away behind that gargoyle and lost contact with the real world. Look at those faces, that's as real as it gets. They'll remember this evening long after they've forgotten who taught them how to charm things to float. This is what their Hogwarts experience should be about, creating lasting memories and friendships, not students fighting basilisks or trolls. Phileas got no argument from the rest of the staff. They were all too busy watching the first years having the time of their lives. No student was left on their own. Hands were offered and accepted with no thought to houses, blood status or even gender. They were too busy having fun. Amelia was also having fun. It wasn't every day you got to shock a goblin into silence. Wearing her brooch to Gringotts had once more seen her politely and quickly escorted to Barchoke's office. Understanding the goblin custom of getting right down to business, she had explained her idea to reward his son, leaving the goblin shocked and speechless. Finally getting his act together, the emotion was clearly decipherable in Barchoke's response. Amelia, this is a boon we certainly never expected. Hoped for, yes, in the coming decades perhaps. Forgive me, please, but would you consent to meeting the director to pass on this news? I give you my promise here and now that I will do everything possible to turn your idea into a reality. Like you, though, I need to take this higher. To be honest, the director would suspect I'd grown too fond of grog if I took this to him by myself. Barchoke certainly understood the risk he was taking here. Arriving at the director's office for a meeting that wasn't prearranged was always a risky business. Arriving there with Amelia in tow was tantamount to Barchoke taking his life in his hands. Amelia would be the first ministry official ever to set foot in the director's office. Barchoke thought the potential gains here were certainly worth the risks. If Amelia didn't already know how unusual this situation was, the shocked glances from all the goblins they met walking to the director's office were certainly clues the former Auror couldn't miss. With a minimal wait, they were both shown into the opulent office where, after a polite but short greeting, Amelia told Ragnick why she was here. Even knowing this must be a matter of great importance, otherwise Barchoke would never have dared bring this witch to his office, Ragnick was still shocked at what they were being offered here. Unlike his subordinate though, the goblin leader was determined to get to the bottom of why this offer was being made. Amelia was actually embarrassed to admit that, due to prejudice in the Wizengamot chamber, they didn't know if they could reward all the heroes of Hogwarts equally. She was not prepared for the reaction this caused. A clearly angry goblin leader turned his ire onto Barchoke. In switching to their own language, she also had no idea what was being said. The tone Ragnick used though didn't leave much to the imagination. A bollocking was the same in any language. They disrespect your daughter yet you rush in here, flushed and excited like a virgin bride on her wedding night. Do you expect us just to smile as we are shafted by those pablood morons at the ministry? Surely this witch must have anticipated our reaction. They can't be that stupid, or do they think we are the stupid ones? Barchoke had lost all of his excitement, offering an apology and explanation to his leader. Your pardon, director, I was so taken by the implications of the offer that I never looked at the reason behind it. Amelia here is unaware that Hermione is my daughter. I have kept that information away from her to protect her position at the ministry. That was a mistake. This witch should be considered an asset, and a friend. Ragnick was once more under control as he spoke to Amelia, in English. My apologies, Madam Bones. Both for my rudeness in speaking a language you don't understand and assuming you already possessed certain information that would explain my outburst. The ministry sees Miss Granger as a muggle-born witch. We see her as a child of our nation. You were present the day I awarded her the status of goblin friend. That was before she blood bonded with a certain centurion we all know. She is Harry's mate, therefore a daughter of our nation, and a heroine too. Treating her disrespectfully because of her circumstances would be perceived as an insult by the goblin nation. It was now Amelia's turn to be shocked. Blood bonded, so young. Can I ask if this is a goblin tradition? Blood bonding, yes. Becoming bonded so young though is certainly not. Them doing so was as big a shock to us as I can see it is to you. Barchoke will gladly show you the memory to explain the circumstances surrounding this unusual occurrence. As you can see, this adds further layers of complexity to a problem that was already far from simple. Shrugging off her shock, Amelia tried to deal with the situation she now found herself in. I would like to offer my apologies for any implied slur on Miss Granger. That was certainly never my, or the minister's intention. Our whole plan to defer attention away from her blood status would still seem like our best option for pushing ahead with what we all would like to achieve from this. I hesitate to use the word mess, but this could easily turn into a disaster for all of us. This drew an answering nod of acceptance from Ragnick. The ministry offer is a very good one, and I respect the reasons behind it. Our nation too suffers from its quota of bigots who were put in their place by Miss Granger's heroic efforts, alongside those of her mate and friends. That young couple are becoming more and more the focus of both our societies. Finding a way for them to coexist between us could become one of our greatest challenges. We should never forget the couple also have a third option. The pull from the Muggle world is certainly a strong one, and that would be a disaster for all of us. We are certainly prepared to work with our friends at the ministry to plot a course that is suitable for all of us, especially the young couple in question. This saw Amelia relax slightly. The minister would be pleased to know the goblins had the exact same concerns as them. Director, that is a goal I am happy to work toward. Can I ask if Harry and Hermione's status could become public knowledge? From what you said, am I to understand that this knowledge is known amongst your nation? That fact is certainly well known inside Gringotts. Whether it gets released further than that would be a family matter, something that would need to be discussed between Barchoke and everyone else involved. Do you think releasing that news would help this case? I think so. Blood bonding is an old magical tradition that fell out of favor when the pure blood movement gained preference. Matrimonial matches became more about protecting the bloodlines and joining families than whether the couple were suitable to be married to each other. Having witnessed Harry and Hermione together on many occasions, can I assume they have a strong bond? This had Ragnick laughing, and allowed Barchoke to enter the discussion once more. He couldn't believe the foolish error he'd made and needed to recover swiftly. Amelia, it's the strongest bond anyone here has ever seen. Full body, with an aura that turned golden. Our society moved in the opposite direction to yours. Marriage is sacred to us, so a strong blood bond is vital. I'll let you see the memory of their bonding later, and try to explain why I didn't tell you. I would need to discuss the possibility of releasing this with both of them, and the Grangers. That was fair enough. She then floated the idea of a Gringotts branch opening in Hogsmeade. It was well received. If the law was changed to allow goblins to live at the branch, that would certainly be something we would like to move forward with. It should also encourage more businesses into the village, possibly even rivaling Diagon Alley someday as a commercial center. With all three people in the room realizing they basically wanted the same things to happen, the barriers came down and ideas were being put forward on the best way to achieve their common goals. All thought it was a very productive meeting. It was now time to start the negotiating process, officially. Sirius needed all his Gryffindor courage for what he was planning here. All he had to do though was think of the woman who would soon become his wife, and he knew this had to be done, however awkward it might prove. The warming charms on his thickest cloak were struggling to cope with the severe cold. His time at Hogwarts hadn't really prepared him for weather this cruel. He thought Henrika was joking when she told him the sea would freeze over for a couple of months every year in Lulea. He was beginning to believe her, as well as being thankful that they were a month or so away from experiencing that phenomenon. He had found the house he was searching for without too much trouble. Sirius couldn't remember if he'd ever been inside a house totally made of wood before. The door was soon answered by a blonde colossus of a man that looked as if he would give Hagrid a run for his money in an arm wrestling contest. Hello sir, I'm Sirius Black. Would you happen to be Mr. Hobson? Sirius Black, in the name of Thor, what possessed you to go out dressed like that? This isn't London, we're just below the Arctic Circle here. Get yourself in, man, before you freeze in your fancy breeches. Sirius was hustled into the hall, the homely warmth seeping into his bones within seconds. The house may be wooden, but the welcome was certainly gregarious and genuine. Forget this Mr. Hobson rubbish, I'm Lucas. Sirius shook the massive hand that was offered, thankful it didn't crush his fingers. Let me take that cloak and then we can go through and meet the missus. Moa, we have a visitor, all the way from London too. He found himself being led into a room that just made you want to kick off your shoes, sit by the fire and never leave. This effect had nothing to do with the stunningly beautiful woman who'd just risen from her chair to greet him. Moa Hobson was clearly Henrika's mother, though she didn't look old enough to have a child that age. Sirius bowed, took the offered hand and kissed the back of it. Mrs. Hobson, it really is a pleasure to meet you. Oh, Lucas, we've got a live one here. He knows how to treat a lady too, and my allure didn't affect him in the slightest. Yes dear, it would appear our Henrika has chosen well. Sit, Sirius, and tell us all about yourself. You'll stay tonight of course, though the nights are nearly 20 hours long at this time of year. This had Lucas laughing at his own joke, though Sirius didn't quite get it. He decided to press on with why he was here before agreeing to any sleeping arrangements. They might throw him out the door in the next few moments. He also decided to forego the use of Lucas and Moa. He needed to be formal for this. Mr. and Mrs. Hobson, I have come here to ask your permission for your daughter's hand in marriage. This saw Lucas leave the room and Sirius thought he'd blown it, only for Henrika's father to quickly return with a tray containing a bottle and 3 glasses. Wonderful news like that should be greeted with a glass in your hand to celebrate. Have you ever tried aquavit, Sirius? His, no, was greeted with a smile that was either predatory or signaling a prank was being played here. One taste and Sirius knew it was a prank smile. He also knew the 2 glasses of this aquavit would certainly see him staying the night. He wouldn't be fit to go anywhere else. Moa had brought out what was obviously a scrapbook. When Henrika moved to Scotland to teach, we began to get the British newspaper delivered. It comes to us a day late, but that is not a bad thing sometimes. We had Henrika's letter saying she was all right just before we got the issue where she faced the basilisk. Sirius could see the fear in this beautiful woman's eyes. It was a fear he had shared. I was at her bedside waiting on the potion to work its magic. This gave me time to think. My thoughts turned to what my life would be like without your wonderful daughter in it. I asked her to marry me within moments of her recovering. We hope to become engaged on Boxing Day, with a wedding date still to be arranged. I have invited family and our friends to stay at my house over the holidays. I would like to extend that invitation to you both too. The fear was now replaced by tears of delight in Moa's lovely eyes. She writes all the time and we always knew she was going to be very busy, between working at Hogwarts and Gringotts, but we both miss her so much. We would love the chance to spend the holidays with you both. The house will be very busy, and we'll be planning some outings and activities to keep everyone entertained. You would be very welcome additions to the madness that we hope the holidays will be. One thing though, could you not tell Henrika you're coming to London? I would like it to be a surprise for her. This had a jovial Lucas refilling the glasses and offering a toast to Christmas in London, and much holiday madness. Moa then offered her own toast, showing both men the picture taken of the soon-to-be engaged couple at the Ministry summer ball. To Henrika and Sirius, a beautiful couple. Sirius couldn't let that go unanswered, so offered a toast of his own. To the beautiful Hobson women, may there one day be many more of them. That was something Lucas would certainly drink to, before indicating the scrapbook Moa held. Henrika writes all the time, so we feel like we already know you. We want to use this time to fill in the blanks, about you and the rest of the people in those pictures. The last time Sirius had felt this comfortable in someone's house was when he ran away from home and stayed with James. Lucas and Moa were certainly physically nothing like the Potters, their attitude to life though appeared surprisingly similar. They certainly made him feel just as welcome as that scared 16-year-old boy had felt all those years ago. Sirius had soon kicked off his shoes and told story after story. When Moa then brought out another book with pictures of Henrika growing up, it was his turn to listen as stories of the woman who would be his wife were being offered. The long night passed pleasantly and easily. The skating evenings were proving a massive success. The first years had been making everyone jealous at breakfast before McGonagall stood and announced the schedule for the rest of the school to participate. The most noticeable event amongst the group of friends was Blaise holding Parvati's hand as they skated along during the second year's evening in the room. This was a gigantic boost to Parvati's confidence, and something her friends and family approved of. Ronald Weasley's detentions were over, so he had been allowed to attend. He stood at the railing and laughed at those who slipped. That lasted until the food appeared. Eating was far more interesting to him than skating ever would be. Ron actually reveled in having a table all to himself. He didn't have to share the food on it with anybody else. The Parvati development from Wednesday evening saw Henrika being approached about a couple of things. Bill arrived for their lesson on Saturday morning with an answer from her and Sirius, and a couple of envelopes. Harry made his way over to the Slytherin table to personally deliver them. If Blaise appeared shocked to receive an envelope, Draco was astonished. Opening that envelope kicked his level of incredulity up a fair few notches. He and Pansy were invited to Lord Black's engagement party on Boxing Day. Pansy was ecstatic at what this would mean. Oh, Draco, this is wonderful. Father was really unhappy that I wasn't at the Ministry summer ball. We won't make the Christmas one either. Here though is something that will pacify him. I think these invitations will be extremely hard to come by. This will make him think twice about ending our betrothal. Lord Black's interest will ensure that. Pansy, we both know who's behind this, and I'll bet he still claims I don't owe him anything. Both were watching Harry as he left the hall to attend his training. On entering the room, their training didn't begin immediately. They all understood there were things to be discussed first. Harry started the ball rolling, not happy with some of the news he'd been receiving from his father. Assistant Ambassador, I want you to know these changes did not come from us. We are very happy having you for an instructor and will certainly resist any moves to see you replaced for our weekend lessons. Bill was actually quite touched with the concern these four were showing him. It was time to let them see that concern was misplaced. Thank you very much for that vote of confidence. I can assure you all I will also resist any moves that would see our weekend lessons halted. What this is though is simply a case of putting Hogwarts needs first. Do any of you have the slightest doubt that Remus Lupin will be a better defense teacher than Lockhart? The only answer Bill got was 4 looks that clearly wondered if he'd lost his mind. Thought not. Now, Hogwarts and the Ministry have stuck their neck out in supporting Remus for the job. Gringotts really needs to be seen to be doing the same. On the wizarding side of the divide, like it or not, they see Harry here as the public face of the goblins. Augusta would also look foolish if she championed this change in Professor, only for her grandson and his betrothed to still be receiving their timetabled defense lessons from me. You four are treading water in that class anyway. We all know this is where you do your main work in defense. I may ask Remus to help the occasional weekend, but you will still be working with me. This cleared the air somewhat, and allowed Bill to ask the question his boss wanted answered. How do you two feel about your bond becoming known to the public? Again, Harry was first with his answer. I think it would be hypocritical of me to have a problem with it. I publicly bonded with Hermione to change her status in the nation, and offer her protection. If they think that this news being made public would also offer her protection in the magical community, then it gets my vote. This had everyone turning to Hermione for her opinion. Her answer was a very simple one. He is mine and I am his, and I really don't care who knows it anymore. Do you know what our parents said to this? Our weekly letter from Crawley usually arrives tomorrow. This had Bill smiling. Dan understands why you both bonded, and thinks that, if it will stop his daughter being attacked by witches or wizards, it should be made front page news. As long as it doesn't appear in the Crawley Observer until you two are a bit older, he's fine with that. Emma and Barchoke both agreed with him. Harry then asked the question that he had really been struggling to comprehend. Will the Ministry really try and award a goblin lands and a title? They were all aware that the land in question wasn't by any stretch of the imagination a huge tract of the Highlands. It was more the possibility of being able to own and live on his own land, as a goblin, that was responsible for the excited anticipation. The title of Baron was also purely a ceremonial one. Legally being able to own his own Scottish glen as a goblin though was like being offered a kingdom to Harry, worth a lot more than any title the Ministry could dream up. It certainly looks as if they are going to have a damned good attempt at it, which is why it is so important to support Remus Lupin's appointment. We're all trying to push the joint message that by working together, everyone benefits. What about you, Neville? Are you okay with the news of your parents being used like this? His answer was also simplicity itself. Harry helped my family. We're glad of the opportunity to help his. That's what family does. Bill couldn't help but wish his youngest brother was more like this, or that he would at least one day grow up in a similar vein. The twins and Ginny were friends with these four, and had blossomed from that friendship. Every Sunday, Bill got to witness Fred and George put on their serious heads and work their asses off in his lessons. That Master Pitsley confirmed they performed just as well in their potions class would be a very pleasant surprise to both of their parents when their report cards were issued. With the discussion over, it was now time to get down to the serious business of defense. Augusta was also getting down to the serious business of defense. The wry smile playing on her lips was there for a specific reason, a reason that just entered her office. Ah, Professor Lockhart, please have a seat. The new Hogwarts wards have been minutely examined, and found to be working perfectly. That cannot be the case, they must have overlooked something. I'm sorry, Professor, I can assure you that nothing was overlooked. Now, after our last discussion on the matter, and knowing you are a man of your word, I will regretfully accept your resignation. You will be delighted to note though that I was able to find a first-rate replacement. Please ensure all your belongings are removed from Hogwarts before Christmas. We're very lucky the new professor can start in the new year. We of course all wish you well in whatever venture you undertake next. Augusta resumed her paperwork after that dismissal, knowing full well Lockhart was too shocked to even leave his chair. She carried on working for a few moments before pretending to notice he hadn't actually left yet. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor, is there anything more I can do for you? Madam Longbottom, perhaps I was a tad hasty in indicating I would leave the castle. Hasty? I thought you ran as fast as your legs would carry you. Oh, I see, you're talking about your decision to resign. Unfortunately, the decision has already been made. I can't have two defense professors, I would be left needing to dismiss one of them. Surely it would look better on your resume if you could truthfully state you resigned from Hogwarts, rather than having to be sacked. You can leave any time, Professor. Augusta now allowed some steel to creep into her voice, ensuring Lockhart understood it was time to go, from her office and also the castle. With the students returning home on Monday, you've taught your last class at Hogwarts. The Patil sisters were currently chatting away, both making a deliberate effort to ensure a gulf was never allowed to open between them again. I hope you don't mind us pushing for Blaise to be invited to the engagement party. Susan and Hannah will be allowed to invite partners to the party, but I didn't think you would be up to asking anyone just yet. Oh, Padma, it's worked out brilliantly. Blaise obviously sussed why he was being invited. He asked me earlier if I would be his date for the party. Of course I said yes. Making the dress code include goblin formal wear means we already have that angle covered too. Yeah, Fred, George, Roger and Cedric will all be invited tomorrow, and Harry has already arranged an appointment with the goblin tailors for them, and the dates. Sirius really didn't want to invite a lot of people who sat back and did nothing while he rotted in Azkaban, and you know he's a big kid at heart anyway. The party will be family and friends, and a lot of fun. The Patels didn't celebrate Christmas as such, but this was quickly turning into a holiday they would remember for a long time. Not only were they getting to spend it with friends and family, there were already promises of at least one party, more ice skating in Muggle London, and even more shopping too. What was not to like? Augustus Rookwood didn't like what he was doing, but needs must. It was a very fortuitous occurrence that the plinth his thin straw mattress rested on was not made of the same material as the rest of his cell. Attempting what he intended on the black granite that Azkaban was constructed from would have rendered his already perilous attempt at escape clear into the totally hopeless bracket. As the pain in his mouth became unbearable, he removed his fingers to find traces of blood on them. This saliva-blood mixture was immediately transferred to the very rudimentary wand he was constructing. Lengths of straw from his thin mattress were bound together with hairs he pulled from his head. This was then being coated in the mixture coming from his mouth. Hopefully over the coming months this process would be able to infuse enough of his magical essence into his very basic construct to allow it to cast a couple of spells. This wand was never going to allow him to fire curses at anyone, that wasn't its purpose anyway. He needed this wand to open the cell door, along with any others that blocked his way out of Azkaban. It would then hopefully hold together enough to cast a warming charm on himself before he was forced to enter the North Sea. A simple Alohomora would suffice to open the doors in Azkaban. With prisoners being denied wands, and Dementors waiting in the corridors, the prison's reliance on such a simple spell was perhaps understandable. Augustus would first need to hack a piece of stone from the plinth before he could even think of making a protection medallion to get him past the Dementors. That would then need to be shaped, have runes carefully carved into it, and then be infused with his blood to activate them. He was forced to use what he had available in his cell. Conjured tin plates and cups lasted just long enough for the food to be eaten and any liquid drunk. Knives, forks or spoons were never supplied. They certainly weren't stupid enough to provide their prisoners with anything that could be used as a weapon. That was why his fingers once more returned to his mouth. Augustus needed something that could carve stone. The only thing he had available in Azkaban were his teeth. He reckoned his molars should be best for cutting out a piece of stone while his incisors would be needed to carve out the required runes. Between pulling out teeth as required and the finger scrapes he expected to get working on the stone, Augustus didn't think there would be any shortage of blood for his wand and protection medallion. He also knew that this was going to take months that outside factors ensured he needed to take anyway. While getting out of his cell, past the Dementors and out of Azkaban prison itself was going to be an amazingly difficult feat, he then still had the problem of being trapped on an island in the middle of the North Sea. To enter that same sea in December would carry a 100% guarantee of death. He would basically be committing suicide. It was simply far too cold for anyone to survive for any length of time in the water just now. Augustus knew there was only one narrow window available, during a couple of months of what passed for summer here, to make the attempt. Only then would he have any chance of making landfall, and only then could he begin the task of returning his master to power. Thanks for reading. Christmas at Grimmauld. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I don't own these characters and my writing certainly couldn't be considered canon. If my efforts don't fit your idea of what a Harry Potter story should be, I can only offer my apologies and a suggestion. Writing your own really is the only way to ensure the story progresses exactly the way you want it to. It also gives the rest of us something to read. FFN email alerts now working again, sorry for the delay. Chapter 51. Rita knew she was going to have a Merry Christmas. Having a front page story in The Prophet on Christmas Eve practically guaranteed that. It wasn't her usual type of story either, though the paper's editor had still begged for her return to work at the Prophet after reading it. Rita wasn't interested in returning to that lifestyle. She would enjoy Christmas before focusing on her new subject. Gilderoy Lockhart's perceived persona was just begging to be torn apart. Whilst today's piece was all wholesome and light, Rita knew it was in brutal character assassinations that her real skills lay. Even to a casual observer, Gilderoy's literary self-portrayal didn't in any way match the reality of the man himself. She intended to discover all his dirty little secrets, and then inform everyone about them. It would be somewhat ironic if she managed to get a book out of destroying this famous author. The title, Liar Lockhart, just flowed off the tongue. A miraculous collaboration. The picture below displays a scene that many readers will agree is nothing short of miraculous. Frank and Alice Longbottom have found themselves trapped inside their own bodies for over a decade. That is clearly no longer the case. Since August, they have been receiving treatment that has peeled back some of the trauma damage inflicted when these two brave auras were tortured by the Cruciator's curse. This is a result that was thought to be impossible by the best healers in St. Mungo's. Fortunately, this news was never passed on to Alice Longbottom's godson, a certain Centurion Crow. Her godson was aware goblin healing was different from that used in St. Mungo's, and an offer of assistance was made to the Longbottom family. Madame Augusta Longbottom had this to say on the matter. While the care my son and his wife received whilst in St. Mungo's was second to none, we had explored and exhausted every treatment that the healers had available in their attempts to improve Frank and Alice's condition. The offer from Gringotts came with no guarantees, other than they certainly wouldn't cause my son and his wife any harm. We had nothing to lose, and a distinct possibility of gain, so of course I said yes. They were also examined by Muggle healers, using advanced medical equipment to produce scans of Frank and Alice's brains. These scans are providing vital clues to further improve their treatment. This treatment was made possible and arranged through the Grangers, themselves both Muggle healers, and whose daughter is Harry's girlfriend. I have no words to describe how my grandson, Neville, and I feel over their recovery, nor to express our gratitude for those who made this possible. Here is a wonderful example of what can be achieved when everyone works together. I then contacted St. Mungo's to inquire if they had any comment to make on this situation. The interview I was given with one of the senior healers was, to say the least, enlightening. Healer Woodcock was clearly excited by the momentous news. As healers, it's far more important to our profession that the patient recovers, rather than assuming any form of professional posturing over who is actually responsible for healing them. The goblins have very kindly offered a month's secondment for one of our healers, allowing them to spend time in Gringotts learning of this new healing technique. This is hopefully the first step in a process that will see exchange programs put in place. I understand that the Muggles have facilities where any breakthrough in healing is shared with the rest of the world. This is something I would like to see us as a community adopt, as anything that helps our profession heal patients more efficiently is certainly something we can't afford to dismiss. With attitudes of cooperation and collaboration springing up all over our magical community, it provides hope that we can move forward, and that the coming years will not only be happy but prosperous. The picture showed a beaming Alice Longbottom with an arm around her son and his betrothed. They had used this occasion to make their betrothal announcement public, with Frank and his mother standing behind them. It was the epitome of what a happy family portrait should be, 3 generations each looking forward to a better future. The large breakfast table was full to bursting and Lucas just had to comment to the lady sitting at his side after reading the latest developments. Amelia, Mer and I were worried about our daughter coming to Britain. Your country's reputation for intolerance of anyone without what they see as the correct breeding is renowned. But this, Lucas indicated the paper, and then the company around the table. Muggles, goblins, Veela and even a werewolf were all chatting away amiably. That the children present were not only involved in whatever was being discussed but their opinions being listened to was also a shock to the Swede. This was not what he expected in Pueblo Britain. The Hobsons had been an instant hit with the extended family, especially amongst their children. They all adored Henrika, and seemed to have no problems in extending that emotion to include her parents. Lucas and Mo though made that transition very easy to accomplish. Amelia smiled at Lucas' understandable confusion and tried to help him grasp the reality of the situation. If only what you were reading in that paper, and what you see around this table, was a fair reflection of our country, then I would be very happy. Unfortunately it is not, yet. There are people on both sides of the divide, wizard and goblin, whose views are far too entrenched to ever accept this as the new normal. We know they are just biding their time, waiting on something to focus attention on and turn public opinion back the way they want it to go. When I see the children acting like this though, it gives me hope that one day it might be better. After a moment's silence, Amelia decided to put into words what she'd only thought before. The more I get to know the goblins, the more I see them just like ourselves. We have the same problems and similar aspirations. Helping each other to reach mutually beneficial solutions is rapidly becoming the biggest thrill of my life. The boy sitting at the end of the table is the catalyst for all this change, and also the reason we're all sitting here together. Harry would be the first to admit he had lots of help, but it was him who chased Binns out of Hogwarts, and who started the ball rolling to set Sirius free. While believing every word Amelia said, it was still hard for Lucas to comprehend how one so young could have achieved so much. I know my daughter thinks very highly of him, of all of them actually. Her letters home always contain a mention of this group, and whatever they've been up to. I feel as if I know most of them already. This group have the potential to change our country for the good of all. Even their peers simply observing their behavior is beginning to change attitudes. I see our job as parents and guardians to do our best ensuring they can continue to behave the way they are, neither breeding nor background affecting who they choose to befriend. This was something Lucas would certainly agree with, but Amelia had even more to say on the matter. Hogwarts is unrecognizable now from the school it was a mere 2 years ago. Your daughter is playing an integral role in that. Remus Lupin is another excellent teacher, and another vital part of the jigsaw that, when complete, will see Hogwarts as one of the finest magical schools in the world. Theirs is the generation that will take our society forward, and it all starts with Hogwarts. If we can reach the children of Death Eaters with the message that there is a better way, then and only then will the British Magical Society be able to proudly hold its head up on the international scene for the first time in generations. This was not the time for such serious conversations though, and both were soon pulled in the direction of more jovial subjects by those around them. Padma, Hermione and Harry had all loved how they spent Christmas Eve last year, so a repeat was arranged for everyone today. Barchoke and Amelia were unfortunately having to work today, but the rest of the adults, including Augusta, appeared to be looking forward to the day. Sirius of course had to add his own twist to the holidays. Knowing not everyone in their extended family celebrated Christmas, he still intended to get them all involved by introducing Kris Kringle to the proceedings. Hermione dissolved into fits of laughter when Harry started looking around for this person her godfather was talking about. Sirius then explained the concept. Everyone's names are in this hat, we each draw one and must buy that person a gift. You don't tell anyone whose name you drew, rather just wrap the gift up and write their name on it. There will be a sack beside the Christmas tree for these presents, and we'll hand them out tomorrow at dinner. This just added another layer of excitement onto what was already building for the day. The hat was rapidly passed around the table, with Sirius agreeing to accept the name that was left. 19 names were soon chosen, leaving Sirius with Moa. He had hoped for someone he could get a joke present for. Playing a prank on his mother-in-law to be though was not a good idea. He wondered if this was him finally growing up, and sincerely hoped not. Luna sat that night trying to write a letter to her father, the problem being she just didn't know where to start. They had barely entered Sirius's house when there was a loud scream. Henrika had found both her parents standing waiting on her. Their history professor, who was always so in control of her emotions, acted like a little girl as she pounced on him, before dragging Sirius into the family embrace. Harry and Hermione had led the group away from the family reunion and directed them to the rooms they would be staying in. Both they and the Grangers often stayed here, so were using their regular rooms. Luna was sharing with Hermione while Neville doubled up with Harry. Padma was sharing a room with her sister, leaving Susan and Hannah to bunk in another. With the Petals, Augusta, Amelia, Barchoke, Remus and now the Hobsons staying too, it was a busy house. Every day of the holiday had something arranged, a visit to London Zoo, shopping in Diagon Alley or a simply unbelievable visit to something they called a cinema. Luna was having a fantastic time. There lay her problem and she resolved to talk to Hermione about it when she came in. She and Harry were currently saying goodnight and, by the way Hermione had just practically floated into the room, Harry must be quite good at it. She flopped down on her bed in a daze, then Luna noticed where her eyes kept wandering, to her left hand, or rather the ring now on it. Everything all right, Hermione? With a squeal of delight, she shot off the bed and had Luna practically in a headlock with excitement. Oh, everything is so much better than, all right, Luna. Things are just fantastic. Hermione then pulled back to let Luna see her ring. Harry thought that, since our blood bond will be made public shortly, I should wear a ring to tell the world I am his. He gave it to me tonight so I would wake up on Christmas morning with it already on my finger. Have you ever seen anything like it, Luna? I just love it. Yes, it matches your bracelet. The ring did indeed match her bracelet, having the same filigree design that indicated she was part of Harry's family. The stone though appeared to be a blue diamond, rather than the sapphires that her bracelet sported. I think it's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen. When the tears began to fall, Luna just couldn't stop them. While Moonlight shot over and jumped on Luna's knee, Hermione pulled a chair up beside her younger friend. What's the matter, Luna? I thought you were enjoying your holiday. Oh, Hermione, I'm loving my holiday, that's the problem. Last year was our first Christmas without Mum, it was horrible. Dad tried so hard to make it the same yet the both of us spent most of Christmas crying. I think that's why he's not spending it at home this year, it's just too hard without Mum there too. Ginny and Colin were so jealous of me coming here for the holidays, but I'd much rather be doing what they are, spending Christmas with my mum and dad. Moonlight was snuggling into the upset girl, practically forcing Luna to stroke her. Hermione felt out of her depth here, and offered to go and fetch her mum. Luna didn't want to involve anyone else. I'll be fine, Hermione, just give me a minute. I was trying to write a letter to my dad and just felt horrible that I was having such a good time with everyone, while he is on his own. After thinking of what her mum would say in this situation, Hermione tried her best to comfort the crying girl. Don't be afraid to tell him you are having a good holiday, Luna, that will make your dad feel a lot better about not being with you at Christmas. Do you really think so? Seeing her efforts were working, Hermione continued in the same vein. I really do, Luna. Your father loves you very much, he's just missing your mum too. We haven't really looked at what we'll be doing over the summer holidays, maybe when Henrika and Sirius set a date we might talk about it next week. Whatever we do though, you should know that we will want you there as much as possible, your father will be invited too. Luna's eyes were now sparkling, and not just from the tears she had shed. I would really like that. Coming to Hogwarts and having friends has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. You and Padma have treated me like a little sister, and Harry. This drew a smile from Hermione. Harry thinks you are pretty special too. Oh no, not like that. Hermione was now giggling. It's okay, Luna, I know you're not Ginny. You see Harry just for who he is, that's what makes you special to him, that and the fact he's just about adopted you as his sister. This had Luna blushing. That's the way I think of him too. Someone I can depend upon, for anything. Ginny is trying, you know, she's been in love with the boy who lived since she was about 6 though. I've read some of that rubbish too, I much prefer Harry the way he is. Do you need any help to finish that letter? I'm sure Urgit will take it for you in the morning. I think I'll be fine now, though I might need more parchment. Today was just wonderful, no wonder you wanted to do that again. It's the people who we were with that made today wonderful, Luna, and you are certainly classed as one of our family now. With her feelings of guilt beginning to fade, Luna resumed writing a long letter to her father. If it made him feel even a fraction of the happiness she'd been experiencing, then she knew her dad would be smiling as he read. Christmas morning was off to a flyer before a present had been opened. Padma's joyful yell alerting everyone to what now adorned Hermione's finger. All of those in Grimmauld Place were happy for the young couple, and each had their own reasons to be happy too. The Petals were so very happy still to have both the daughters, that one of them was now betrothed to Neville was certainly a very pleasant bonus in their eyes. Neville would be going to chat with his mum and dad today, accompanied by his betrothed. Christmas just couldn't get any better than that for the Longbottoms. Amelia was delighted she would get to spend today with Susan and Hannah, no jumping through blown-out windows this Christmas. With Hannah's parents attending the ball tomorrow night, this was as good as it got in her book. Sirius though thought this Christmas was easily the happiest of his life, and certainly light years ahead of last year's. Sitting here a free man, surrounded by friends and family with the beautiful Henrika by his side. He was thinking it couldn't get any better than this when his mind wandered a few years into the future. He pictured himself standing with his wife as their children opened their presents. For far too long, that scenario was nothing more than an impossible dream for Sirius Black. Now it was a dream come true, or at least it soon would be. The Hobsons too were very happy with their lot. Spending Christmas with the daughter and her intended had certainly put smiles on their faces. They had both held some reservations about the daughter marrying into what was an old British blood family. That Sirius clearly intended for them to play a large part in their lives was the best present they could have been given. Remus also didn't need to look too hard for reasons to be cheerful. Sitting here amongst friends already made this a red letter day in his book. Having a new job starting in the new year meant he even had something to look forward to. It had been many years since life had been this good to the werewolf. Dan could hardly take his eyes off the ring on his daughter's hand. After her initial squeal of delight, Emma had clearly been worried over his reaction. Hugging both Hermione and Harry quickly quashed those fears. He knew this was just another level of protection for Hermione. It might be more political than the practical bracelet, but what a statement it made in any world. That ring not only shouted that Hermione was Harry's intended, it also broadcast just how financially powerful this young goblin was too. He wasn't a jeweler, but Dan had no trouble imagining that ring being worth more than their house and business combined. It was simply stunning, and its beauty could only be matched by how happy it made his daughter. That made it priceless to all of them. Harry had Hermione sitting at one side of him, and his father at the other. This was only the second time he had celebrated Christmas, but already knew it wouldn't be the last. Any occasion that got the entire family together to celebrate should be encouraged, something he certainly intended to do. He could tell from the smile his father was wearing that he actually agreed with him. Henrika leaned over and kissed Sirius. What was that for? Just for being you. What you did with my parents was simply wonderful. You've made us all so happy. Just wait until you see what I've got planned for New Year. The look Henrika was now giving him clearly indicated she had no intention of waiting. Do you remember our first date? This got another kind of look. This one said of course she did, and he should continue. I've hired the entire boat for New Year's Eve. We'll spend it going up and down the Thames and bring in the New Year dancing to the music. He couldn't say any more. Henrika was far too busy showing him that she really approved of that idea. Sirius quickly put winning Henrika's approval at the top of this and every other Christmas wish list. Molly was also having a Merry Christmas. Anytime her entire family were back under her roof was going to be a happy occasion for the Weasley matriarch. A glance though told her they currently weren't all here. Her husband and eldest son had once more gone for a stroll out in the orchard. They both returned and removed their heavy cloaks, earning him a rebuke from Molly. It's Christmas Day, can't you two forget business for one afternoon? Sorry mum, just something I needed to discuss with Dad. A sigh escaped Molly's lips. Quote ellipsis. And it could only be spoken about in the orchard. I never thought I would miss your father sitting telling us all about biting teacups or backfiring toilets. He can't even talk about his job in his own home anymore. The first we find out about what's going on is when we read about it in the Prophet. I'm sorry, Molly, but the things Bill and I work on now are secret, and need to stay that way. This set Ron off in a grade 1 huff. That white owl delivers letters to Crow all the time. You can bet his father tells him what's going on. His mother, father and Charlie were all shocked at this belligerent attitude. The others had all seen it before. Bill was really getting tired of it. Quote ellipsis. And you know why that is, Ronnie boy, because Harry is not only a centurion but an Order of Merlin, first class holder. Yeah, right. They just handed him those, like they gave Parvati all that gold after she set the basilisk on people. Mental, just mental. Molly couldn't understand her son's attitude about this, and wasn't long in telling him so. Ronald Weasley, I better not hear you've said that about the poor girl outside these four walls. Too late, Mum, he actually said it to Parvati's face, in front of the entire house in the Great Hall. Ron was staring daggers at his sister, but Ginny wasn't caring. She pressed ahead. Neville threatened to call him out if he did it again, and McGonagall gave him 2 weeks' worth of detention for it. As you can see, Ron still thinks he did nothing wrong. All I did was tell the truth, but no one wants to hear it because she's a friend of Crow's. The truth as you see it, Ron, and that's where all the trouble starts. Bill thought it was time his youngest brother heard a few home truths. No one gave Harry anything he didn't earn. Before taking the job of tutoring him, I saw all his scores. The Sorting Hat really couldn't have placed him anywhere but Ravenclaw. He's the top student of the year, with Hermione and Padma taking the next 2 places. Neville Longbottom is pushing his way through the pack to join them. Ronnie here needs Percy to sit and force him to do his homework, and he's still in the bottom 4. Crabbe, Goyle and Finnegan, really pushing yourself there, Ron. Hey, at least I'm not last. You are in some of the classes, purely out of laziness too. Ginny is already pushing her way to be near the top of her year group. Fred and George are also shooting through the rankings, with Percy here looking a good bet for next year's head boy. Like Charlie, me and Dad, they are all achieving what they want through hard work. You're jealous of Harry, but let's ask his friends here if they know anyone who works harder than him. Fred was first to provide an answer. We work on defense with him once a week and it nearly kills us. Harry and Hermione exercise and practice every single day. I really don't know how they do it. This drew agreement from George before he added his own thoughts. Fred and I thought we were pretty handy at potions. Harry is miles ahead. Master Pitsley is probably the top potion master in the whole of Britain, yet he comes to Hogwarts to teach Harry. We're learning so much more than we ever would in normal potions classes at Hogwarts, and we'll be sitting our potions OWL this summer. This was a shock to both parents. Serious twins though would be a shock to just about anyone. Ginny wasn't about to be overlooked here though. She had her own thoughts to add. Harry does all his extra training yet still makes time to teach us defense every week. As a teacher, he's also miles ahead of Lockhart, and it's the favorite class of all the first years. Hey, it's bad enough you lot are all going to hobnob with them tomorrow. I really don't want to hear about it today too. Quote ellipsis. And that's the problem, Ron, you just don't get that we're actually talking about you here. If you go through the rest of your life the way you're approaching Hogwarts, then I hate to think what will become of you. Doing just enough to get by is a bad habit to fall into. You seem quite happy to embrace that as your entire philosophy on life, while deriding those who don't share your opinion. You also seem to go out of your way to ostracize yourself amongst your peers, a really, really stupid move. A big part of going to Hogwarts is to meet other people the same age as you. Hey, I offered Crow my friendship, he didn't want it, his loss. Charlie hadn't been as involved as the rest of the family in this matter, so offered an opinion from what was almost an outsider's point of view. Do you really believe Crow refusing your offer of friendship is his loss? I don't think he's too bothered by it, Ron. I've never met the boy, and certainly wouldn't expect an invitation to Lord Black's engagement party. With Bill, Fred, George and Ginny going though, I would certainly hate to have been in his year, and not been invited. Percy was also keen to see Ron mend the error of his ways. If he made head boy next year, he wouldn't have the time to sit on his youngest brother, and then Ron would slip even lower in the rankings. It's worse than that, Charlie. Draco Malfoy got an invitation. This is a boy who Crow punched out and challenged to a duel at the welcoming feast when they were first years. He also had his knife at Lucius Malfoy's throat too. That settles it. With Malfoy there I wouldn't have gone anyway. Quote ellipsis. And that is why I'm worried about him. Fred and George have Quidditch, extra defense lessons and also help out with the first year defense club. Percy here is going to have to concentrate on his own exams soon and I won't be in the castle as often to keep an eye on him. Why won't you be in the castle as often? Ron, you're totally missing the point, as usual. Their father rarely raised his voice. When he did it was time to sit and pay attention. Ever since you set foot inside Hogwarts, it's been one bad report after another, and none of it was ever your fault. I'm willing to bet you never apologized to this girl either. Dad, you taught us to never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. How stupid would you need to be to write in that diary, and then she gets thousands in gold for doing so? Am I the only one who thinks that's wrong? The Patil girl was as much a victim in this as Luna Lovegood. If that was my little girl lying down in that chamber, I could only hope they would still have gone down there to rescue her. With total confidence, 5 of his children answered at the same time. They would have. Fred had to add his own twist. If it was Ron down there though, they might just have left him. Arthur was coming more and more to rely on his eldest son's advice, and there was absolutely no way Bill would steer him wrong on a matter regarding their family. Bill had claimed that Ron wasn't coping with life at Hogwarts as he should, instead treating it like some holiday camp with good and plentiful food. The fact that the 4 of his other children who currently attended Hogwarts supported Bill's view was forcing Arthur to take action when he really didn't want to. For a pureblood, attending Hogwarts was as much about interacting with your peers as it was gaining an education. Lessons could be taught at home and exams sat at the ministry. Hogwarts was about growing up and gaining life experiences with witches and wizards the same age as you, something that couldn't be achieved at home. For Ron to leave Hogwarts after 7 years with poor qualifications and more enemies than friends would be an unmitigated disaster for his youngest son. Leaving after 2 years would mean Ron would be remembered as that annoying kid, still giving him room to prove he'd grown up since then. Spending the rest of his years at Hogwarts as he'd spent the first would see his son struggle to do anything with his life. A wizard's time at Hogwarts were their most formative years. Spending 7 years creating bad impressions and gaining enemies was something Arthur couldn't see his youngest son recovering from. It was time for the head of the Weasley family to make a decision. Ron, unless there is a marked improvement in your behavior, you will be withdrawn from Hogwarts at the summer. Any more incidents where you openly court trouble will see you brought home before then. You can try and pull the wool over your mother's eyes as she homeschools you. We will be having some long discussions over the rest of these holidays, so there can be no doubts exactly what I mean by marked improvement. With the decision made, Ron's Christmas wasn't going to be very merry. Someone else was missing the warmth and good food of the Burrow's Christmas celebration. Somehow gnawing on the remains of a sandwich he'd liberated from a bin yesterday didn't match up to all the wonderful tidbits Wormtail would normally be enjoying about now. This was certainly not the first Christmas he'd spent as a rat. It was his first spent alone though, and Peter was finding that fact harder to deal with than he'd ever thought possible. Yes, he was alive, but this could hardly be called living. By scavenging old copies of The Prophet from his infrequent sorties into Diagon Alley, Peter was able to build a picture of what was happening all around him. Lucius Malfoy now residing in Azkaban was a real shock to the system, as was Dumbledore being chased out of Hogwarts. With the Ministry building up its aura force, and actually administering justice, Peter knew the sands of time were running out for him. To an outsider, it appeared as if the Potter family were demanding, and receiving, retribution against those who had wronged them. There was just no way the greatest betrayer wouldn't be near the top of that revenge list. It almost brought a smile to his lips when reading that Sirius was about to become engaged to that stunning Swedish feeler, trust Padfoot to land the most gorgeous female he'd ever seen. This drew Peter's mind to the party tomorrow night, and how he would have been a guest if he hadn't turned betrayer. He had to quash thoughts like that immediately. Peter had made his decision all those years ago, a decision he may have regretted but still didn't see how he had any other choice in the matter. Peter was again being forced to make a decision he didn't want to make. He felt though that again he was being left with no other option. Sooner or later they would find him. Whether that was due to a sustained search or a mistake on his part was immaterial, they would find him. His only protection from the fate that awaited him after capture was to once more have a powerful protector, his master. He was going to have to leave this refuge and go looking for the one person who could save him. That this same person might actually kill him instead was the reason why he delayed this journey for so long. He fully expected a Dementor's kiss if the Ministry ever got their hands on him. Peter would do anything to avoid that fate, including going searching for his master. It didn't take much searching for Gilderoy to discover who was going to replace him at Hogwarts, or should that be what was going to be replacing him? Armed with a name, it also didn't take him long to get his hands on the really disturbing information either. Remus Lupin was registered at the Ministry of Magic as a werewolf they were going to allow to teach children, not if he had anything to do with it. Gilderoy thought it was his duty to inform the wizarding public that this monster was going to be let loose on their children. He would write the story and then offer it to the Prophet for printing. This wouldn't be wandering with werewolves though, rather a timely warning a werewolf was going to be inside Hogwarts, as a professor. Even Gilderoy had to admit there had been major changes in their community recently, this though would be a change too far. There was no way parents would stand for a dark creature teaching their children, especially directly after the basilisk fiasco had them all terrified for their safety. After they kicked the beast out, Gilderoy planned to string him along for a day or so on whether he would return to the castle. Dropping hints that this is what happens when you don't have a headmaster, and a totally unsuitable person attempting to run Hogwarts should see him in new accommodation for his triumphant return to the castle. After saving all the children from a werewolf, they could hardly give the position of headmaster to anyone else. Sitting down to write, he had to continually remind himself this wasn't a work of fiction. It was an unusual sensation for Gilderoy Lockhart to be writing the truth, or at least his version of it. Draco thought this new version of Christmas for the Malfoys would take some getting used to, just him and his mother sitting down to dinner. No father, no guests and certainly no lavish parties. The only bright spot was his invitation to Lord Black's official engagement function tomorrow. That these invitations were very much sought after kept Pansy's father off their case for a little while longer. The man was pushing though and Draco had no intention of handing over control of his inheritance to anyone. His mother had a black family heirloom that he would be taking to the party as the gift for the engaged couple, a tiara that family custom dictated should be worn by the bride when a black marries. It was in her possession since she was the last black to be married, and now it would return to its rightful family. Draco would be wearing the clothes he received for the Merlin ball to the engagement party, thus covering the fact that he couldn't afford new dress robes. Apart from Blaise, the only other Slytherin they knew who were invited was Greengrass, her father having some long-standing business connections with the Blacks. He had been taught enough of blood politics to understand what was going on here. This was an opportunity for both him and Pansy to mingle in this company. Their future invites would depend on how successfully they could pull this off, though Blaise had given him a word of warning. He had told Draco this group did not act like any he had ever met. The closest he could come to putting a name to it was they behaved like a family. Blaise had easily been accepted but knew he was under constant observation. Not because he was a Slytherin, it was purely to observe that he treated Parvati properly. Both Draco and Blaise had seen Neville very publicly claim Parvati as his sister. They also hadn't missed Crow holding back the other two girls. McGonagall saved Mouth Weasley from some serious trouble, and all the idiot had cared about was missing dinner. Draco could see his father had made some poor choices in his life, binding the family to a half-blood bastard and then the basilisk fiasco immediately springing to mind. He was going to have to make his own choices from now on, and those choices would begin tomorrow. Anyone who had outrightly opposed Crow had been politically, financially and sometimes even physically taken apart. His father and godfather were only two names on a list that also included the once great and untouchable Albus Dumbledore. Draco intended to do whatever it took to ensure his name never joined those on that list. His problem would be how far he would need to go to appease this group, or even become part of it. You didn't need to be a genius to understand that uttering the word, mudblood, would see a blade instantly appear at your throat, and the next thing passing your lips had better be an apology. That most of the wands which would also be trained on you would be held by purbloods was really food for thought. Professor Hobson had taught them that the term blood traitor was coined by the half-blood bastard, purely as a means of turning purbloods against each other. When old families like the Bones, Abbotts, Longbottoms, Blacks, Diggories, Weasleys, Davies and Lovegoods appeared all in favor of the direction their country was moving in, who was Draco Malfoy to assume he knew better and then stand against an assembled force like that? Draco decided that, instead of a plan, an open mind might suit their needs better for the party. He would have a quick talk with Pansy about this before they set off tomorrow, though wasn't expecting any problems from that direction. All Pansy's efforts were directed toward maintaining their betrothal, and she would adopt whatever attitude or beliefs that were necessary to achieve her goal. Draco found himself looking forward to tomorrow night for another reason too. The Merlin Ball at Hogwarts was one of the best functions he'd ever attended. He was hoping tomorrow night might be arranged somewhat along the same lines. Harry was also looking forward to tomorrow, though he was in no hurry at all to say goodbye to today, or should that be goodnight to Hermione. He'd noticed even in Ravenclaw House that they seemed to take a little longer each night to part, the problem being that neither wanted to let go of the other. His arms were currently locked around her while Hermione rested her head on his shoulder, snuggling into his neck and doing funny things to his insides. They would then whisper to each other about everything and anything, purely to put off the moment when they would need to part. So, do you know who got Sirius his secret present? Hermione couldn't hold her giggles. That was Mum. The dog bowl and leash were funny, but the collar with, if lost, return to Henrika Hobson, engraved onto it was hilarious. Ah, so that would mean it was Dan who gave that gift to Amelia. I knew it had to be Muggle but still can't work out what the thick wand and restraints were for. Neither could anyone else, though I thought Sirius and Remus were going to choke with laughter. She was glad Harry was taller than her, therefore couldn't see how red her face was buried in his neck. He could probably feel the heat of her embarrassment though. That was a truncheon and handcuffs, it's what the police carry, Muggle auras. Didn't you notice that time they brought us home in Crawley? I knew I recognized the hat from somewhere but I was too worried about you that day to notice much else. I think Luna liked her book on mythical creatures. That was you. I thought it was Father. I assumed then he picked Susan's name out the hat. She loved her necklace. I asked him to get that book. Goblins have different views on the subject, something I thought Luna would appreciate. Amelia has been such a help to us. Father was delighted to draw Susan's name. Who did you get? I drew Lucas. It was hard because we've only known him for a few days. I think he liked his tankard though. I think he loved his tankard, especially since it had the Hobson coat of arms on it. I just spotted a shop that sold all different items that you could get coats of arms on, and I don't think they stock t-shirts in Lucas' size. We better say goodnight and let Mum get to bed. What? Shush love, her room is at the end of the corridor we're currently hogging. She's just keeping an eye on us, we are getting older you know. Not old enough, Hermione was once more glad Harry couldn't see her face, it was red again after letting that thought slip out. We'll be old enough when we're old enough. Don't wish your life away, Hermione, I'm really happy with where we are now. Harry, why are you so good to me? Harry lifted her chin so he could see her face. Quote ellipsis. Because you are mine, and I am yours. He finished that with a tender kiss that left both of them wanting more. You are mine, and I am yours. Hermione then offered a kiss of her own before breaking their embrace. Good night, Harry. She then rather cheekily raised her voice a bit. Night, Mum. Hermione then shot into her room, leaving a rather embarrassed Harry and Emma in the corridor outside. Deciding to follow his bonded's example, Harry called out, Night, Mum, before heading off to his own room. Emma had came upon the couple as she was heading to her own room. Not wanting to disturb them, she was waiting on Hermione and Harry saying good night before calling it a night herself. She thought these two made the sweetest couple, and was also delighted to see that at least this part of their relationship was progressing in what she considered an age-appropriate manner. Her 13-year-old daughter receiving a cuddle and a good night kiss from her boyfriend was perfectly acceptable behavior in her book. The entire bond thing would work itself out over time. She had forgotten though that Harry always seemed aware of what was happening around him, and was mortified in case the kids thought she was deliberately spying on them. All that was instantly banished from her mind though with the incident that just made Emma Granger's Christmas. Harry had just called her mum. Thanks for reading. Orders of Merlin. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I don't own these characters and my writing certainly couldn't be considered canon. If my efforts don't fit your idea of what a Harry Potter story should be, I can only offer my apologies and a suggestion. Writing your own really is the only way to ensure the story progresses exactly the way you want it to. It also gives the rest of us something to read. Chapter 52. The silence at the breakfast table alerted Sirius that there was something wrong. One glance at the prophet informed him of just what that something was. Another dark creature set loose inside Hogwarts, was banner headlines across the front page. Sirius didn't read another word, he was already looking around the room for Moony. Where's Remus? Has he seen this? He was here but left after the paper arrived, said it ruined his appetite. No wonder, Sirius, this is pure character assassination. How anyone could think Remus Lupin in any way matched what was described in that article is beyond me. I know, Emma, but I need to go find him. With that, Sirius was out the door and heading for Remus' room. He got there just as his friend was finishing packing his meager belongings into a well-worn traveling bag. You should be able to get your money back for the robes. They were a lovely Christmas present but it doesn't look as if I'll need them now, and the sheep would piss themselves laughing at me if I turned up to work dressed as a wizard. Even a wolf has to have some dignity, Sirius, and sheep laughing at you is just not something that can be taken lightly. Tell Harry thanks for the clothes too, they really are the finest I've ever owned. I know you never return a gift to a goblin, can I leave them here? Remus hadn't once looked up as he finished his packing, and tied the neck of his bag. Sirius wasn't fooled in the slightest by the feeble attempt at joking. Moony was really hurting here. Sirius shut the door, it was time for some tough talking with his friend. You'll need the clothes Harry got you for Henrika and my engagement party tonight, you will be there. Yes, this news is gonna cause a stink but I promise at the end of it, Remus Lupin will be smelling of roses, or at least not left stinky. This drew Remus' full attention. Quote ellipsis. And just how do you hope to achieve that? I am a werewolf, and I am classed as a dark creature by the ministry. Whatever you say against that article, those facts remain. I never read that article, I don't need to. What you're forgetting is that you are also Remus Lupin, a thoroughly decent wizard. You're my best friend, who will also be best man at my wedding and godfather to Sirius and Henrika Black's firstborn child. I won't allow you to leave, at least not like this. Sirius, what option do I have? I couldn't get a job cleaning glasses at the Hogshead after that article. Lord Black couldn't get that job either, they don't wash the glasses at the Hogshead. We were expecting this news to come out, Remus, not so dramatically or so soon but it would have broken anyway. The difference this time is you now have powerful friends who will fight for you, but you need to understand this is not out of any sense of charity. Augusta wants you at Hogwarts simply because she thinks you are the best person for the job. Amelia wants you there so her Auror candidates at least know one end of their wand from another when they leave Hogwarts. Trust me, that is not a joke. Sirius then got deadly serious. We both know Voldemort isn't really gone and, when he returns, he'll be going after Harry. Henrika has already attacked a basilisk trying to keep them safe. I simply can't lose Harry, Hermione or Henrika. I need you in that castle, Moony. I need someone I trust implicitly to have my wife and godchildren's backs. They're my family and so are you, Moony. Azkaban taught me I don't cope with being alone too well, neither do you, and sheep don't count as company. Look, Sirius, it's not as if I want to return to those sheep. Contrary to what you keep insinuating, there was no shepherd's delight under the moonlight with my favorite you. How can I possibly teach at Hogwarts after today's prophet? The parents would never stand for it. The smirk on Sirius' face was reminiscent of the one he would wear just before pulling off a particularly audacious prank. Remus was really worried now. Moony, we though the Marauders were pretty hot shit, and we probably were. Compared to Amelia, Augusta and Barchoke though, were mere babes in the woods. You already have ministerial support for taking up your teaching position at Hogwarts, and Fudge will defend that decision. They then have a scheme in place that means you probably won't rate a mention in the Prophet tomorrow, all their reporters will be busy chasing down other stories. With today's front page, I'll bet an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot has already been called, all your problems might even be sorted before tonight's party. At least give it until the end of the holidays before returning to your flock. I don't know about hot shit, Sirius, but I think you're full of it. Voldemort will shave his legs and take up belly dancing before they'll allow a dark creature to teach at Hogwarts. Sirius now had his arm around his friend's shoulders, leading him away from the room, and the still-packed bag. Moony my old chum, did I ever show you my favorite photo? It was taken exactly a year ago today and Henrika somehow acquired a framed copy for me. If a 12-year-old boy can chase Dumbledore out of Britain, getting you a teaching job in Hogwarts should be child's play. Then again, that boy has an awesome kick-ass godfather, and a wicked sword. No one would be surprised that Sirius' prediction proved to be correct. An emergency Wizengamot meeting was tabled for noon. The glints of anticipation on certain faces were hard to miss. Here was the blood rallying point they had been searching for. Here was a cause that would allow them to draw a line in the sand and say no further. They had no idea a tidal wave was just about to hit their beach, and sweep more than the puny line away. Wizengamot member Duncan, I was under the Imperius Avery, was first to his feet after Amos opened the proceedings, making his intentions clear right from the off. Can I ask if the minister was aware that this creature would be entering Hogwarts, and what does he intend to do about this disgusting situation now it has been exposed? Cornelius had expected nothing less and had his answer well prepared. The ministry was asked if Remus John Lupin could be allowed to teach defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts. After ensuring proper and robust methods would be in place to remove any hint of danger from the students, the ministry gave its consent. His qualifications and references were all excellent. He's easily the most qualified applicant we've had for the job in many years, and the children will be lucky to have him teaching there. The minister sat after giving his answer and began counting into himself. Amelia had bet both him and Amos that there would be at least 10 seconds of silence after that answer. Cornelius hadn't expected to make it back into his seat before the bedlam began. He now owed Amelia 5 galleons as the expected bedlam took almost 20 seconds to arrive. It then took a good few minutes for Amos to get the chamber back into some kind of order. Duncan was then allowed to respond to the minister's answer. It was an angry Avery who responded, not quite believing what he'd just heard. The only way to keep the children safe is to remove this creature from Hogwarts, or remove its head. Amelia calmly stood to rebuff this attack, though inside she was seething. It was time to use some of that anger to verbally kick this Death Eater bastard's teeth right down his throat. In this chamber we administer the law of the land. I'll have no more talk of beheading a member of our community. This is a similar situation to those who were cursed with the Imperius to do a Dark Lord's bidding. Remus Lupin didn't choose to suffer from lycanthropy either. In fact, he was a mere boy when infected. Duncan felt the ice-cold hand of fear grip his gonads. Those claims of Imperius had never been questioned inside this chamber. A fair bit of gold had changed hands to ensure the catastrophe never happened. The problem here was that none of the gold had gone into the hands of Bones, Diggory or Fudge. The mood inside the chamber had now changed dramatically. They weren't used to witnessing members being slapped down so brutally, and Amelia Bones appeared to be ready to get bloody over this matter. Even though he was afflicted with this terrible disease, Remus Lupin attended Hogwarts as a student. In those 7 years, he not only passed his OWLs and NEWTs with distinction, but also gained the respect and trust to be chosen as a Gryffindor prefect. This was before the invention of Wolfsbane Potion 2, yet a young Remus still managed to pose no danger for those 7 years, and more than keep pace with his peers. This was all news to the vast majority of those members in the chamber, and certainly hadn't been mentioned anywhere in the Prophet's article. The minister, quite rightly, demanded that we introduce protocols to ensure the children's safety before he would agree to allow this teaching appointment. Those protocols stood up to the most rigorous examination we could put them to. Professor Lupin will be supplied with Wolfsbane Potion to ensure he retains his mind while transformed. He will also be escorted by an Auror from the castle to a secure location outside the Hogwarts wards before the full moon rises. The new wards at Hogwarts are amongst the most powerful in the world. They will not allow a transformed werewolf anywhere near the school. Amelia was knocking their arguments down like skittles, and she still wasn't finished. As you know, due to poor teaching in this subject, Assistant Ambassador Weasley has been traveling to Hogwarts twice weekly for the last 18 months to teach Harry Crow's defense classes. This was paid for by Harry's father. Professor Lupin has so impressed with his teaching that this will no longer be the case. The Hogwarts defense professor will now teach all 7 years, as he's contracted to do. On the few days his condition leaves him too unwell to teach, an Auror will cover those classes. I now open our protocols to this chamber. Please feel free to question them thoroughly. After all, everyone is here today purely to ensure our children's safety while they attend Hogwarts. The shout came before Amelia could even sit down. Why don't you get this Weasley to teach defense, save all this trouble? With a smile, she was able to tell the absolute truth. Bill Weasley was a highly skilled curse breaker before becoming an assistant ambassador. To put it bluntly, Hogwarts simply couldn't afford him. He probably earns a larger salary than I do. The only reason Hogwarts was able to attract a professor of the quality of Henrika Hobson is because someone else is paying for it. Surely there is someone else who could teach defense. Is Lockhart really that bad? Amelia decided to deal with both questions at the same time. Last year, Dumbledore actually employed a wizard possessed by Voldemort to teach defense, certainly putting the children in far more danger than having Remus Lupin as a professor ever would. Lockhart is so ineffective. Harry Crow was actually persuaded by the first years to teach them defense. When a second-year student is a better teacher than the incumbent professor, something needs to be done. Both Madame Longbottom and myself have witnessed Remus Lupin's teaching methods, and we also have dependents attending Hogwarts. The castle will be safe for them, you have our assurance of that. With the rug effectively pulled from under them, those who wanted to object purely on the basis that Remus was a werewolf were left looking around for support. That Amelia had mentioned the unbelievably delicate matter of those escaping punishment by using the Imperius Curse defense inside the Wizengamot chamber meant there were now quite a few members who were desperate not to draw attention to themselves, so their objections died too. Cornelius let the arguments against Lupin's appointment peter out before standing again. As the matter now appears settled, and since we are all here anyway, I would like to introduce something for this chamber's consideration. Before that though, I would like to first set the scene by giving this chamber the chance to view Auror Tonk's memory of what actually happened inside the Chamber of Secrets. There was never going to be an objection to that. Even the fact that they were using a goblin device to view this memory was being conveniently ignored. The memory captured and held everyone's attention, even those who had watched it before. This time the memory ran just a little bit longer as Tonks reported to Amelia, while they looked on as Barcho cradled a trapped Hermione while Harry's stretcher was placed beside them. The Wizengamot watched in fascination as auras couldn't move the beast an inch, the creature's skin being so resistant to magic that their spells simply glanced right off. It was left to the goblins with transfigured metal bars to shift the beast enough to slip the girl free. She had thankfully passed out by this point, sparing her any more pain. Cornelius once more stood and addressed the chamber. I think we can all agree that was one headline the prophet got right, those 6 really are the heroes of Hogwarts. This resulted in a round of applause, then Cornelius began to reveal what he was up to. I hope the chamber will agree with me that these heroes deserve to be rewarded. With Professor Hobson becoming engaged to Lord Black today, and the betrothal announcement from the Pattles and Longbottoms, it's also clear these heroes are going to play a prominent part in our society in the years to come. With the success of last year's summer celebration ball, I'm also proposing that we again adopt the method to distribute those awards. So far, the minister hadn't said anything too controversial. That was about to change. The affection that the goblins clearly showed Miss Granger was rather difficult to understand. She is after all a first-generation witch. That difficulty remained unexplained until we were supplied with more information I am now at liberty to share with this chamber. It has been correctly reported that goblins don't use betrothal contracts, and never arrange marriages between families. Instead, they insist on a much more ancient form of magical joining. In a ceremony held in Gringotts, Centurion Crow and Miss Granger blood bonded, and will marry when of an appropriate age to do so. The goblin nation already considers her a Centurion's mate, and the daughter of Ambassador Barchoke. The stunned silence that greeted that announcement saw Cornelius simply push on with what he wanted to say. Taking all those factors into consideration, and having again watched all six work as a team to overcome such overwhelming adversity, I would like to propose the following awards. Auror Nymphadora Tonks, Order of Merlin, First Class. Professor Henrika Hobson, Order of Merlin, First Class. Neville Longbottom, Order of Merlin, First Class. Padma Patil, Order of Merlin, First Class. Hermione Granger, Order of Merlin, First Class. Since Harry is already a holder of this prestigious award, and also a lifetime Hogwarts champion, I'm hoping the chamber will ratify the title of Harry Crow, Baron of King Usi, on him, and the small parcel of land that comes with this barony. This would allow both he and Baroness Hermione to live in close proximity to the castle after they graduate from Hogwarts. There was a moment's pause before the guarded question was asked. Minister, isn't the boy already in line to become a lord? What's a barony in comparison to that? Here was where some of them would pass yesterday's Christmas dinner into their underwear. At the moment, Harry holds the rank of Centurion, and an Order of Merlin, First Class. Both of these make him an adult in either society but don't come with any titles. As it began to sink in just what their minister was proposing here, another tentative question was asked. Isn't it against the law for goblins to own land, and live anywhere but inside Gringotts? This would be the moment that defined his ministry, or saw him kicked out on his ear. Yes, that is currently true. It is also true that we in this chamber collectively have the power to change that law. Cries of, never, were some of the more printable comments that came from around the chamber. Lunacy was another well-used term. Cornelius let them rant for a few moments before holding up his hands for silence. He was surprised at himself with how calm he felt. When analyzing his feelings further, Cornelius was even more surprised to find he was enjoying himself. He'd never felt more alive. One shouted comment drew gasps inside the chamber, and forced an instant reply from Cornelius. If the boy has already chosen to live his life as a goblin, then I say let him rot under Gringotts. The only thing young Harry has chosen is the witch who'll be at his side. Even in goblin society, their actions are regarded as somewhat preemptive. It's extremely rare for goblins to undertake this right under the age of 17. Harry has been raised as a goblin, so it seems natural to me that, when he meets the right girl for him, this is the method he would use to show that their level of blood bonding certainly confirmed they are indeed right for each other. Knowing this young couple as I do, and with all of us having just witnessed a demonstration of just how devoted they are to each other, I have no hesitation in passing on my personal and ministerial congratulations to both of them on their bonding. The minister had once more left them with really nowhere to go with their arguments. The issue about the boy who lived now being bonded was effectively closed. The chamber's focus now switched to this proposed change in the law. Again, Cornelius had something up his sleeve. Like everyone in this room, I was taught history by a ghostly professor whose lessons were born from the worst type of bigotry. Even death didn't stop his revenge on the nation he loathed with a passion that ran all the way to assisting a young Voldemort in the hope the emerging Dark Lord would then exterminate an entire society. What we need here is some truth, facts and figures that we can base our judgment around. For that, I asked Ambassador Weasley, and his eldest son, to bring us facts that could be corroborated into this chamber. By your leave, I will invite him in to present those facts now. When there was no objections, Cornelius signaled to the clerk to fetch the Weasleys, before offering his final remark to the chamber. As you well know, a change in law of this magnitude needs to sit with this chamber for 40 days. There will be no vote on the matter until January has ended. What I'm anxious to avoid here is another panic similar to the one a certain story in today's prophet instigated. Let everyone hear the facts of the matter, take their time to form the questions that need to be asked, then, and only then, will we have the appropriate debate and vote. That is the way our law is supposed to operate. While I am minister, that is the way our laws will operate. Arthur and Bill strode into the chamber, having his son stand so confidently beside him, while facing the most powerful legislative body in Britain, was a very proud moment for the head of the Weasley family. A nod from Cornelius was their signal to begin. Looking through all the records in the ministry, and with assistance from Gringotts, we were able to confirm that the last sortie between wizards and goblins was indeed 1612. Arthur found himself rudely interrupted by a loud and angry shout from the chamber. By my reckoning, that means our current arrangements have kept the peace for almost 380 years. Why the hell would we want to change a law that works so well? Bill could see this was a deliberate attempt to bully his father, and disrupt their presentation. Bill knew his father was a wizard who was too polite to deal with this situation the way it needed to be dealt with. His son though was used to negotiating with goblins. It was time to begin earning that large salary they paid him. Excuse me, but since I was invited by the Minister of Magic to this chamber, I assumed I wasn't here for decoration. I'm afraid I have to take issue with that statement you just made. If you class the reigns of terror instigated by Grindelwald and Tom Riddle, I refuse to call that criminal Voldemort, as peace, then the definition of the word has changed since you left Hogwarts. I'm quite aware of the definition of peace. I was alluding to the situation with the goblins. I beg your pardon, sir. Goblins never allude, rather say exactly what they mean. I find it quite refreshing. So, what you were alluding to was that wizards were too busy fighting each other to bother with the goblins. This raised a few chuckles as it became instantly apparent that young Weasley could tie knot in knots, verbally, magically and physically. Don't put words in my mouth, boy, just whose side are you on here? Bill's entire demeanor just got a lot more serious. The rest of the chamber ceased to exist as he focused on Knot. Oh, I wasn't aware there were sides to join. I thought the vote was at least 40 days away yet. We were asked here today to present some facts. And sir, the only person allowed to call me boy is standing beside me. Please remember that in future. Bill didn't actually say, or he would have to remind him, but everyone clearly got the message. In those few minutes, Bill Weasley had established himself as a player in the game, a player with powerful backing. Arthur waited until Knot had acknowledged his error before continuing. We compared Goblin and Ministry records of the casualties caused by this brief conflict and found them fairly comparable, single digits the only difference between both sets of figures. We then compared this to the British witches and wizards killed during the conflict with Grindelwald, over 7 times the number of them lost their lives when compared to 1612. When we ran the numbers for Riddle and his Death Eaters, the figure was almost 30 times more. That's preposterous, and irrelevant. This time there was no give in Arthur, he stood proud and answered straight back. While all we have is mostly the numbers of casualties for 1612, the Death Eater victims are well documented. We have names, dates, places, and, in some cases, even the names of those who committed the atrocities. We were asked for facts and that is what we are presenting here. It was Antonin Dolohov who murdered both my brothers-in-law. The 4 Death Eaters who accompanied him on that attack were never identified. It wasn't goblins who killed them, wizards tortured Gideon and Fabian Pruitt to death. This led to Amelia standing, and making a statement of her own. It wasn't goblins who almost wiped out the Bones family either, rather cowards who hid behind masks. It was goblins who ensured my last living relative couldn't be controlled by any potion a wizard chose to slip her. The goblins have also erected protective wards around our home to ensure those same cowardly mask-wearing bastards will not burn us out while we sleep in our beds. Augusta then slowly rose to her feet, her emotions rang clear in her voice. It wasn't goblins who tortured my son and his wife until they almost lost their minds. It is certainly goblins who are slowly returning them to their family. The goblins can never replace the lost years, nor do we hold any false hope Frank and Alice will ever make a full recovery. For everything the goblins do give us though, we will be eternally grateful. Our home is also protected by the same wards that keep our children safe at Hogwarts, and I could easily make a case for both the Ministry of Magic and St. Mungo's receiving that same level of protection. Any evil bastard who would deliberately fire a killing curse at a baby boy, after first killing both his parents, wouldn't think twice about attacking a hospital filled with the sick and injured. Augusta was hoping someone would mention denying access to those forced to take the Dark Mark while under the Imperious Curse. None of them though dared rise to the bait. Her simple answer would have been, prove it. Instead, she fired a parting shot before sitting back down. If I discovered the Longbottoms would have goblins for neighbors, I would be delighted. In our hour of need, I know their reaction would be like the one we just witnessed earlier in that brave Aura's memory. They would come running, ready, willing and more than able to render assistance, not cowering under their beds in the hope the Bodgerman would pick on someone else, and leave them alone. It was almost as if a gauntlet had been thrown down. Anyone who'd lost family in either war stood and recited their relations' names like a roll of honor. The sheer number of names making the point far more effectively than mere numbers ever could. When you could put names or even faces to the figures murdered, it suddenly became a devastating presentation of the harm done to their society. That none of the named had died at the hands of goblins, and no one in the chamber could recall an ancestor who had, more than proved the point that the minister wanted made today. The goblins hadn't been their enemies for almost 400 years, wasn't it about time they stopped treating them as such? Bill had one last card to play, or, to be precise, a memory. The Goblin Nation keeps an archive of memories, and have done so for centuries. This one is from May, 1610. The memory showed a bustling little town, with wizards and goblins going about the daily business. It was only spotting the occasional group of students in Hogwarts robes that gave a clue to where this location actually was. Yes, witches and wizards of the Wizengamot, this is Hogsmeade. As you can see, at that time it was considered the Scottish equivalent of Diagon Alley. The village would prosper from the Hogwarts students visiting during the school year, and yet those same students would then do their school shopping in London over the holidays. Everyone was prospering until some wizards got jealous and greedy. They thought the goblins had the better land in Hogsmeade and arrogantly ordered them to move. When they didn't, Bloody Binns and his band of pre-Death Eaters started burning goblins alive in their home. Thus began the conflict of 1612, and the demise of Hogsmeade. No one felt like disputing Bill's explanation of historic events. It wasn't really important at the moment. They certainly couldn't dispute the Hogsmeade of today was a pale shadow of the memory they were watching here. The Goblin Nation would like to reopen a Gringotts branch in Hogsmeade, but are currently barred under ministry law from doing so. Let's not forget the outstanding young man who's at the very center of this whole debate. Is this chamber really going to confine Harry to dwell below Gringotts if he chooses to live his life as a centurion? As someone who knows him very well, I can put my hand on my heart and honestly say that would be a great loss to our society, a great and unnecessary loss. Amos asked if there were any more questions, and once more Sirius was proven something of a prophet. They had practically forgotten the name Remus Lupin by the end of the session, or the fact that a werewolf would be teaching at Hogwarts in a little over a week's time. The prophet would surely lead tomorrow with the story that the boy who lived had chosen his bride. For the members of the Wizengamot though, it would be considering changing the laws on goblins that would demand the most attention, and once again this would become a decision that would mostly be determined by the political leanings. For those of the Light faction, the decision wasn't too difficult. Their savior and champion had chosen his bride. That she was not from an established magical family was a little disappointing. That this witch then chose the old ways to bond though was certainly a point in her favor. Neither her courage nor the couple's commitment to each other could be questioned though, at least not by anyone who watched a memory of what happened inside the Chamber of Secrets. The possibility of the goblins being allowed to settle outside of Gringotts was not as scary a thought as Harry leaving their society forever. That would be a disaster in their eyes. That he clearly had other options available meant they would offer whatever enticements were needed to keep him amongst them. They would be voting yes to the Baron of Kingussie, and not one member thought to object to a Muggle-born being awarded their society's highest honor. Those of a dark persuasion were becoming terrified of the influence the Goblin Nation was having on their society, and their inability to be able to put a halt to it. Unlike the light, they had no leader to rally behind, with even the most bigoted amongst them having to admit the boy who defeated the basilisk cut a powerful figure to oppose directly. For those who also carried the dark mark, things just seemed to be lurching from bad to worse. These new goblin wards were nothing short of a nightmare they seemed destined to be forced to face. Already their mark barred them from entering Hogwarts, and apparently now the homes of some prominent purebloods. Placing those wards around the Ministry of Magic or St. Mungo's would be an unmitigated disaster, denying them access to their power, prestige and even healing. Their problem was, on what grounds could they object to wards that protected people from what was now regarded as a criminal organization? All had spotted the verbal trap that Bitch Longbottom had set, and none had risen to the poisonous bait. Their problems were increased though by Bones publicly mentioning their condition in the chamber, drawing everyone's attention to something they would like to see buried deep and never talked about again. Out of principle, they would oppose the Baron of Kingusi, though they were far more worried about these wards than having goblins for neighbors. If the ministry chose to erect these wards, they wouldn't be able to attend the celebration ball anyway. Depending when those wards were erected, they might not even get a chance to vote on this matter. Not one thought was spared to the fact a mudblood would become an Order of Merlin, first class, holder, or that a werewolf would now be teaching at Hogwarts. The neutrals would, as usual, control which way the vote was decided. Their views were similar to those of the Light faction regarding Miss Granger eventually becoming the bride of the boy who lived. While they would usually be in favor of anything that increased commerce in their community, the memory of what Hogsmeade used to be was a powerful enticement. They also realized that there would then be increased competition for that commerce, from the goblins. As neutrals, they also understood that purchasing the wonderful new wards the goblins were making available would see their supposed neutrality end in the eyes of those no longer able to access their property. Whether that was a price worth paying to protect their families would be a decision for individuals. In short, they neither wanted the return of the Dark Lord nor any more goblin influence on their society. Many would seek private meetings with those involved at the vanguard of this proposal, quietly promising Amelia and Cornelius support in exchange for their assurance there would be no more changes in these laws for at least a number of years. Since that was already the plans of those at the ministry involved with the goblins, their assurances would be given. Gilderoy had sat near the back of a packed public gallery, the hood of his robe raised so he wouldn't be recognized, unless he wanted to be. Today had not gone as he had planned, not even close. Who cared about this Lupin person's qualifications or teaching abilities? The man was a werewolf, end of story. Instead of winning his job back, he was forced to sit here while his character was further abused and eroded. Claiming a 12-year-old boy was a better teacher than him was simply ridiculous. Watching that memory again, surrounded by members of the public who were seeing it for the first time, left Gilderoy with the distinct impression he was now the only one who considered that notion ridiculous. Their opinion was crystal clear, they would rather see Harry Crow named king, than force him to leave them forever. The journalists who were sitting furiously taking notes were well aware of this opinion, and Gilderoy expected to see that reflected in their stories tomorrow. It was always easier to influence public opinion when you were telling people something they actually agreed with. Gilderoy left the chamber a disappointed wizard. He hadn't gotten his job back, he also hadn't gotten any fan mail since leaving the Hogwarts wards behind. Gilderoy's only consolation was that things simply couldn't get any worse, he had no idea just how wrong he could be. Hermione had been nervous about tonight, and that was before learning the Minister of Magic had announced that she and Harry were blood bonded to the Wizengamot tomorrow the entire country would know. She was dressed like a princess in another new goblin creation that Harry gave her as part of her Christmas, and she was also wearing jewelry fit for any queen, the ring on her finger being her clear favorite. Hermione was in no way nervous that she might outshine the lady whose party this was. We were talking about Henrika Hobson here after all. No, what was making Hermione nervous was that the goblin tailors had taken into account her developing body when they designed this dress for her. It almost made her feel grown up, and for some reason she was nervous as to how Harry would react to that. The dress might make her appear slightly older, but inside Hermione felt like a nervous little girl, and didn't know why. These bouts of self-doubt were becoming rarer, but they still held the power to make Hermione question everything that had happened in the last couple of years. It was almost as if things were going too well, and she was expecting everything to end when the clock struck midnight. She would be back in Crawley, Hogwarts, and Harry were nothing more than wonderful dreams, and Hermione Granger was once more the friendless bookworm. Hermione, are you ready? Oh, my, our little girl is growing up. You look so beautiful. Thanks, Mum, and thanks for everything. I'm sitting here staring into the mirror, almost having to pinch myself to see if this is real, yet you and Dad have had to cope with so much more, and I just really needed to say thank you for all you've done for me. Hermione, stop. You're going to have my makeup running soon, and we can't really greet our gentlemen looking like a couple of pandas. Betsy applied my makeup. Mum, it won't run. Well, as wonderful as Dobby is, that's not one of his talents. If you're ready, your father and Harry are downstairs. Harry and Dan were standing waiting on the Granger ladies at the bottom of the staircase. Their reactions to seeing Hermione were totally different. Harry had a beaming smile on his face. He approached Hermione and kissed the back of her hand in greeting. Dan meanwhile was experiencing the pivotal moment in every father's life when it suddenly hits home that the daughter is growing up. This beautiful and confident young lady in front of him surely couldn't be the child that he used to read bedtime stories to. Where did the time go? Emma could see her husband struggling with his emotions at the moment, so spoke with Harry to give Dan a chance to regain his equilibrium. You seem very pleased with yourself, Harry, aren't you even slightly apprehensive about tonight? It's not just family who'll know your secret now. He shook his head, though the broad smile never wavered. Back in May I spoke to Sirius about asking Hermione to be my girlfriend. I said then that she is beautiful, smart and just wonderful to spend time with, and tonight, everyone can see I was right. Asking her to be mine before anyone else could swoop in and steal her away is easily the best decision I ever made. The entire country now knowing of our bonding is not something to worry about. How they treat us now might affect our decisions on where our future lies, but it won't change the fact that we're together. All Hermione's nerves had fled, now she was back on Harry's arm. He was once more dressed in Harry, Darcy, mode, and Hermione thought asking him to share a carriage with her that 1st of September was easily the best decision she ever made too. Dan was now the one left shaking his head. In all this extra training and lessons you do, Harry, were any of them on how to chat up girls? I don't think I was ever as smooth as that. Hell, I'm not that smooth now. Sorry to disappoint, Dan, but no. I've only ever been interested in one girl, and now she's mine. If that isn't a reason to smile, then I don't know what is. Dan offered Emma his arm before following the couple in front of them who were practically floating toward the ballroom. Boys are bloody natural at that too. There must be something he can't do. Emma knew Dan was cracking jokes to get himself together. Seeing Hermione in that dress had been a shock for her too. She though already had her few moments to get over the shock. Emma tried to help her husband out. Hermione says Harry's a terrible singer. She thinks it's a goblin thing. Seeing Dan smile at that let her know he was going to be fine. It also earned him a kiss on the cheek, a kiss that promised more later. They were the last house guests to arrive in the ballroom, something Padma was quick to point out. Got here at last, did you? Were you lost, or just unable to part with the Christmas present Sirius got you? Nothing was going to shift Hermione's smile tonight, especially not her friend's teasing. Now Padma, don't get jealous. Just because I now have a book that gives me access to everything stored in the Black Library. It was an open-mouthed Hannah who just had to butt in. There was something a lot more important she wanted to know. Never mind talking about some old books. Hermione, how the hell do I get a figure like that? Sparing Hermione's blushes from Hannah's question, Padma answered for her friend. It's easy. You just get up in the middle of the night, run for miles and then cross swords with Harry here for an hour or so. Do that every day for well over a year and, hey presto. Told you it was easy. They were all closer now, and had gotten well used to what passed for Padma's sense of humor. Hannah though appeared to be considering if the torture Padma just described wasn't a sacrifice worth paying to have a figure like Hermione's. Susan looked as if she was on the verge of volunteering for this figure-defining training too. Hermione though just stuck her tongue out at her best friend, which, as she expected, also earned a quick back from Padma. Oh, way to ruin the effect, Granger. Standing there like a fairy princess, and then she wastes it by being childish. Such a pity. If a fairy princess had you for a best friend, you would probably be a toad by now. Hermione's playful answering barb just cracked Luna up, a playmate for Trevor. Which started everyone else laughing. They had to cut their now normal joking around short though as the guests started arriving. Hannah couldn't wait to introduce her friends to her parents while everyone else was simply looking forward to a great night. Sirius and Henrika had both been adamant that tonight was their night. They didn't want to spend it surrounded by guests they didn't know, just so it could be said the right people had been present. They had also been reticent about asking the people in power at the ministry who were perceived to be on their side in the struggle to change magical attitudes inside Britain. With the meeting being held today, Amelia had advised that this would no longer be the case. The officials in question would have already stood and declared their position on these matters inside the Wizengamot. That was why Cornelius, Amos and Arthur had to all fluke home to inform their respective wives that they had been invited to Lord Black's engagement party tonight. The Diggories were actually the first to arrive, with Cedric having Katie Bell on his arm. Having been present when the twins had asked Angelina and Alicia, Cedric, being the gentleman that he was, had asked the third Gryffindor chaser to be his date, much to Katie's delight. A still shocked Remus had quickly approached Amos to thank him for his support in the chamber today, thanks that the chief wizard refused to accept. Had those objections against you been about your inability to teach our children, my answer would have been different. If the Wizengamot expect me just to blindly follow the old bigotries, then they elected the wrong person chief wizard. Cedric has told me how bad a teacher Lockhart is, and how lucky he feels to be receiving extra lessons. Education shouldn't be about luck, and that's where you come in. Bringing the defense classes at Hogwarts to a level they should be is all the thanks any of us expect. With that, Remus finally began to comprehend that the British magical community was not only capable of changing, it appeared now ready to accept some. Dan and Emma had been watching for the arrival of the Creevies. Colin had quickly shot over to where the rest of the Hogwarts contingent were gathered, leaving his parents adrift in a situation they knew little about. Being taken under the Granger's wings saw grateful thanks being offered by both. Colin's father saying that milkmen didn't usually get invited to parties held by lords and ladies drew laughter from Sirius and Henrika, with Lucas and Moa also promising to help the overwhelmed couple with anything they didn't understand. The Muggle couple offering thanks to Barchoke for Harry looking after Colin while he was at Hogwarts meant that the Creevies would fit right into their company. The Weasleys' arrival saw the Hogwarts contingent grow even more, and also gave Harry an idea how to switch Remus' mind onto something else. A quick word with Fred and George, with the name Moony being mentioned, soon had them practically stalking the Marauder. Their other friends were all very accepting of Harry and Hermione's bonding. It was surprisingly easy since the couple weren't acting any different than they normally would. Ginny had been more concerned that Professor Lupin's arrival would see the end of Crow's Marauders. All involved with teaching the club quickly confirmed they wished to continue with it, making Ginny, Luna and Colin very happy. That club really was their favorite time at Hogwarts, and all three were wearing their Marauders badges tonight. Even Roger turning up with Cho Chang as his date didn't dent the group's good mood. Jo had pretty much kept to herself after apologizing to Harry and Hermione. They certainly weren't expecting any trouble from her tonight. All the Hogwarts students had naturally sat together, seeing them occupy one side of the ballroom. When the Greengrass family arrived, Daphne didn't hesitate to lead her younger sister over to join the large group. Draco and Pansy arrived with Blaze. After thanking their hosts for being invited and handing over the gift, Draco and Pansy followed Blaze over to join the crowd. The news of what had transpired at today's Wizengamot meeting was spreading like wildfire. Pansy had heard it from her father, so of course passed it on to Draco. What Pansy hadn't mentioned was the idea this had sparked in her mind. Her goal tonight was to get Granger alone for a few moments and hope the girl could answer some of the questions the Slytherin had. If that meant she had to play suck up all night, Pansy was more than prepared to do exactly that. Cornelius was fashionably late in arriving, not through choice or playing games to get noticed, simply because his wife took so long to get ready. Why she had to try on 5 separate outfits, only to finally decide on the one she's put on first, was a mystery way beyond the minister's understanding. He'd learned years ago just to say his wife looked beautiful in everything, he was after all a politician. The Minister of Magic was presented with what he thought was a perfect example of how the political landscape of their country was changing the minute they walked into the ballroom. Barchoke was dancing with a simply stunning Miss Granger around the black ballroom, and their actions didn't even raise one eyebrow amongst the guests who were present. It wasn't so long ago, even entering this house would have meant that neither the goblin nor the muggle-born witch would have left it alive. A witch who would certainly have considered the murder of both the filthy goblin and the mudblood, simply for daring to entering the home of a pureblood, as acceptable behavior, was sitting alone sipping fire whiskey. Dolores couldn't see any prospects that this latest vote against their way of life wouldn't gain a pass through the Wizengamot. There were just too many powerful figures lining up to support it. Add to that a werewolf would be teaching inside Hogwarts, and their entire society seemed to be going to the dogs. There were now multiple creatures holding teaching positions at the country's premier school of magic, with a Veela, a goblin and now a werewolf passing themselves off as professors. This would surely eventually foster the belief amongst tomorrow's adults that this was perfectly acceptable and even normal behavior, and something that Dolores Umbridge was desperate to put a stop to. What she needed was a way to directly compare Hogwarts against other magical schools, public humiliation appearing to be her best option for forcing people to face the truth, and see the proper standards of blood purity being restored once more. Dolores knew there were enough archaic rules and outright stupid ideas just lying around in the archives of the Department of Magical Games and Sports to cover practically any eventuality. The trick would be in finding just the right one. Good old Ludo Bagman was strutting around the ministry like a pompous prick because the Quidditch World Cup was returning to Britain, due to all of her hard work in undermining the opposing bids for the tournament. The mere thought of pulling off a second coup would see her departmental head providing Dolores with all the help she would need in her search for a way to show Hogwarts for what it really was, an affront and a disgrace to their ancient way of life. Thanks for reading. To my longest chapter to date, yet it didn't feel that way when I was writing it. Sometimes, the words just flow. Please, not the house elf. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I would like to think that Harry Potter belongs to all of us who spend our time keeping the story of the boy who lived alive. Providing we're not making any money from Jo Rowling's creation, her lawyers would appear to be quite happy indulging us in this flight of fantasy. I wouldn't want to upset those lawyers, especially since I can't afford to hire one of my own. I am aware Harry Crow has an anniversary pending. I have a much more important date on my own calendar before that though. My son gets married next week, meaning I will be otherwise occupied and there won't be my usual update next weekend. Chapter 54 will appear on the 5th of June, exactly a year since I posted the first chapter. Hope to see you then, Robert. Chapter 53. Young Astoria Greengrass eyes were wider than Luna's at what was happening all around her tonight. Normally, on occasions like this, she and Daphne would sit demurely beside their parents and only speak when directly spoken to. Tonight they were sitting amongst people around their own ages, chatting about things that interested them, and having a great time. On hearing that she would be starting Hogwarts in September, Ginny, Luna and Colin promised to look out for her. With all the older students saying the same too, she would have friends in every house before she even set foot in the castle. This certainly wasn't what she'd expected. Astoria now couldn't wait for September to arrive. Pansy was beginning to think the only way she was going to get Granger alone was to dance with her. The muggle-born witch was never off the ballroom floor. Finally, she and the Ravenclaw Patil were heading for a bathroom break. This looked about as good an opportunity as she was going to get. She left Draco's side and hurried after the pair. Blaze had noticed her departure, but a shrug from Draco in answer to his inquiry was of no help. Parvati though had also seen Pansy leave and was looking for answers from her date. Have you any idea why Parkinson shot out of here after my sister and Hermione? No, sorry, but I don't think it's anything you need to worry about. Both of them are being nominated for Orders of Merlin. I think they'll cope if Pansy is stupid enough to try anything. Bearing in mind we're also in Lord Black's home, both girls' parents are sitting over there, and then there's Harry and Neville to consider. You would have to be a moron to try anything against those girls anyway, but to do so tonight would be insane. Listening to Blaze reassured Parvati, but not as much as seeing that Harry had also noticed Pansy leaving. Even whilst dancing with Luna, he still missed nothing that went on in the ballroom. Both girls had soon noticed Pansy following them. It was too deliberate to be anything other than that. On entering the large ladies' room off the ballroom, Hermione and Padma let their lessons take over. Padma approached a mirror and pretended to touch up her light makeup while Hermione moved to the other side of the room, ensuring there was no way Pansy would be able to use her wand on both of them at the same time. The young Slytherin witch entered the restroom and immediately sussed the situation she was in here. Knowing these two had no reason to trust her, Pansy made sure both her empty hands were in full view of Padma and Hermione. I was hoping to have a private word with you, Hermione, it's a rather delicate matter. You can trust Padma with anything you want to say to me. She won't say a word and, if it's what I think you're going to ask, Padma might have more knowledge about it than me. Deciding just to go for it, Pansy blurted out what she was desperate to know. I wanted to ask you what's involved in a blood bonding. I was hoping it could be a way of stopping my father withdrawing my betrothal to Draco. Hermione could clearly see the desperation that had led Pansy to resort to asking them for help. She also hated to disappoint her. I'm sorry, Pansy, I don't think it would help your situation. Even if you blood bonded with Draco, your father could still betroth you to someone else. The bond only really becomes legal when you finalize it. A puzzled Pansy asked what she thought was a simple question. Why wouldn't we finalize the bonding? It was Padma who supplied the answer. The bonding will finalize the first time you have sex after performing the ceremony. Oh, I couldn't possibly do that. I'm not nearly ready for that step yet. Pansy found herself being offered a hanky by Hermione. She hadn't even realized she'd been crying. Don't worry, Pansy, none of us are. It's something Harry and I won't be doing for a good few years yet. We're just lucky our parents want us to be together. The blood bonding ceremony shows a couple how compatible they are but, until finalized, has no legal standing under the current ministry laws. It actually has more legal status in the Goblin Nation where we're already considered mates. If Harry and I were to take that final step, we would be considered husband and wife in 2 of the 3 societies we inhabit. My mum and dad still expect to see me married in church though, and we hope to finalize our bonding after that ceremony. This will see us legally married in all 3. Having pinned all her hopes on this solution, Pansy was now quite distraught to find it wouldn't be of any help. Not caring that these girls weren't exactly her friends, she just had to talk to someone about this. It was only being invited here that stopped my father breaking the betrothal over Christmas. He's still looking at a couple of candidates to offer me to though. Draco and I have been betrothed since we were 2. We've grown up knowing that someday we would marry. How can he just take that away from us? Here was a side of betrothals Hermione hadn't considered. Being betrothed since infancy had seen these 2 grow up together, already knowing what awaited them in the future. No wonder Pansy was distraught. Draco was not only her betrothed but her best friend too. Hermione remembered how she felt the night her dad had pulled her out of Harry's arms. That was enough to have her offering to help Pansy. If coming here tonight helped keep you both betrothed, we need to put our heads together and see what else can be done to keep your father from considering breaking that agreement. We will probably need to tell a few more people exactly what's going on though. If it keeps me and Draco together, I don't care if it makes the front page of the Prophet. I have to ask though, why are you helping me? Hermione actually smiled at the Slytherin as she gave Pansy an answer the witch wasn't expecting. Although the 3 of us are from totally different backgrounds, and will certainly have differing views on life, there is one thing we all have in common. Each of us has already found the person they want to spend the rest of their lives with. Anyone trying to separate Harry and me, or Padma and Neville, will have a fight on their hands. How could we not help you? Pansy didn't get to say any more as Parvati burst into the rest room, closely followed by Henrika. The signs that Pansy had been crying were unmissable, as were any signs of an altercation between them. Whatever was going on, they certainly weren't fighting. Everything okay in here? We're fine, Parv, just having a chat with Pansy. Thanks for checking on us though, nice to know you've got our backs. No problem, sis, though I better get back and tell the boys everything's fine, before they come rushing in here too. As Parvati headed back to the ballroom, Henrika stayed to help sort out whatever problem they were having here. It was a relieved Draco who finally saw Pansy re-enter the ballroom. She then practically dragged him onto the dance floor, obviously to talk. How far are you prepared to go to keep our betrothal? Pansy, you know I can't give in to your father's demands. He would soon have a whole new set for me if I did. I'm not talking about giving in to my father, you know I agree with you on that. If we were invited to Lord Black's wedding, and then spent some of the summer in Crow's company, do you honestly think my father would risk throwing that away? Who else is he going to find for me with connections like that? What did you have to promise to get that? I won't swap one manipulator for another, I want us to live our lives the way we choose. Quote ellipsis. And so do I, Draco, so do I. What we need to do here is give a clear message that we're willing to change. You've already said we need to. We've been promised to each other practically all our lives. I'm not about to stand still and let my father go back on his word now. The idea I had wouldn't work, but I was then offered another chance. We both know getting close to Crow would stop my father in his tracks. Does this mean I have to suck up to Crow? Look at Blaze, or even Longbottom, they don't act like that. Crow is not interested in anyone sucking up to him. If we want to see the Malfoy name rise to prominence once more, this is really the only way. You said it yourself, if Crow defeats the Dark Lord, Magical Britain will probably all but name him king. If that were to happen, you and I would never be a prince or princess, but we could be part of that royal court. That's the way a Slytherin would operate. We get to stay together, gain some influential friends, and may also have some fun along the way. She could see Draco was considering this option, get her father off their backs without having to make any concessions, well, none that hurt anyway. If we were to do this, what do they want from us? They want a public show that we're willing to change. The name Malfoy still carries some weight in certain circles, a message to those same circles is what's needed here. You asking Granger to dance will send that message loud and clear. Crow will then ask me. If that doesn't keep father off our backs for the next few months, nothing will. So, all I need to do is dance with Granger. Pansy nodded in answer, but Draco could clearly see now would be an extremely bad time to tease her. He gave her a tighter squeeze as they twirled and earned a nervous smile. Will you do this, for us? Draco had effectively lost everything, yet Pansy had stuck to his side like glue. She was even plotting against her father to ensure she stayed glued to his side in the coming years. If dancing with Granger keeps you by my side, then I'll do it. I would dance with her muggle mother if it meant we stayed together. Her mother is a beautiful woman, Draco, so that wouldn't exactly be a hardship. Don't go ruling it out though, I don't know just how far we need to take this. Tonks was standing watching Hermione dancing with her cousin when Henrika approached. Would you please pinch me, Professor, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. Auror, you of all people should know what this group can achieve when they put their minds to it. You're not joking there, I now have a bank balance I still have trouble accepting, and today was recommended for an Order of Merlin, first class. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but thieves certainly changed my life out of all recognition. My mother dancing with my father in the Black Ballroom is also a pretty special occasion for our family too, I'd like to thank you for that. We're going to be family ourselves, call me Henrika. Thanks, Henrika, though I still want to be called Tonks. Some parents should never be allowed to name their children. What can you tell me of Remus Lupin? Why, Tonks, you interested? Yes, interested in finding out just what I've let myself in for. I'm going to be the Auror who escorts him off the Hogwarts grounds for his transformation, and then takes his classes for a day or so. I'm familiar with the way the castle runs, and, after that announcement this morning, Madam Bones is sure an Order of Merlin nominated Auror making certain the werewolf is out the castle will put an end to any parental concerns. You won't have anything to worry about, Tonks, Remus is a really nice guy. Sirius will also be there, he plans on staying with Remus to help him with his transformation. Henrika watched the Aura's eyes widen at that before supplying the information she was missing. Sirius is a dog animagus, so will transform too, and be perfectly safe. This had Tonks staring at the beautiful Vila before asking a question. Our family really is nuts. From auras to psycho witches that will never see the outside of Azkaban, and now you tell me the head of our family is a dog. You sure you know what you're doing by marrying into it? Henrika only needed to glance at the dance floor where her husband-to-be was currently waltzing with her mother. Hell yes, Tonks. Cornelius was actually enjoying himself for a change. There was no ministerial business being done here tonight, he was being treated as just another guest, a refreshing change. This allowed him to spend his now free time observing the voters of tomorrow, and acknowledging that Amelia had been correct on two of her main points. Just watching these young wizards and witches together confirmed they had to be treated equally, and that losing Harry to the goblins or muggles would be an unmitigated disaster. Watching as Lucia's son was not only civil to a muggle-born witch, but danced with her too was certainly something Cornelius really needed to see for himself. Harry was clearly doing his damnedest to ensure his generation was susceptible to the changes he wanted to see happen. It was now the minister's job to try and mold their society into one that would accept these changes too. Cornelius knew he would have a fight on his hands. The dark faction weren't going to surrender any power lightly, but he found himself relishing the challenge. This was why he got into politics in the first place, before he started playing the system, or did the system play him? While Amos was watching the same group, his focus was on another dark-haired boy. Cedric appeared to fit comfortably into this cosmopolitan mixture of witches and wizards. It would probably be hard not to. Here was a group where everyone was listened to, and no opinion was dismissed as being wrong, just different. Cedric had told him this before, but witnessing it firsthand was certainly an eye-opener. In any command situation, Harry would clearly take leadership of the group. Like they'd witnessed with the chamber incident, he still listened to and valued the opinions of those around him. His power of command though was so strong, an Auror and a Hogwarts professor had followed those commands too. Amos was delighted his son was part of this group, but even more so after seeing the way Cedric interacted amongst them. The party was hailed as a great success by all the guests. As a certain young couple were getting ready to leave, their host for the evening returned Pansy's tactics from earlier and wanted a private word. Mr. Malfoy, I understand what my godson is doing here and think he is wrong. Harry then retorts that I'm getting old and cynical, you just got elected as our test case to prove which of us is correct. Pansy was trembling as she held onto Draco's arm. She, like her betrothed, had no idea what Lord Black was up to. Neither had long to wait for their fears to be answered. On New Year's Eve, a lot of the people present here tonight will be celebrating on a muggle boat sailing along the Thames in central London. There will be dinner and dancing, and I'm inviting you, and the date of your choice, to join us. Dress is muggle, but there will be clothes here waiting for both of you. Your wands will also be left here, safely waiting on your return. It's a private party, but the crew and the band will of course be muggles. Send me an owl when you reach your decision on attending. Draco managed to mumble a thank you for the invitation, before they both entered the flue. Sirius then felt a pair of arms encircle him from behind as Henrika kissed his cheek. That was a very nice thing you did there. I'm sorry love, but it wasn't. What do you mean, what else could it be? Her future husband attempted to explain. Just because I don't believe in most of their blood doctrine, that doesn't mean I don't know how to use it to our advantage. Knowing this was a foreign concept to his beautiful fiancée, Sirius then told Henrika exactly what she'd just witnessed here. Young Draco has rather a hard choice to make, one I deliberately foisted upon him. If he's going to be in our company, and around our family, we need to know where he stands. If he attends our New Year party, Draco will know he'll struggle to be accepted back into the circles his father used to frequent after that. It will also tell us just how far Parkinson is prepared to go to see his daughter in the same company Pansy was in tonight, all very informative. If they make some excuse, this will also tell us they're only paying lip service to the changes our group of kids are spearheading. Quote ellipsis. And what do you hope he does? Oh, I hope Draco turns up. This earned him another kiss from Henrika, though again she had misread Siria's motives. Quote ellipsis. Just the knowledge that his son attended a muggle party would probably see old Lucius top himself. I certainly won't shed any tears if that happens. Breakfast next morning also saw the prophet delivered, with the expected front page story. Using a picture of Harry and Hermione from the Ministry summer ball was again rather predictable, the headline though was a bit of a surprise. Bonded in blood and heroism. The journalist had obviously researched bonds, and again put their own spin onto the information. Claiming that this was an ancient magical ceremony that predates betrothals was correct, claiming the bond was stronger than any betrothal wasn't strictly true, though no one at Grimmauld was going to argue that point. This article was overwhelmingly positive and supporting, both of their bonding and the proposed ministerial awards. Padma and Hermione were just glad they had explained the situation fully to Pansy last night, otherwise she might have thought the blood bonding ceremony would protect them from her father's manipulations. Remus was delighted the now rather positive article on him being cleared to take up his teaching post at Hogwarts was relegated to the inside pages. Orders of Merlin and new barons were far more important to the British magical community, or rather who the minister was proposing to give those honours to. Dan was rather confused about Harry being awarded a barony, although only the reigning monarch could award titles. This had Sirius chuckling. Do you think the Queen awarded Tom Riddle a lordship? The title, Lord, originally meant those with power over others. Since Voldemort literally held the power of life and death over his followers, one could easily make a case for the Nutter considering himself a lord. The Blacks are an ancient family, with the head of the family being Lord over the rest, and again nothing to do with the Muggle peerage system. Sirius is right in what he says, though this title is different again. Making me a baron still has nothing to do with the monarchy, the title comes with the land. Harry had a rather cheeky grin on his face as he made his next suggestion. Hermione, perhaps we could buy them something like that for Christmas next year. I can just see your dad as a Highland laird, and it isn't even that expensive. We could buy a couple each with the money we got from the basilisk. So, you're saying this is about the land, not the title. None of them could miss the gleam of excitement that was visible in Harry's eyes as he spoke. It was always about the land, Dan, never the title. Granting this land to a goblin means the ministry will have to change the law. The last change was nothing more than a small step, this would be a giant leap. I could have goblins building homes and living on my land, legally. This will easily be the biggest thing to hit the goblin nation in over 4 centuries. Goblins became masters of wards not only to protect Gringotts and the vaults, but in the hope that one day we could return to live on the surface. No goblin home will ever be attacked by wizards again, not without squads of warriors arriving while those same wizards are still trying to bring down the wards. Emma then shifted the focus to Amelia and Augusta with her question. Just what are the chances of this getting approval by the Wizengamot? I'm actually optimistic about our chances now, certainly more so than before the meeting. Amelia agreed with Augusta's opinion, before adding her own thoughts on the matter. I've had a number of members approach me privately. They are more concerned about the speed and frequency these changes are being introduced, rather than having any outstanding reason for opposing this change purely on its merits. Reassurance that we won't be revisiting this for at least a few years will have them on board for the vote. I personally think we really need to let everyone get used to these changes before even considering any more. Barchoke then offered the nation's view of this. If passed, we certainly intend to open a Gringotts branch in Hogsmeade, but would hold off with any further integration for a while. We would be approaching the new Baron of Kingusi for permission to build a small settlement on his land, using that as a stepping stone before we have goblins and wizards once more living alongside each other. It was Hermione who then brought some levity back to the table, proving hanging around with Padma was certainly having an effect on her. Well, I personally know this Baron and don't see there being a problem with that. I also think we should spend some of the summer in Kingusi, probably just before we return to Hogwarts would be best. Are we any closer to working out our actual plans for the summer? This saw all eyes shift to the couple whose wedding would determine so much of those summer plans. One look between them was all they needed to decide Henrika would pass on the news. We haven't set a date yet. Sirius and I don't want to jinx the vote by prejudging the result. Everyone at this table is hoping for a yes vote, meaning we'll have another ministerial awards ball to attend. Since the vote won't be held until the 5th of February, how about we all get together the following weekend and work out our schedule then? Parvati was first to point out something that might have been overlooked. That weekend also contains Valentine's Day. Oh, I'm sure we could come up with something for that. Sirius smiled, telling everyone they had certainly known that fact before proposing that date. Neville though had another reason for instantly agreeing to this proposal. If we're out of Hogwarts, I'll get to visit my mum and dad. There was unanimous agreement after that. The entire company had visited Frank and Alice over the holidays, though a few still only through the viewing wall. While the goblin healers had been delighted that the new scans gave detailed information on exactly how their treatment was progressing, the Muggle physicians had been astonished. Only by claiming this was a radical new treatment, attempted on patients that really had nothing to lose, were the Muggle doctors satisfied, for now. Whatever this treatment was, the Muggle healers now held clear evidence that neural pathways to the brain had actually begun to repair themselves at a rate thought to be impossible. While Alice continued to slowly improve, Frank was displaying symptoms similar to patients who'd suffered from a stroke. One side of his body was certainly weaker and his speech was currently slurred. Both Augusta and Neville still thought this was a wonderful improvement. It was only in comparison to Alice that a little disappointment would surface. The goblin healers now had the new scans to help focus their treatment, and a healer from St. Mungo's would also be on their case in the new year. His parents' treatment had certainly passed every one of Neville's original expectations. As their condition improved though, Neville's expectations were growing right alongside those improvements. He was currently hoping his parents may be able to join him on holiday at Harry's private island. That would be a real dream come true for Neville. The healers knew of his dreams and hadn't yet ruled them out for this summer, though were fairly certain it wouldn't be a problem the following year. Just knowing it would happen someday was good enough for Neville. With that agreed to, Sirius then revealed what he had arranged for today, another day of holiday madness for the extended family. It was a smiling Lucas who thought the old axiom about losing your daughter didn't really apply here. It would appear the Hobsons weren't just gaining a son but a whole tribe. Both he and Moa were extremely happy with that arrangement, and had already been invited back to London in February for the wedding discussions. Edmund Parkinson was also smiling as he watched his daughter and her betrothed greet their new friends before they boarded the Hogwarts Express. He had taken a chance by allowing Pansy to accompany Draco to that Muggle event Lord Black had hosted. The important word for Edmund though was accompanied. Draco would be the one permanently tainted by this. Pansy was just on the arm of her betrothed. At least that's what Edmund would claim if he was forced to negotiate another contract for his daughter. What had clinched it for Edmund was that this is the company he wanted his grandchildren to grow up in, amongst the Potters, Longbottoms, Blacks and Bones. He'd thought betrothing Pansy to Draco had guaranteed her inclusion into the upper echelons of British magical society, only for that to all blow up in his face. Draco though had surprised him with how maturely the boy had handled the situation, certainly more maturely than Lucius had. He could see the hand of the Crow boy all over this approach. Having the Malfoy scion on his side lent credibility to what he was trying to achieve at Hogwarts, and also at the Ministry. That was another reason Edmund decided to come to platform 9 3/4 today. He wanted not only to see what was going on but to ensure he himself was publicly seen. He had heard whisperings that some direct action would be taken to ensure this new goblin initiative died a horrible death. Edmund thought action of that type could work both ways, either getting the desired result or collectively lighting a fire under the Ministry's ass that might see them tackle the Death Eater problem once and for all. With public opinion so swayed toward the light at the moment, Edmund feared it would be the second option that came to pass. If it did, then his daughter's new friendships should be enough to shield her from any fallout. Whether Pansy's friends would consider saving her family from any downturn in fortune would be a much harder question. They certainly made sure Lucius got what was coming to him. Barchoke was quite pleased with how today's meeting with Arthur had gone. They had scaled these meetings up from monthly to weekly events for the foreseeable future. The Ministry and the nation were both working hard to ensure the minister's proposal made it through the Wizengamot on the 5th. Weekly meetings allowed them to try and anticipate any problems, and take actions to smooth those problems away. The meeting venues alternated between Gringotts and the Ministry of Magic, with Arthur playing host to him and his assistant today. The trio were currently making their way through the Ministry's atrium when the hairs on the goblin's neck stood up. This was a response to danger that had saved his life in the past, and instantly forced Barchoke to take a closer look at their surroundings. It was the middle-aged witch who was rather mechanically walking toward them that really set Barchoke's alarm bells ringing. The goblins believe that a person's eyes are the window to their soul. Those of this witch were telling Barchoke that the lights may be on but no one was home. All this took a split second, a second that saw the witch begin to raise her wand. He yelled, "Attack," before pushing Arthur away, just as a killing curse passed through the space the head of the Weasley family had just occupied. Barchoke's warning and actions had Bill taking the witch out the fight with a cutting curse to her wand arm, only for curses to start raining down on them from another 2 locations. The atrium descended into chaos, with Bill and Arthur trying to make their attackers keep their heads down while Barchoke got as many people behind the fountain of magical brethren as possible. He was helping a witch with a young child, using his shield to protect them the best he could when a sudden impact sent him to the floor. The attack was soon over, lasting no more than 90 seconds, but the screaming went on considerably past that. The entire atrium was now flooded with auras and the situation was once more under control, with 4 attackers currently in custody and healers fleeing from St. Mungo's to treat any casualties. Amelia found Barchoke face down on the ground, with Bill and Arthur Weasley standing protectively over him while calling for a healer. She had known Barchoke had foregone his accompanying guards in favor of showing a more friendlier face of the nation, and Amelia was mentally kicking herself for not replacing those guards with auras. "Barchoke, can you hear me?" "I'm wounded, Amelia, not deaf. Of course I can hear you." "What hit me? I can't really see it from this position, and neither Weasley will let me move." "You have a piece of golden statue sticking out your shoulder, that's why they won't let you move." "Amelia, please tell me it's not a golden piece of house elf. I'll never live it down if a bloody house elf managed to put me on the ground." Cornelius raced to the atrium, with visions of mayhem and murder happening under his watch adding speed to his legs. Finding a wounded Barchoke, both Weasleys and Amelia laughing was certainly not what he expected. As far as Cornelius was concerned, this was no laughing matter. Ron Weasley wasn't laughing, though he was probably the only person on the express who wasn't. His holidays had been utterly miserable, constant lectures from both his parents had certainly marred his enjoyment of the Christmas period, and then the prophet told everyone what his father and Bill had been up to. 3 more Hogwarts students and a professor up for orders of Merlin, and Crow going to be made a baron. The world was going crazy and he appeared to be the only one in his family who could see it. His sister's main concern had been over what effect the new defense professor would have on Hogwarts. Ginny was relieved and delighted her Marauders Club would still be running. The twins were over the moon about having one of their heroes as a professor, while Percy was too busy mooning over Penelope to care about anything else. It was as if every member of his family had turned against him, and Ron knew just who to blame for his troubles. Crow, Hogwarts champion, Goblin Centurion, Order of Merlin, First Class, Holder and the Gid would now be a baron of some Scottish glen. How was any ordinary person supposed to compare themselves to that? As if that wasn't bad enough, he not only makes his friends rich but gets them nominated for awards too. Ron had sat in his compartment, watching the continual stream of students pass his door to go and talk to Crow. Not one of them even gave him a second glance. He shouldn't be surprised really, his own family would probably do the same. His father and Bill both worked with Crow's goblin father. As far as Ginny was concerned, Harry Crow could do no wrong. The twins took extra lessons with Crow and thought this made him a great guy, surely proving beyond doubt they were both nuts. Penelope was very close to her Ravenclaw charges, which probably meant Percy would think the sun shone out their asses. After spending the entire trip from London going over and over the same points again and again, Ron was in one stinker of a mood as the express pulled into a freezing Hogsmeade. Finding himself behind Crow's crowd in the queue for a carriage up to the castle certainly didn't improve that bad mood any. Then Madam Bones and Lord Black appeared, being close enough to hear what they had to say just pushed Ron over the edge. "There was an attack today at the ministry. Your father, Arthur and Bill Weasley were the targets." Hearing that his father and brother had been attacked, again because of Crow, saw a red mist descend on Ron. While everyone else froze to listen to what Lord Black had to say, Ron reacted. "You bastard, my family." He lunged at Crow, only to find himself flying through the air. It was a very brief flight before impacting heavily with the hard, frozen ground. Having the wind knocked out of him left Ron unable to speak. The deadly knife now steadily held mere inches from his face meant he had nothing to say anyway. The anger pouring off the person who was holding that knife probably meant Ron wouldn't have been able to speak even if he could draw breath. He'd never been so terrified in his life. When Crow then spoke, Ron could see he meant every word that was said. "You have previously attacked Hermione, and this is the second time you've had a go at me. This stops here and now. No more excuses or apologies, no more making allowances because you're a Weasley, a family I happen to like. You pull shit like this again against me or mine, it's going to cost you a body part. Is that clear enough for you to understand? I need to hear you say yes because I think you're too stupid to take this warning seriously, and I want witnesses that you clearly understood what any further stupidity is going to cost you." If Ron was in any doubt, Crow's eyes told him this was one bastard who would clearly do exactly as he said. Since he was attached to all his body parts, and wanted to remain so for the rest of his life, he managed to croak a yes, which saw the knife disappear. Ron's troubles were far from over though. An angry Percy dragged him to his feet before Madam Bones had a word with him. "Your father is fine," purely because Barchoke called out a warning, and then pushed Arthur out of the path of a killing curse. Hermione now had her arm around Harry, giving and receiving comfort from the contact. "Amelia, how are our father and Bill?" "Both are okay. Your father was hit with a piece of shrapnel as the curses blasted through the ministry atrium. He's currently being treated in St. Mungo's but in no real danger. Bill has cuts and bruises, though his jacket probably saved him being in the bed next to Barchoke." Percy thought of his own dragon hide jacket that he wore under his robes, a Christmas present from Bill. He also knew his eldest brother and father would both hit the roof when he wrote to them about Ron's latest escapade. He could see homeschooling in Ron's future. Sirius was making sure their family got the full picture. "Barchoke was lying in bed and trying to crack jokes when I left him to come here. Amelia says it's a miracle no one was killed in the atrium. The ministry have all the attackers and are considering what action to take next. This was clearly an attempt to scupper the vote next month. The Goblin ambassador being murdered in the Ministry of Magic could have started another war between us. I didn't want you lot finding out about this in tomorrow's prophet, and I also wanted to give you both the chance to visit Barchoke yourselves. 2 rapid yeses meant Sirius didn't need to say any more. A quick goodbye to their friends had Harry and Hermione ready to leave. They were waiting on Amelia though. The head of the DMLE spotted the second year she had come here to speak with. After approaching him, Amelia made sure to cast a privacy spell. The entire country would know this information by tomorrow, but she only wanted one person to hear it at the moment. Mr. Knott, your father instigated and took part in that attack today. He used the Imperious Curse on 3 people and fired curses during the attack too. You are in no way implicated in this attack. I just didn't want you discovering these facts from tomorrow's prophet, and to offer you the opportunity to return home if you wished. Theo's head was spinning at this news. How could his father do something as stupid as that? If Madame Bones was already so sure of her facts, then his father was heading for Azkaban, leaving him the de facto head of the Knott family. The offer to return home was an incredibly tempting one, but one Theo knew he couldn't accept. Him heading home now would leave a suspicion of guilt attached to his name, something he couldn't allow. He also had a housemate's example of how to handle the exact same situation. He answered as his public status demanded. Thank you for your time, and showing me this courtesy, Madame Bones. I believe I would like to stay, though, if possible, I would like a word with Centurion Crow. As they approached, Theo understood what was required of him here. Draco was doing a superb job of ensuring the Malfoy name wasn't trampled in the mire and forgotten about. He would now need to do the same for the Knotts. He had 2 younger sisters who would now be depending on him. Theo swore not to let them down. With a bow to Harry, Theo said what he needed to. Centurion Crow, I have just been informed my father has been implicated in the attack on your father. I wanted to say this was the first I had heard about it, and that I in no way support my father's actions. Siria's lessons allowed Harry to answer Theo exactly as he needed to, and tradition demanded. Mr. Knott, I think I have made my position on matters like this very clear. Only the guilty should be punished. If it proves necessary, I will publicly reiterate my position. With honor satisfied, Theo headed for the castle while Amelia had a portkey that would take them to St. Mungo's. Spotting the goblin guards outside his father's room certainly reassured Harry, but not nearly as much as seeing him sitting up in bed and talking with his guests. He so wanted to rush forward and hug the person who had raised him, but that would embarrass both of them. He was a centurion after all. Well met, father. Harry never got to say any more. Hermione suffered from no such embarrassments or rank. She shot off his arm and, while mindful of the goblin's injuries, enveloped their father in one of her hugs. She made no attempt to hide her tears either. Well met, father, we were so worried about you. Don't fret, my daughter, I'm fine. I'm only confined to this bed until these healers can make sure I'm not stealing any of their precious golden fountain. They want to ensure they got every last piece out of this old goblin. Master Sharkshard's laughter was joined by Harry's as an exasperated young witch asked a serious question. Father, I understand the nation's language and am slowly learning your culture. Do you think I'll ever master a goblin's sense of humor? That the 3 goblins in the room thought her question was hilarious told Hermione the answer to her question was probably not. The Minister of Magic stood in the background, his conversation with the ambassador immediately put to one side when the goblin's family had arrived. Seeing this young Muggle-born's reaction to Barchoke only hardened Cornelia's resolve that the aftermath of today's attack needed to be met with swift and decisive action on the ministry's part. The minister shuddered to think how bad things could have gone today, and certainly recognized they were extremely fortunate to emerge from this situation with no fatalities and so few serious injuries. What was also spurring Cornelius on was the obvious affection this young witch had for the goblin. He thought it was a fair bet to say that the 2 biggest influences on Harry's life were currently sitting on that bed, and neither of them had roots that were embedded in the magical community. The ministry would respond to this by treating the incident as exactly what it was, an assassination attempt by a member of the Wizengamot on the ambassador of a nation friendly to the government. He thought they had been walking a tightrope before today's events, now they would be embroiled in a battle he'd hoped to avoid, a battle that needed to be won. Had today's attempt been successful, his ministry would have been involved in battles of a far bloodier kind, against goblin steel. The very thought of a golden centurion crow at the front of those goblins, out to avenge the murder of his father, was enough to give the minister nightmares. While the Wizengamot chamber could get brutal, there hadn't been a member killed inside its walls for generations. Cornelius would still speak to Amelia about increasing security for the emergency session they were going to have to call. He had a feeling they just might need it. Thanks for reading. Treason is such an ugly word. Harry Crow. A year ago today I posted the first chapter of my then new story. Harry Crow has since gone on to surpass any and every expectation I had for it. This chapter will push the story past 3.5 million hits and really leaves me with only one thing to say. Thank you so much for reading my efforts. I would also like to thank everyone who offered the good wishes as my family gained a daughter-in-law last week. Everything went off without a hitch with even the weather gods smiling on the happy couple. Really important when you're getting married in Central Park. Chapter 54. Hermione felt a sense of real contentment, and slowly began to realize why. She was waking up snuggled into Harry. They had left the hospital last night and Sirius had brought them to Crawley. Dobby was soon whipping up something for them to eat as they told their story to her mum and dad before both she and Harry headed off to bed. Her last memories were of checking to see if Harry was okay with what had happened, and she supposed they had then fallen asleep together. Morning, looks like someone didn't make it back to their own bed. She gave Harry a peck on the cheek in greeting. Hermione was happy to be here though nervous about the circumstances that led to it. I hope it was Mum who put this blanket on us, and not one of the elves. I would hate Mum or Dad to think we were sneaking about. Betsy arrived with a pop. Not to worry, mistress, the missies covered both of you after finding you sleeping. Betsy and Dobby weren't sure what to do. We didn't want to wake mistress because she looked so peaceful. That's fine, Betsy, you did exactly the right thing. 2 glasses of orange juice appeared on Harry's nightstand as Dobby got in on the act. They sat up in bed, drinking juice and discussing the upcoming day. I don't think we can return to Hogwarts today. You heard the minister last night. Nott is going on trial today at an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot. I need to make an appearance as Centurion Crow, and be at father's side. I want to be there too, perhaps Sirius will take me. Harry thought that was a good idea and agreed they should ask him, before voicing his concerns about another matter. If they went after my father, I'm worried they might think your parents are a softer target. We know they can't get anywhere near this house, not without the nation rushing squads of warriors to Crawley. It's when Dan and Emma are outside of here I'm worried about. A knock at the bedroom door saw Emma enter. She was smiling as she sat on the bed beside them. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard our names mentioned just before I knocked. Is there anything we need to know? Nothing specific, I'm just worried about you both when you leave the safety of this house. I don't know if we could ward where you work, perhaps emergency portkeys would be a better option. It's certainly something I'll be talking with Father about. It may be nothing, but far better to be careful and put some precautions in place. You and Barchoke haven't steered us wrong yet, Dan, and I will certainly take your advice on this matter. I hate to ask this, but I think it's something we need to talk about, since it would have such an effect on all of us. What would have happened if the attack yesterday had been successful? Harry understood why Emma was asking this question. It didn't make answering it any easier. Hermione burrowing into his side gave him the support needed to deal with this. Politically, it would have depended on the Ministry's response. If they had then gone after the Death Eaters, and really sorted the problem, they might have been able to avert a war. Otherwise, Centurion Crow would be right at the front of the fight. At that point, the Grangers would be better getting out of the country. You would be right in the middle of a war that wasn't yours. Never, Harry. Harry gently placed his finger on her lips, stopping his mate before she could get a head of steam up. Hermione, don't you remember, we had this discussion. Goblin females can't be warriors, as a witch you're underage, and, as for muggles, it's not their fight. I would need all three of you well out of it. She removed Harry's finger, determined to have her say. The discussion I choose to remember is the one where I said you couldn't ask that of me, anything but that, Harry. Having asked the question more to discover what would happen to Harry if he lost his father, his answer had taken her aback. Emma could see the raw emotion expressed between them. She also thought it was better if this was openly discussed amongst all of them. Would you really fight against witches and wizards, Harry? A wizard murdered my mum and dad. If another wizard then assassinated my father, I would certainly have cause to. I'm a centurion though, and Hermione was present the day I swore a blood oath to defend the nation. If the nation goes to war, I'll do the same as every one of its centurions and warriors, I will fight. Hermione had, of course, known how Harry would react if the nation went to war. She gave her mother another piece of information to help save her worrying too much. Both Amelia and the minister knew what Harry would do, too. You could see it last night at the hospital. That's why this will be dealt with very quickly. The ministry is desperate to show Harry and the nation they can take care of this problem. Dan then sauntered into Harry's room. Politics before breakfast. I thought you two would have been fencing by now. It was a sheepish Hermione who answered her father. We overslept. Well, let's get changed to meet the day and then have breakfast together. Sirius will be here soon and it will be interesting to see what the prophet makes of yesterday. We got so used to reading your newspaper that Dobby now gets us a copy. It actually helps that we have met a lot of the people that are mentioned daily in its pages. Taking that as her cue to go to her own room, Hermione scooted out of there to exchange her pajamas for something more suitable to go down to breakfast with. She needn't have worried though. Her father was much more concerned with asking Harry a question about the ramifications of yesterday than saying anything about her falling asleep in her mate's arms. Do you really think there would have been a war between wizards and goblins? We've been prepared for one since I entered Hogwarts, Dan. I've been breaking ministerial laws right, left and center, and have only been getting away with it because the ministry doesn't want to acknowledge that I'm a goblin. That they're now actually changing some of those laws is what prompted yesterday's attack, a backlash from bigoted purebloods desperate to put a stop to these reforms. This was something neither parent could remember hearing from Harry before, leading Dan to ask the obvious question. Why would you deliberately break ministerial laws? We knew Voldemort wasn't really dead, and his Death Eaters were all poised in important positions awaiting his return. The ministry didn't have this information because Dumbledore kept it a secret, and we couldn't tell them because goblins are barred from interfering in wizarding affairs. Had Voldemort returned and then risen to power, the nation would certainly have gone to war when he then turned his attention onto Gringotts. This was the lesser of two evils for us, and had been working far better than we could have dared hope, up until yesterday. The mere thought of her boy having to go to war had tears forming in Emma's eyes. Quote ellipsis. But why you, Harry? Why does it always have to be you who's in danger? A surprisingly strong arm slipped around Emma's shoulders. Quote ellipsis. Because I'm the only one who can, Mum, the ministry wouldn't give a shit about what happened to any other goblin. Lifting her hand, she tenderly brushed his long black hair away from his face. I've only just gotten a son, I can't lose him, I won't lose him. Tell me this is going to be sorted without a war. As Hermione said, the ministry are desperate to appease us. Not is certainly going down, as will anyone who helped him, but it's what they do about the Death Eater problem that will really determine how this turns out. Not was a member of the Wizengamot, at the very heart of the government, the minister really has to take action to ensure that can't happen again. Whether that same Wizengamot will allow him to could determine all our futures. That's why Hermione and I decided to give Hogwarts a miss today. We really need to be there. Will it be safe? I think the only blood spilled on the floor will be political. Amelia will have her auras there to make sure of that, otherwise I wouldn't be letting Hermione anywhere near the place. Harry had lowered his voice as he said that last part, but obviously not enough. I heard that, Crow, we'll discuss it over breakfast. What's keeping you lot? A now dressed Hermione re-entered the room to find her tearful mother holding on to Harry and her dad looking worried. Seriously, I leave you alone for a few minutes and my mum makes a move on my boyfriend. Mrs. Granger, kindly unhand my mate. Hermione's smile let them all know this was her attempt at humor. Unable to resist, Dan reached out and ruffled his daughter's hair before cracking a joke. Seriously, I think that Padma Patil is a bad influence on you. Oh, it's not Padma, that was me trying out my goblin sense of humor. For some reason, this just cracked Harry up with laughter. It wasn't that funny. Okay, Harry, enough. This was just making him laugh all the harder though. You're finally getting it, Hermione, you're more goblin than you think. With that, Dan and Emma headed off to get themselves ready for their day, leaving the daughter impatiently tapping her foot as Harry still rolled about the bed with laughter. Both thought that, after the last 24 hours, laughter was exactly what Harry needed. Harry and Hermione missing at breakfast inside Hogwarts was certainly noticed. Most had now heard his father had been attacked in the Ministry, though it wasn't until the prophet arrived that all the details became known. Ron was so upset, he really couldn't face his breakfast. There was his father's picture on the front page, the signs of battle all around him as Arthur Weasley publicly thanked Ambassador Barchoke for saving his life. Homeschooling was looming for Ron. After attacking the son of the goblin who was the only reason his father was still alive, that wasn't what was really leaving him uninterested in food though. He had charged Crow in a rage and swung his best punch, connecting with nothing but air. Ron still didn't know how he ended up flying through that same air as it all happened so fast. Crow though was in total control of every move he made, and that left Ron Weasley with no appetite. Not only had he believed Crow when he said that next time it would cost him a body part, Ron now knew with utter certainty that he would be helpless to stop Crow carrying out his threat. The lesson that Crow was not to be messed with had finally sunk into his thick skull. He just hoped it wasn't too late and he could still remain at Hogwarts. Theo Knott was currently questioning his decision to stay at Hogwarts. The entire school now knew what his father had attempted. He felt as if the walls were closing in on him. Help actually came from an unexpected source. Pansy put a comforting hand on his arm before offering some words of hope. It will get better, Theo. Trust me, I know. Providing you had nothing to do with this, Harry won't hold a grudge, and we both know the rest of Hogwarts will follow his lead. He's even helping Draco and me, and that after Lucius almost got all of them killed with that bloody diary. Millicent thought this would be a good time to confirm some strange rumors she'd heard, and perhaps divert a little of their house's attention away from Theo. Is it true then that they even have the two of you acting like a pair of muggles? The smile and enthusiasm that Pansy answered with was a shock to everyone who was now listening, which included most of Slytherin House. We spent New Year's Eve at a private party organized by Lord Black. Yes, it was on a muggle boat and all the staff were muggles too. We spent that evening being served delicious food and dancing to a wonderful band while cruising up and down central London. At midnight, there were fireworks along the embankment and it was easily the best party I've ever been to. The waiters served us these fruit cocktails that were non-alcoholic and simply divine. They even had little paper umbrellas sticking out them. I actually saved a couple as souvenirs when Hermione told me they would just be binned. Her mum was taking pictures and we'll see them when they return. Pansy trailed off at that, not wanting to remind Theo why the couple weren't currently in the castle. These remarks coming from the pablood Princess Pansy Parkinson silenced the Slytherin table, then Daphne got in on the act too. My young sister and I had a wonderful time at Lord Black's engagement party. Are you saying New Year's was better than that? Oh Daphne, London is so much bigger than just the bits we normally see. Beautiful too. It was such an intimate and romantic evening, and starting the new year dancing with Draco made it one of the best experiences of my life. That Pansy spoke so glowingly of something that was, in effect, Muggle certainly alerted a few Slytherins to the not-so-subtle changes that were beginning to affect all of them. Padma and Luna were busy reading the part where the reporter had interviewed a witch that Barchoke had been injured saving, or rather saving both the witch and her young daughter. Both girls had no trouble imagining Barchoke putting his life on the line to save a child. It got better as they read, since it turns out it was the little girl's birthday and, after a special treat, she had just been heading back home from having lunch with her Auror father in the Ministry restaurant. Both girls knew how goblins felt about a person's birthday and reading that would certainly perk Barchoke up. The now 4-year-old witch could be seen peeking round from where she was hiding behind her mother as the press photographer had taken their picture. It had taken all Barchoke's persuasive powers to have him entering the Wizengamot chamber without being accompanied by a squad of warriors. Ragnik had been incensed over the assassination attempt on the nation's ambassador. He had managed to convince the director that, with his son at his side and their assistant ambassador at his back, he would be safe. Barchoke's arm was currently in a sling. Both sets of healers didn't want him using it for a day or so to give his shoulder time to heal. Harry was in his Centurion uniform, with his helmet tucked under his arm as he walked beside his father. Those green eyes scanned the entire chamber as he effortlessly appeared every inch the warrior who was alert for any threats. Bill was behind them with his father waiting inside the chamber. That there were only 3 chairs at the table set aside for them was immaterial. Harry placed his helmet on the table before taking a watchful position behind his now seated father. None in the chamber could miss the statement that was being made here, just as none could object to it. It would be difficult to justify removing someone's bodyguard when a member of this very chamber had already tried to kill him. That his bodyguard was the boy who lived would make any decision along those lines doubly difficult, if not bloody impossible. Amos opened the proceedings before adding that he was really pleased to see their 3 guests fit and able to attend here today. Taking the line of ignoring Harry's presence set the tone for everyone else. It was then Amelia's turn to move the proceedings forward, not appearing from the floor, shackled to a chair and inside an iron cage certainly achieved that. Yesterday afternoon, an attempt was made to assassinate the ambassador of a sovereign nation friendly to this government, an act that could have seen our society plunged into war. 3 of the attackers were under the Imperious Curse, a fact that has since been verified by questioning all 3 while under Veritaserum, something they voluntarily agreed to. As our laws justly state, these 3 were not responsible for their actions and will face no criminal charges. This was greeted with nods of agreement and a few calls of, "Here, here." Theodore Knott Sr. is an entirely different matter. He too claimed to be under the influence of the Imperious, though exhibited none of the symptoms. He also refused to be questioned under Veritaserum, claiming this was his right as a member of the Wizengamot. While correct that Wizengamot members can claim their word should be believed, there is one situation that cuts right through that privilege. Harry's hand was resting on the hilt of his sword, his grip tightened as he noticed others slowly making their way into the chamber, only relaxing when realizing that Amelia had wisely decided to flood the chamber with auras. With his mate, father and godfather here today, Harry thought that was an outstanding decision. Amelia's next sentence provided Harry, and the entire chamber, with their first clue as to why she thought this action was necessary. She approached the prisoner and spoke directly to him. Theodore Knott, I am giving you this final opportunity to voluntarily accept Veritaserum, otherwise I shall be forced to charge you with treason. This started uproar amongst the chamber, an uproar that soon died down as all the extra aurors made the presence known. I would remind this chamber that treason is defined as trying to illegally overthrow the government, a charge that could easily apply in this case. I would again like to remind this chamber that there is only one possible sentence if someone is found guilty of treason, the choice is Theodore Knott's to make. Knowing that truth serum would soon expose his guilt, and that the penalty for treason was death, Theodore conceded to the only option now open to him and accepted the serum voluntarily. After asking a few questions to ensure the serum was working effectively, Amelia then got right to the meat of the matter. Did you cast the Imperious Curse on 3 people to attack Ambassador Barchoke? Yes. With that admission of using an unforgivable curse, his fate was already sealed. Amelia though pressed for more. Why did you do that? I am a pureblood, I will not have goblin filth living next to me like an equal. Was anyone else involved or aware of your plan? No, I approached a few like-minded people about striking back at these creatures, every single one of them wanted nothing to do with anything I was planning. From a professional point of view, there was something about the attack that troubled Amelia. Here was her chance to satisfy that curiosity. After using the Imperious to get 3 people to attack, why did you then get involved yourself? I hadn't intended to, but the goblin blew the attack before it could be sprung. I was observing when I saw the younger Weasley with his back to me, I couldn't resist. The blood traitor moved at the wrong moment and all I hit was the fountain. Then I was under fire from all sides and woke in a cell. So you intended just to watch as all 3 were murdered? Yes. It was then Amelia slipped in the question that was the main reason behind filling the chamber with her auras. Were you yourself under the influence of the Imperious Curse when you took the Dark Mark? Before any objections could be raised, the entire chamber heard Knott's one-word answer that would redefine the map of British magical society. No. Those auras were now needed as Amelia faced an angry backlash, with shouts and threats coming from the Wizengamot members. Why was that question asked? It has no bearing on this trial. As order was being restored, the minister himself stepped forward to answer the chamber. In her role as head of the DMLE, Madame Bones is responsible for the safety of everyone in this chamber. From the chief warlock to those in the public gallery, all fall under her remit. She approached me with a method of greatly assisting her department as they carry out their work, not because she needed my permission but simply to warn of the implications this would bring with it. With ministerial backing, she intends to see wards erected around the Ministry of Magic to ensure an incident like yesterday will never happen again, because no Mark Death Eater will be able to pass through the wards. Fearing that this was a massive lurch to the light, one of the moderates posed a question. Wouldn't that just mean the people involved yesterday would have been placed under the Imperious Curse outside the wards? Amelia had an answer prepared for this eventually. It's no secret I already have these wards installed around my home. With Master Auror Moody and some Auror volunteers we tested that very theory last night. In every single case, passing through those wards affected the person under the curse. Some were then able to throw it off while all were affected enough for their behavior to be noticeably different from what could be considered normal. As this was sinking in, Amelia had something else she wanted to say. I would like to take this opportunity to personally and publicly thank Ambassador Barchoke for his swift and courageous actions yesterday. Assassination attempts aside, one of my auras almost losing their wife and child in the ministry atrium is not something I could ever tolerate. Swift action has to be taken to ensure people can walk about their ministry in safety. I'm simply doing the job I'm paid to do. Personalizing the attack halted most of the objections as members considered those occasions when their own families had visited the ministry. This tactic was never going to work with the hardcore amongst the Dark members, they had simply too much to lose. What of those who had the Dark Mark forced upon them? Should they be punished because of the actions of one individual? This was a question Cornelius knew would certainly be asked. His answer would decide if he was still minister by the end of today. Amelia's departmental remit already made her responsible for the wards protecting the Ministry of Magic. The only way to stop this ward replacement was to remove her from that position, something the minister had just made clear he had no intention of doing. The chamber would then have to remove him first to get to Amelia, again something Cornelius was hoping to avoid. It is possible to allow specific people through the wards, though history provides us with a warning of what can happen when security is breached with the case of the Trojan horse. Troy's walls protected the city until they allowed their enemies access. Since neither myself nor Madame Bones held our current positions when the Death Eater cases were being dealt with, a certain level of reassurance would need to be reached before we employed this method. Namely, answering the last question Knott was asked, while under the effects of Veritaserum. There it was, out in the open, but Cornelius had more to say. We are aware that specific methods can be deployed to render Veritaserum ineffective, especially knowing the question to be asked and having time to prepare, therefore this questioning would have to be carried out today. It appeared as if the numbers of auras present had doubled, which was probably the only thing keeping people in their seats. The minister held his hands up for silence and hoped he could placate the chamber with his next statement. I realize we are practically forcing members to accept this, but, since we inherited this problem, I can't see any other solution. What would be the point of wasting your time barring all the windows and doors if you then basically invited an enemy such as Knott into your home? I also realize that, historically Wizengamot members have been exempt from being forced to answer questions under Truth Serum. I have no intention of breaking that history. Any member who feels the indignity of answering this question under Truth Serum is just too much may leave this chamber with no stain on their character, safe in the knowledge that their family seat will be here waiting on their heir. Cornelius and Amelia both knew that forcing this issue could start a war, the very thing they were desperately trying to avoid. By leaving those marked with a way out, they hoped this could be accepted without the battle that would surely come with backing them into a corner. They weren't looking to create any martyrs to the pureblood cause here, just isolate them so they could no longer play any major roles in their society. The ministers, no stain on their character, would be the official version. People would make their own minds up over those who would rather leave than answer the particular question under Veritaserum. Harry had a long discussion with his father over what might happen today. This was more than they expected to get. A slight nod was all the indication Harry needed to speak. The minister had just handed him a golden opportunity to get their point across. Minister, could I be allowed to say a few words? He took the silence that followed as permission and put their ideas forward. The ministry are to be commended for taking such a fair stance on what is an impossible situation. I would like to bring to this chamber's attention a matter that fits nicely into what is being discussed here. Last night, Madam Bones travelled to Hogwarts to ensure Theo didn't discover what his father had been involved in by reading about it in this morning's Prophet. Theo's first reaction was to apologize to me, saying he had no idea what his father had been planning, something we heard confirmed earlier. I know Mr. Knott has yet to be sentenced, but could we consider his innocent family when that time comes? Theo would appear to be nothing like his father and could be a great asset one day in this chamber. It would be a shame to deprive all of us of that because of his father. When Harry asked to speak, Cornelius wasn't sure what to expect. The minister was as surprised as everyone present by the lad's request, only to be blown away by his follow-on. I also understand young Pauline Knott is down to attend Hogwarts in September. With 2 of the 3 members of the selection committee currently in this chamber, I would like to put her name forward as a candidate for a Potter scholarship. Hermione was sitting in the public gallery, so proud of her Harry. As Harry had said to Mum this morning, he really was the only one who could do this. These may be mostly Barchoke's words, but they were far more effective being spoken by his son. She had to nudge the godfather though. Sirius had gotten so caught up in the proceedings that he forgot he had a part to play. I would certainly support that nomination. Too many of our children are tarred with the same brush as their parents. That statement coming from Lord Black carried a lot of weight. All knew his parents had been as dark as their family name implied. Amelia, too, was caught off guard from this approach. She had to answer though. I agree in principle with that suggestion, although we will have to look at all the candidates. One glance at Harry and she knew Pauline Knott would be receiving a Potter scholarship, even if he had to pay for an extra one himself. That's very magnanimous of you, Harry. I don't think so, Minister. What we were hoping to see here today was justice being done, and we're confident it will be. Vengeance on innocence is not something we seek or support. Harry had once more surprised the chamber. They were expecting the goblin stance to be that everyone possible be punished for this attack on their ambassador. It is common knowledge I receive extra lessons in defense, but my favorite subject since before starting Hogwarts has always been history. Our current professor is always quoting that if we don't learn from our history, we're doomed to repeat it. In 1612, Dreyfus Binns slaughtered innocent goblins and was tried, then sentenced for his crimes. His son Donald was almost as bad as his father, resulting in him being barred from Gringotts for life. Cuthbert Binns committed none of the crimes his father and grandfather were infamous for, yet circumstances saw him being punished too. A bitter and twisted Cuthbert Binns ended up doing more harm to the nation than the rest of his family combined. The nation has no wish to create any more enemies, though it always has room for more friends. Everyone in the chamber was glad of Harry's interruption. It gave them the moment needed for tempers to cool and reactions to be considered. The points he had raised also added another dimension to the situation. No one doubted what he had said here had just protected the Knott family, and also spread that protection to others. If the Knotts were to be treated as innocents, then no blame would be attached to the sons and daughters of those who had to leave this chamber for the last time today. It also unfortunately gave the truth serum time to wear off Knott Sr. With nothing left to lose, he was determined to have his say. Stay away from my family, you bastard. Not content with being the son of a mudblood, you stand there claiming to be kin to that creature next to you. Both of you should be put down like the animals that you are. Amelia hit the prisoner with a silencing curse, sparing them from listening to any more of that bigoted bile. Harry felt compelled to answer that accusation though. We obviously have different ideas of what an animal is. Personally, I think a person who fires the killing curse at a toddler doesn't even deserve to be classed as an animal. That Tom couldn't even do the job properly makes your so-called Dark Lord an incompetent asshole too. Amos wanted to stand and applaud that statement. Instead he concentrated on doing his job. Since Theodore Knott has already confessed to his crimes, we can move directly on to sentencing. As the charge of treason wasn't brought forward, and no one was killed, the accepted punishment for using unforgivable curses and attempted murder would be life in Azkaban. Do we have anyone in this chamber who disagrees with that sentence? Giving plenty of time to allow for any objections, Amos then brought his gavel down as Knott's fate was sealed. The minster's mind had shot forward and focused on something he just felt the time was right for attempting now. As a still silence Knott disappeared into the floor, Cornelius made the snap decision and just went for it. Before we ask those members carrying the mark for their decision, I would like to put something to this chamber first. On the 5th of February, this chamber is scheduled to make a very important decision. Since I fear some members might choose not to be here when that vote is cast, I would like to offer this chamber the alternative of voting on this today. A decision of this magnitude should not pass or fail in this chamber due to what could be considered a technicality. Even Amelia and Amos were left stunned at this move. While she herself thought that, without any marked Death Eaters in the chamber, the vote was now a certainty to receive a positive response, Cornelius clearly didn't want to hand ammunition to those who opposed it. They changed the wards to guarantee the vote, was an accusation Amelia could already envisage being made against them. Amos had quickly checked through the rule book to see if this move was legal. Providing the chamber agreed unanimously to hold the vote today, it was. Since they were all here, including the goblin representatives, it was agreed to proceed. One of the members stood and directed a question toward Amos. Since the proposed Baron is actually here amongst us, could he be asked what his intentions would be if the award were to be made? Amos glanced toward Harry, who nodded that he was quite prepared to answer, and did. We in no way wanted to be presumptuous and just assume the award was going to be made, so discussions have only taken place in the loosest possible sense. We have my godfather's wedding, a possible ball and our summer break from Hogwarts to arrange. Part of those holidays would definitely be spent living in Kingussie. It would certainly be somewhere Hermione and I would think of as home. That answer went down very well with those inclined to say yes. A question was then posed to Barchoke about opening a Gringotts branch in Hogsmeade. After confirming they were very keen to do so, the Goblin Ambassador then answered the follow-on question about goblins living amongst wizards as honestly as he could. Our two nations have been separated for centuries. I don't think any of us are quite ready to be living cheek by jowl this time next week. Again, without attempting to prejudge any decision reached here, I made tentative inquiries to the proposed Baron of Kingusi about the possibility of some goblins living in his glen as a first step. We goblins don't use crystal balls, but I would foresee a Gringotts branch opening in Hogsmeade long before any goblins even thought about settling there. Our whole approach to this would be to take things very slowly, giving all of us time to get used to the new situation. The contrast between the demented and bigoted ravings of their former member, Not, compared to the reasoned thoughts of Barchoke, couldn't have been starker, or more thought-provoking. To the majority of the chamber, Not's views were unpalatable, yet the Goblin Ambassador was painting him a picture that they could all live with. When the questions moved to possible arrangements for the summer ball, it was hard to contain the excitement at what was effectively the Goblins' table. The decisive yes vote had those in the public gallery applauding loudly, with Hermione and Sirius jumping up and down while holding onto each other in sheer joy. The expressing of joy was confined to the public gallery though, those on the floor of the chamber understood the session wasn't over yet. It was left to Amos to bring the proceedings back on track. We have one more piece of business that must be dealt with before this session can be closed. Having already heard the question that would be asked, and the chamber giving a guarantee that only this question will be asked, would any member like to forego their Wizengamot privileges and voluntarily accept Veritaserum? While this question was left hanging, Cornelius gave them notice of the time scale involved. Madam Bones hopes the new wards can be installed over the weekend, beginning on Friday evening. This will be the only opportunity to accept this offer. The rest of today will see every branch of the ministry made the same offer, starting in the Auror department. With no one making a move to accept the offer, Amos was left with no other option but to bring down his gavel, ending the session and also any Death Eater involvement in the Wizengamot. It wasn't so much a victory for the light, more of a disastrous day for the dark. The Goblin party waited until they had reached the privacy of Arthur's new office before celebrating what was a stunning result for them. Sirius and Hermione soon arrived, with the latter immediately finding herself wrapped in a familiar strong pair of arms while being hoisted up into the air by her jubilant centurion mate. Harry then lowered her until their lips met. I've never kissed a baron before, I could certainly get used to that. I've never kissed an Order of Merlin holder before either, Dumbledore really wasn't my type. This started Barchoke laughing, both at his son's joke and his daughter's reaction to it. Did you forget what else was settled in there today? Congratulations, my daughter, I'm a very proud father, a father who now has 2 Order of Merlin, first class, holders in his family. Hermione had actually forgotten what else was approved today. The awards were a package deal, but all the emphasis had been on Harry's barony. That Hermione had actually forgotten something saw Bill and Sirius laughing. This was the first time either had experienced the phenomenon of a gobsmacked Miss Granger. It was into this oasis of mirth that Cornelius, Amelia and Amos entered. They hadn't been experiencing much laughter as they worked their way through the ministry to make the Darkmark exemption offer. Unsurprisingly, they had no takers so far. What was losing your job when compared to a stay in Azkaban? Arthur, I just spoke to your staff. While no one volunteered to take truth serum, I can't see you having anyone missing from work on Monday. Arthur graciously accepted the minister's backhanded compliment, but it was a bowing Barchoke who offered his nation's gratitude. Minister, that was masterfully played today, on all fronts. A smiling Cornelius was still coming to terms with the rush that pushing through this legislation had provided. He had a definite spring in his step and felt at least 10 years younger. Thank you, Ambassador. You and your son certainly helped. Sorry for just dropping it on everyone like that. I just didn't want the awards to be tainted by people claiming we rigged the vote by barring the Death Eaters. All 6 who received awards today thoroughly deserved them, as today's vote proved. It also ended beyond doubt that anyone who claimed they'd been under the Imperious curse when working for Voldemort was lying. We plan to marginalize them by taking away the power base, meanwhile keeping our eyes open that none of them try and do a Malfoy on us. Amos was pretty certain that wouldn't happen. They would be risking so much that I think they'll play the longer game here. Both Malfoy and Not are now in Azkaban, and I'm assuming the Not vaults will be frozen too. He attacked a Goblin Ambassador. The nation had to react. Barchoke's grin showed that the goblins had all different levels of reacting. His wife was served with her 24-hour notice, though we do have an advisor helping with her choices. An apology was also offered from Amelia. Sorry Barchoke, for announcing these wards without confirming it with you first. You offered this service previously, and I'm hoping the offer is still open. Of course, Amelia, Friday evening suits us just fine. Are we erecting a new ward scheme just here, or is St. Mungo's included too? It was actually Cornelius who answered. We thought to leave St. Mungo's for now. Like you said, Ambassador, we want to take things slowly and give people the chance to get used to this new idea that Death Eaters are not welcome in our society. Now, if you will excuse us, we have many more departments to cover before people begin leaving for home. The minister then led Amelia and Amos back out of the office to the 6 Aurors who were accompanying them on their historic and momentous task. It was only still having to take potions for his wound that gave Barchoke a valid excuse for escaping the director's office without having to consume at least 1 tankard of grog. With the reactions his news sparked in Gringotts though, Barchoke fully expected the nation's celebration still to be ongoing in 2 days when his potion regime ended. This gave Barchoke some time to spend with his son and daughter, which had led directly to where they were now. Both he and Harry had loved Hermione's idea, so his son knocked on the door. The door was answered by a wizard who appeared to be in his mid-20s, his wary expression changing instantly when he noticed just who was at his door. Ambassador Barchoke. Sir, I can't thank you enough for yesterday. If you hadn't been there. Auror Dugan, every day you report for duty, you are prepared to do exactly what I did yesterday. I know you were on duty several times at Hogwarts, spending your time there helping to protect my son and daughter. Between warriors, no thanks are ever needed. His wife had headed for the door as soon as she heard the ambassador's name mentioned. Andrew, don't keep these people at the door. They are certainly welcome in our house. Andrew Dugan rather sheepishly held out his hand to Barchoke. My wife is of course right. I was just so shocked to see you standing there. You are indeed very welcome in this house. It was handshakes all around as the trio were led into a rather plain but certainly homely living room. A certain young witch was sitting playing with some stuffed animals. This is Danielle, our daughter. On hearing her mother say her name, the youngster looked up to see they had visitors. There was no hesitation on her part as she rose from the floor and headed straight for Barchoke, pointing to his sling. Does it still hurt? Sitting to be on the same level as the child, Barchoke gave a merry chuckle. It did, but not any longer. I have to wear this for a couple of days. On hearing that it didn't hurt, Danielle then did what she wanted to do in the first place and hugged the person who her mummy had said saved them both. Thank you. There was hardly a dry eye in the house, though Harry was smiling at how well his father was adapting to receiving hugs. You are very welcome, young lady. I just hoped it didn't spoil your birthday. To a goblin, that is a person's most important and special day. With complete innocence, the now 4-year-old witch asked the nice little man a serious question. What's a goblin? That led to a smile and a knowing look in Harry's direction. My little boy used to ask me that very same question. Not wanting this to turn into a blubberfest, Hermione slipped her hand into Harry's bag and withdrew the wrapped present they had bought for Danielle. She knelt beside her father and the little witch. We didn't want yesterday to spoil your birthday and brought you this. Danielle had been taught proper manners, so looked pleadingly toward her parents for permission to accept the gift, permission that was soon forthcoming. She politely accepted the gift and then her manners ran out. Danielle frantically ripped the paper off to discover what was inside. She squealed, "Thank you," before rushing off to introduce her new stuffed unicorn to the rest of her collection. Her mother looked on in awe. How did you know? Danielle had unicorns on the jacket she was wearing yesterday, and what little girl doesn't like stuffed animals? Hermione was still on her knees as Danielle then introduced her new human friend to all of her stuffed animals. Watching as Hermione interacted effortlessly with the child brought a lump to both goblins' throats, Daniel's long black hair sending Barchoke and Harry's thoughts years into the future. The Dugans were also watching the scene but had a different thought in their minds. Their daughter had no idea what a goblin was, far less possessing any knowledge of the prejudices that were linked to that race. They silently swore Danielle would never learn any of those prejudices from them. Thanks for reading. Arking UC home. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I write purely for my own enjoyment, making no money from this venture and claim only my imagination as my own. I always strive to be original but, given the amount of HP fan fiction out there, almost everything has probably been done before. Chapter 55. The catcalls and whistles didn't bother Sirius one bit, it took McGonagall's iciest tone to garner his attention. Lord Black, I know she's your fiancé but Professor Hobson is still a member of staff. Kindly save this type of behavior for when you don't have so many young students as witnesses. Sorry Professor, but it was my godson's fault. The mischievous glint in Sirius's eyes told everyone he wasn't in the slightest bit sorry for his total breach of etiquette. Harry said he'd never kissed an Order of Merlin winner before, and could hardly wait to try it with Hermione yesterday. I couldn't let my godson have one up on me, that just wouldn't be fair, so I had to experience it with fiancé for myself. Those in the hall for breakfast had initially practically ignored Sirius, being far more interested in the 2 returning students he'd escorted back to Hogwarts. That was soon reversed though as the marauder approached the staff table and then greeted his fiancé by snogging her breathless. Any confusion over Sirius's statement was soon cleared up as the owls began to deliver today's edition of the Prophet. With everything that had happened in the Wizengamot chamber yesterday, it would have been understandable if the Prophet had struggled over what headline to lead with. The newspaper though knew exactly what its readers would want to know first. Baron who lived will call King UC home. That one line uttered by Harry yesterday was enough to convince the Prophet readers their ministry knew what it was doing. Assassination attempts, new goblin laws, non-public orders of Merlin winners and certain people not being able to gain access to the Ministry of Magic paled into insignificance when compared to the news their savior would now be living amongst them. Theo not though scanned the publication to discover where his father was mentioned. The fate that befell the impulsive Death Eater was never in any doubt from the instant his guilt was proven. That Crow had actually spoke to the Wizengamot in the hope of protecting the innocent members of the Knot family was unbelievable. That he'd gone as far as suggesting Pauline for a Potter scholarship was simply mind-blowing. Just mentioning he didn't want the innocents harmed should be more than enough to protect his family from any retaliation. Even the idea that his young sister might end up with the same status as Lovegood or Creevy was hard to believe, but Crow would certainly take a personal interest in whoever was awarded those precious scholarships. Neville and Padma were rather shocked by their news. It was one thing to be nominated for something, they were now faced with the reality that both would be holders of the ministry's top award. Then Neville spotted his gran entering with Padma's parents and it was hugs all round for the family reunion. A real air of celebration began to grip the hall. McGonagall approached and congratulated all the students involved though Augusta had something to add. Professor McGonagall, I want to have a meeting with 5 students in my office this morning. Looking at them, I don't think they'll be fit for classes until after lunch anyway. The extended family had learned a hard lesson before Christmas and were including Parvati in this as well, especially with her mother and father visiting the castle. Augusta was also aware Henrika didn't have a class first thing today so she and Sirius were invited too. There were some glum faces at the Slytherin table as a few individuals contemplated the effect these wards would have on their families. Pansy's contemplation took the girl in a whole different direction, she certainly wasn't glum. Pansy Parkinson was ecstatic, and couldn't wait on the warning bell for their first class. Rather than sit there any longer, she excitedly dragged Draco out of the hall early. They had barely made the corridor when Draco wanted to know what she was up to. What's in the Prophet to put you in such a good mood? Did I miss something? She flung her arms around her betrothed and hugged him tight. That news today has saved us. Word will soon spread of who those new wards affect. When it becomes known that my father is one of those unable to enter the ministry, no family will touch a betrothal between their son and the daughter of Edmund Parkinson. Quote ellipsis. And knowing you're not wanted makes you happy. I'll never understand witches. If no one else will take me, that means you're stuck with our betrothal, and that makes me very happy. Quote ellipsis. And since no one else will want the son of Lucius Malfoy for their daughter, looks like you're stuck with me too. 2 very happy Slytherins headed off hand in hand to their charms class. Neville had never seen his grandmother so happy. He was guessing that she'd been visiting great-uncle Algy, probably to rub his nose in her grandson's achievement. Neville was wrong though, Augusta still had that pleasure to look forward to. After the Wizengamot meeting, she popped into Arthur's office to congratulate Harry and Hermione before following and Barchoke back to Gringotts. She couldn't hold her excitement any longer and just had to tell Neville her news. I visited your mum and dad yesterday and put something the healers had mentioned to me into practice. The healers think both are approaching the stage where we should be giving them targets to aim at. Yesterday I gave them a target that certainly has both of them motivated. The day their son becomes a teenager, he will be one of the guests of honor at a ball where he and his betrothed will both receive orders of Merlin, first class. If Frank and Alice can get themselves healthy enough, they will have places reserved at our table. Padma had her arms around Neville and it was probably just as well. He felt as if his body was going to burst wide open while trying to contain the combination of pride and joy currently coursing through it. Receiving this award was always going to be a great honor. Having his parents there to see him presented with it just pushed his emotions through the roof. To Neville, it didn't matter what the ministry handed him, just having his mum and dad there would be his real reward. The excitement in the room was palpable, and that was before Sirius added to it. If we have our wedding at the start of the holidays, we can be back from our honeymoon in time for my Lady Black to receive her Order of Merlin, first class. Sirius then turned his attention to the portrait of a former head of the Black family, and former Hogwarts headmaster, Phineas Nigellus Black. With my wife by my side, I intend to make the name Black one to be proud of. Considering I have centuries of bigoted assholes like you to make up for, that will be quite a task. The portrait so wanted to hurl abuse at this descendant, standing there proudly boasting he was going to marry this creature and taint the House of Black forever. What held Phineas back was the forces that were arrayed against the mere portrait. The room currently held the head of House Black, the Hogwarts High Inquisitor and also the Hogwarts champion. Phineas was never a stupid wizard, and his portrait contained all his best attributes, so he held his own counsel on this matter as they chatted about weddings, holidays and balls. That didn't mean his eyes weren't boring into this happy group with a hate so hot it should have scorched his canvas. Funnily enough, Phineas Black's views were currently being shared in secret little bands the length and breadth of the country. Never meeting in groups of more than 3 or 4 people each knew could be trusted, they had been drawn together to discuss the dilemma all were now facing. Some had preempted Monday and resigned on the spot, claiming they didn't want to work for a ministry who was more interested in their relations with the goblins than those of their own people would cut little ice with their now former colleagues. Everyone would still know the real reason behind why they left. By denying them access to the ministry, Hogwarts, some of the most influential families in Britain, with St. Mungo's sure to be on that list soon too, they were slowly but surely being corralled in a pen of their own making. That their families were being spared this officially sanctioned form of bigotry left public opinion solidly behind the Ministry of Magic on the matter of these new wards. Their case for objecting had also cleverly been revoked with everyone given the chance to prove they had been forced to take the dark mark, leaving them in a form of limbo. Whatever restrictions were placed on them by this system, it was still far better than having Azkaban as your new address, something that would surely happen if they pushed this attack on their liberties too hard. With Longbottom in charge at Hogwarts and Crow effectively leading the students, their children would be spending 10 months of the year in an environment that deliberately set out to erode their Pureblood beliefs. A Mudblood being awarded an Order of Merlin sent out all the wrong type of messages too, mainly that blood didn't matter. Their entire problem though was exacerbated by them being cut adrift like a rudderless ship. The Dark Lord didn't share power, rather demanded total obedience on pain of death. Only Lucius Malfoy had felt secure enough in his position to step in and take some semblance of control after that fateful Halloween. That Malfoy now resided in Azkaban left them not knowing who to trust, and certainly had none of them wanting to put their name forward to take over that poisoned chalice of a position. When a member of the Wizengamot could be caught, tried and sent to Azkaban in the space of 24 hours, it was clear your family name, bloodlines, fortune, they all meant nothing now. As if that wasn't bad enough, the ministry was being championed in its rush to embrace the light by Fudge, Bones and Diggory. Throw in the goblin connection with the boy who lived and this gave you a formidable force to be reckoned with. In every single case, those meeting agreed that something needed to be done about the situation. The reality was though that, again in every single case, no one wanted to be the person who was going to do something about the situation. It would probably disgust those Pureblood Death Eaters to know that similar secret conversations were taking place deep inside Gringotts. Dragontooth was practically breathing fire while venting his anger. Why would we want to live amongst the human filth? This is all that bastard Crow's doing, and Ragnik is strutting around as if he had discovered a dragon who lays golden eggs. We need to put a stop to this. His father though wasn't impressed by his son's juvenile anger. You need to learn patience, and not go acting on an impulse, or do you want to be considered the same as our fool of a director? Making a human a centurion on nothing more than a whim and then granting friends status to little ugly witches. Disgusting. We need to use finesse here. Your clumsy attempt to injure Crow's bitch will see the spotlight trained on us if anything happens to her. I wasn't trying to injure her, I was trying to kill the witch. How was I supposed to know she was wearing armor? You should have planned and prepared for every eventuality, not jumped in without even knowing anything about the human girl. She's a human girl, and should be sorted on sight for daring to show her face below the bank. What more did I need to know? Bloodfang growled at his son's impudence. It was getting nearly as bad as his impatience. When a being carries a weapon, you never dismiss the danger without very strong evidence telling you that no danger actually exists. You acted the confident fool and she bested you. If that wasn't bad enough you then attempted to murder her, in full view of people we couldn't buy off. His father's voice had risen to a level where Dragontooth knew it was time to lower his head and shut his mouth. To do otherwise would only antagonize his father more. Seeing this allowed Bloodfang to reveal some of the details he was working on to his son. To reverse this disgusting decision of living above ground, and bring down Ragnik, we have to attack the director where he's most vulnerable. He has practically aligned the nation behind Crow and we need to prove to everyone that was a massive mistake. By discrediting Crow, or getting him to leave Gringotts, all Ragnarok's gains will disappear like humans in a dragon pen. It will be quick but painful and certainly bloody. The bloodlust was clearly visible in Dragontooth's features. Crow had been a constant thorn in his side since they were infants. Father, do you really think you can force Crow out of Gringotts? I intend to see him storming out the door, swearing vengeance on goblins. At which point, I may have him killed, depending on whether or not it then suits my plans. The admiration a son had for his father was clear to see, causing Bloodfang to throw his son a bone of comfort. You were at least right about one thing that day. The way to Crow is through his mate. You just went about it all wrong. We need to take our time, let the ugly bitch collect her reward. Let Crow spend the summer with her family, growing closer all the time. When the dust from all this has settled and they have grown complacent, only then will we strike. Those Muggle parents hide behind some of the nation's best wards, but wards that were devised to deny access to wizards. What do you think Crow's reactions will be if these two Muggles are found in their home with their entrails pulled out all over the floor? His son's eyes nearly popped out his head. You want him to know goblins sorted them? Of course I do. How do you think the bitch he calls a mate will react when she finds her parents like that? Knowing they died in agony and at the hands of goblins, she will never pollute our tunnels with her presence again. Mark my words, where she goes Crow will follow. The director himself might even order Crow's extermination. The Centurion knows too much about us and could possibly be persuaded to lead forces against the nation. The bloodlust was back with Dragontooth. I was denied the pleasure of seeing the daughter bleeding on the ground. I want to be the one who guts her even uglier mother. Father, please. This would be a two-pronged attack, with Ragnik facing an unprecedented political backlash that, as a counselor, Bloodfang would be well positioned to exploit. He didn't expect to end up as director this time but could easily see himself in the position of kingmaker. He needed Dragontooth to grow up and get his act together, then perhaps his son might one day claim the title of director for their family. That will depend on the reports I receive about you between now and then. I need to know I can trust you to follow orders before you would be allowed anywhere near this cleansing mission. In another eerie parallel that wasn't Death Eater related, Bloodfang had just handed his son an incentive to improve that was every bit as strong as the one now pushing the Longbottoms to excel. Alice loved watching the intelligence slowly return to the eyes she'd adored for so many years. At the moment though, that intelligence was being masked by the frustration her husband was feeling because his body wouldn't respond as it used to. With slurring and a stammer, it was also difficult for him to verbally get his message across. After a few attempts though, Alice thought she'd deciphered the gist of it. If you can't make it, you want me to go to the ball without you. Frank nodded in relief. It was a short-lived reprieve though. After a kiss from his wife, she reminded him of something. We are a team, Frank. Professionally and personally, together for the good times and the bad. If you're not able to attend, I'll be right by your side. I still think you're being too hard on yourself. Neither of us will ever be the people we were before. As long as I can take your arm and walk beside you into the ministry, that will be more than enough for me. Neither Mum nor Neville will be expecting any more either. Just us being there will make their evening special. She lovingly wiped away the tears that were forming in the corners of his eyes though had no trouble making out what he was saying this time. Forever. That's right, darling, and don't ever forget it. Our son reminds me so much of you. A smiling Frank was pointing at his wife and mumbling, P. At her. Yes, you Longbottom men need a strong witch to pull you out those shyness shells you would seem to be born with, and our son has found himself a real beauty in every sense of the word. She would never let Neville face his troubles alone, just like I'll be there for you. We have time, darling. I'm still sleeping for the most of the day too. We're getting a little better every day though, so just keep looking forward. As the couple embraced, the healer from St. Mungo's was unsure if this latest episode in their healing program was really working. He aired his concerns to the goblin healer standing watching beside him. I don't really understand how raising Frank's anxiety levels will help with his recovery. Present thinking is that this would only hinder his progress. The goblin had been expecting this. While open-minded, this healer still labored under the impression that magic could fix just about everything. Unfortunately, this also meant to them the reverse would also be true. If magic couldn't fix it, then nothing could be done. Their medication may be repairing the damage, but they have to help that process along, and that is hard on them. To help them continue pushing when they feel exhausted, you have to offer some kind of incentive to achieve that level of commitment. Even as they are now, both would be able to walk into that ballroom and sit long enough to see their son and his mate receive their awards. We're pushing them to see how much more they're capable of. Is this a normal part of your treatments? When a limb is injured, even magic can't repair it to the degree where it is working at 100% in mere moments. You need the patient to rest and allow the healing to knit, then exercise to get that limb fully functional again. Repairing organs is no different, so the treatment will be similar. They've had the rest period, now comes the exercise part. As you can see, we carefully monitor the situation to ensure neither overtaxes themselves. The healer was taking a note of everything that was said. He was after all here to learn. Remus had been worried about taking the second-year defense class. None of the rest of Hogwarts had experienced anything like a competent teacher in the subject and had welcomed him with open arms, but they'd had Bill Weasley almost from their first day in the castle. He explained to his students that today would be about determining what level this class were at, joking that he really didn't know how he was going to teach a class with 4 orders of Merlin, first class, holders in it. When Padma joked back, carefully, Remus just had to laugh, and his reaction set a relaxed atmosphere for the rest of the lesson. With the glaring omission of those who'd chosen to have their lessons from Lockhart, this class were actually far ahead of where they were expected to be. Since everyone else he'd taught so far was way behind, this class were actually breathing down the necks of the third years in terms of knowledge and ability. He would have to adjust his lessons accordingly. After the bell, those same 4 award winners hung back, and it was Hermione who removed a ledger-like book out of Harry's bag before offering an explanation. We would normally speak with Professor Weasley about our plans for the Marauders tonight after this lesson. Would you mind taking a look over them for us? Remus was delighted to do so and asked if he could attend too. He was timetabled for first year tomorrow, and this should let him ascertain what level they were at, and possibly skip the introductory lesson he'd needed with the other years. On seeing what they planned to teach the first years, Remus' eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. Had anyone else shown him this, Remus would have been sure he was being pranked. This looks brilliant. Like today though, I think I would rather wait and see you 4 teaching before making any comments or suggestions. Aurora Tonks will be here tonight too. The full moon is at the end of this week, so she'll be covering for a couple of days and needs to know the lesson plans for each class. This earned a smile from Harry. No problem, Professor Lupin. Aurora Tonks has seen us teaching the Marauders before and used to escort Hermione and me to training every morning. We like her. The three nods of agreement left Remus wondering just what he'd let himself in for. When the occupants of the burrow received Percy's owl, none of them were sure how to react to the news Ron had attempted to attack Harry Crow, or Crow's ultimatum on the matter. Unlike his parents, Bill knew Harry was serious with his threat, just like he knew Ron wouldn't have been able to land a blow on Harry. Bill had moved back home for a few days until Barchoke could arrange new wards for the Weasley home, that they had wanted his father dead as much as the Goblin Ambassador shook all of them, and he would be staying at the burrow until those wards could be arranged. The warding of the ministry would now push that back, but Bill wasn't complaining. The director himself had decreed that these wards would be erected at no cost to the Weasley family, citing they were only placed in danger because of his father's job as liaison to the nation. Ragnick felt it only fair that their nation offered a level of protection to those who worked for its best interests. While Arthur clearly worked for the ministry, he was undoubtedly also working to further the interests of both parties. That made Arthur Weasley someone the nation certainly wanted to protect. The three Weasleys present eventually decided Bill would let Ron know his fate when he visited Hogwarts at the weekend. This would also provide some time for their tempers to cool. Neither male Weasley could dissuade Molly from sending her youngest son a howler. Truth be told, neither of them tried that hard. Remus was trying hard to figure out why he was here. These four had the first years hanging off their every word. When they then had their students practicing shield drills as a refresher, the original Marauder almost needed to sit down. Henrika and Tonks had been watching him, waiting on his reaction. Both were now smiling as the Auror offered some solace. Don't take it too hard, Professor, I've been there too. Henrika here thought it would be a good idea if these four went up against some trainee Aurors in a speed and accuracy drill. Just as well they made it best out of three, or we would have left here with egg on our faces. They beat them. Harry called it a draw, but we both know the truth. I felt a bit of a fraud accepting, but I didn't want moral to take a nosedive. Aurors being defeated by 4 second years would have done just that, at least then it would have. Now these four would probably be favorites to win. To tell the truth, I feel a bit of a fraud accepting this Order of Merlin too. I was against going down there in the first place, and then it was those four who killed the Basilisk and Voldemort. I just felt so useless. It was Henrika who quickly rubbished Tonks' doubts. I think Dan Granger said it best. It took the 6 of us down there to accomplish what we did. You've seen their teamwork. Neither you nor I could emulate that in the time we had available. You stood guard over Parvati and me while being prepared to attack Riddle if he truly regained a body. I know those four very well, and they certainly regarded your role down there as crucial, just as I know they would want your reward to be the same as theirs. I agree with Henrika on that point. I'm also going to need both of your help. Unless I can match what the first year are being taught here, I'm going to be the one with egg on my face. I neither have access to this fabulous room nor those dueling dummies. How am I meant to compete? It's not a competition, Remus, this is an after-school club. As club staff sponsor, Henrika was very protective of Crow's Marauders. The first years are learning the practical side of magical fighting here. They're using neither notes nor textbooks. They need to know the theory behind the procedures they're learning here, and also those behind the spells they're using. If you talk it over with the four of them, you could all be teaching the first years the same things, with them then getting a few hours of extra practical experience every week. Remus could instantly see the benefits in that system and knew he would have to change his current plans. Knott's arrival in Azkaban left Rookwood thinking he would have to change his plans, rather the information the convicted Death Eater was providing did. His crime of attempting to kill a pair of Weasleys and a goblin in the Ministry atrium saw Theodore receive a much smoother ride than Lucius had. He still managed to provoke a reaction from Bella though. Something about just how the Ministry and Gringotts were cozying up to each other didn't sit well with any of them. That the goblins had developed wards which wouldn't let those carrying a dark mark past was also a worrying development. It was when he mentioned that the goblins not only knew about their master's Horcruxes, but had been actively searching for them since that fateful Halloween night that had Bellatrix exploding. Her tirade was aimed more at all the thieving goblin bastards she was personally going to torture to death than the person who seemed to just have passed on some very bad news. This was leading Augustus to believe that their master's Horcrux Bella is protecting was currently stored in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. This presented the ex-unspeakable with another set of problems. His initial plan was, once he was outside his cell, to ask Bellatrix to tell him where she'd hidden their master's Horcrux. He was certain a promise to return their master to life would see that information being passed on. Bella would also know that when their master returned he would want his loyal followers beside him. Azkaban would certainly be his first target, especially with all the inside information that would be available to him. Rookwood though was now having thoughts of an entirely different nature, thoughts of how grateful Bellatrix would be if he took her with him. Augustus had never had a willing partner before, not without using the Imperius anyway. He was aware Azkaban would have had a detrimental effect on Bellatrix, but, where he had been no oil painting to begin with, she had been a stunningly beautiful woman before being locked in here. With his intellect and her power, Augustus Rookwood and Bellatrix Lestrange would be a mighty force for the dark. She certainly could be relied upon to be an asset with his attempts to resurrect their master. These thoughts were running through his head as he worked, and those plans he had could be suitably altered to include both of them. 2 was the maximum though, and even that was only because he had access to more blood than Augustus had originally anticipated. Pulling out his teeth provided about the amount he expected, it was his fingers that were supplying all the extra. While extracting his own teeth was every bit as painful as he'd imagined, gripping the tooth with his fingers while attempting to carve a chunk of stone with it was excruciating agony. All his fingers now had permanent grooves worn into them almost to the bone, while the tips were raw and bleeding from grazing off the abrasive stone he was attempting to carve. This would certainly cure him of biting his nails. Apart from the teeth he would be missing, his nails were filed right into his bleeding flesh. Presently he was finding that it was only possible to work on his project 1 day in 3, the other 2 were needed to nurse his hands back into some kind of working order. As well as his blood seeping into the stone as he worked, there was also plenty excess to feed to his straw wand. It wasn't necessary to decide whether the protection medallion was for 1 or 2 people until it was time to carve the protection runes. His current estimate to begin that phase would be around Easter. It may take a few weeks longer for carving the extra runes, but Rookwood was already thinking of the rewards those few extra weeks of pain could bring. One thing Nott's information did cement in his mind though was the date he would attempt his escape. While the ministry celebrated its new orders of Merlin winners, he reckoned that would be the best evening to go for a swim. After the marauders, it was back to the common room and time for their final study session for Master Pitsley's potions class. Hermione was fretting about this one since they had missed his class on Monday. Harry though ran her through the entire procedure and she answered every one of his questions correctly. By this time, they were the only two members of the group left, the rest having headed off to bed already. Hermione then took advantage of this unexpected alone time and snuggled into Harry. When will you find out about the house in Kingussie? Father is having it surveyed and we should hear from him in the next couple of days. What has got you so excited about this house? I have quite a few, you know. She was glad Harry currently couldn't see her face. Hermione was sure she was blushing at how silly her answer would sound. We've stayed together at my house, Gringotts, Padma's, Neville's, Grimmauld and a number of Potter properties. I've enjoyed every one of them but, even with the Potter properties, I always feel as if they belong to someone else. I'm hoping Kingussie feels like home because it's ours. You earned it. We earned it, Hermione, it's all ours. She then let Harry hear her idea. Last year you shared Neville's birthday party because the ball was on the 31st, this summer they're planning it for the 30th. I was hoping we could hold a birthday party for you both the following evening, in our Kingussie home. Hermione was waiting on his laughter but it never came. Instead, Harry lifted her chin and tenderly kissed her lips. I think that is a wonderful idea, our very first party in our very own home. Once we hear from Father we'll know if it's feasible. The house itself might be nothing more than a large cottage which, while fine for us, will hardly be suitable for a large party. The sparkle in Hermione's eyes clearly announced to anyone who knew her that she'd just had an idea. A really good idea. A marquee. It'll be the middle of summer so a marquee will work. That means it doesn't really matter how big our new house is, or what condition it's in, we can still hold a birthday party for you and Neville in Kingussie. After recent happenings, it was nice to concentrate on something relatively normal, for a change. Even though the event was still 6 months away, Hermione was already gripped with excitement at the organizing she would need to do so their first party would be a success. Harry's goodnight kiss blasted all that from her mind. When her mate kissed her like that, Hermione had trouble remembering what day of the week it was. She headed off to her bed wearing a goofy smile, her only thoughts being of how good it would feel while they moved their relationship along as they got older. 4 Ravenclaws were heading down to breakfast. Luna had Moonlight cradled in her arms. The smart Kneasel knew tasty treats would be coming its way soon. Instead of tasty treats though, it sounded as if the hounds of hell were racing through the corridors toward the group. Hearing the demented howling reverberating off the stone walls and seeing Luna struggling to stop Moonlight heading for the hills alarmed the other 3. Harry and Hermione had their hands on the hilts of their swords while Padma's wand was already drawn. Luna was rather quickly moved into the middle of them so the trio could offer some protection to the little blonde with her hands full of panicking cat. To say they were surprised when Ron Weasley came careering around the corner would be an understatement. The source of all noise was right behind him. The volume this thing was broadcasting at meant there was no way to decipher what, if anything, was being said. Ronald obviously had no intention of hanging about to hear any message anyway. As he sprinted past the group, a pair of blades flashed and pieces of parchment then fluttered gently to the floor. The resulting silence was deafening. Moonlight calmed almost at once, appearing embarrassed for scratching her blonde friend who gave her such nice tidbits. What the hell was that? It was a still gasping for breath returning Ron who answered Hermione's question. That was a howler, sent by my mum. The rest of my family are really unhappy with me that I tried to attack Harry after that trouble at the ministry. I'm really sorry about that by the way, I acted without thinking, again. Could you please thank your father for me? That was really decent of him to push Dad away from the killing curse. Harry accepted the obviously genuine apology before having to ask a question in return. Your mother sent that to you? Oh, I was expecting it. Started running the minute I saw the owl drop the bloody thing but it opened and then chased me along the corridor. Mums don't usually do that so Bill must have had a hand in creating this one too. Thanks again for destroying it. I'll need to tell the twins how you managed that. It won't really matter to me as Bill is certain to take me home with him at the weekend. Being homeschooled by my mother is not really something I'm looking forward to. Ron headed off to eat more breakfast. He'd been down early as he only had so many Hogwarts meals left. Ron intended to make the most of every opportunity to stuff his face. Okay, I'm still confused here. This was such an unusual state for Hermione that they could all see it bothered her. Why would a parent deliberately humiliate their child like that? Harry was also left shaking his head. Don't look at me. No goblin would ever use such a device. You've seen Master Sharpshard in action. We goblins like to do our bollockings in person. Even worse though, family matters are only ever discussed amongst family. Broadcasting family business like that to the whole castle is something no goblin would ever do. Luna was the one with the inside information here. Oh, Mrs. Weasley can get so loud you can hear her right across the dale. It's usually when she's shouting at the twins though. They were just about to enter the Great Hall when Padma decided to share her thoughts. Okay, I'll say it, purebloods are just nuts. This had them laughing as they sat down to breakfast though Hermione clearly still had something on her mind. Harry, we've met and certainly now heard Mrs. Weasley. Can we talk to Bill and maybe get Ron a reprieve? As bad as he's been, Ron's more of an annoyance rather than dangerous. I just don't think anyone deserves that fate. This saw Harry pause from selecting his breakfast. He did apologize, and mean it this time. There's also the change in Malfoy to consider. Those thoughts would have to wait as Urgit flew towards them with hopefully the details they'd been waiting on regarding Kingussie. Learning about their new home was far more important to Hermione and Harry than any thoughts of Ronald Weasley being homeschooled. Thanks for reading. 2 I hope to be back to posting at the weekend for chapter 56. Since I've yet to write one word of it though, that timing is as always a hope rather than a promise. Wedding and holidays sorted. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I don't own these characters and my writing certainly couldn't be considered canon. If my efforts don't fit your idea of what a Harry Potter story should be, I can only offer my apologies and make a suggestion. Writing your own really is the only way to ensure the story progresses exactly the way you want it to. It also gives the rest of us something to read. Chapter 56. Aurora Tonks was rather confused, not a new feeling to be sure, but it was a stranger to her while on duty. Usually there were precedents, procedures in her training to fall back upon, but nothing had really prepared her for this situation. She'd just watched as a wizard drank a potion that looked and smelled like 3-day-old vomit from someone who had just spent hours binging on haggis and neeps. Disgusting couldn't even begin to describe the concoction. Tonks was nearly vomiting herself just from watching him drink it. As she walked beside him through the school grounds, it began to dawn on the Aurora just what was confusing her about this situation. It was the way he dealt with this whole procedure with a quiet sort of dignity, certainly not the reaction she'd been expecting. I think it's strange the way you seem so accepting of this, drinking that revolting potion and then being escorted off the school premises like some sort of criminal. Being called strange by a woman whose hair has been 3 different colors since we met earlier tonight is what seems weird to me. I think I'm insulted. The smile he gave her might have been strained, but it was there all the same, making the situation seem even stranger to Tonks. I guess I'm just amazed at how accepting you are of all this. I don't think I would be. This earned a chuckle from Remus, confusing Tonks even more. Just what part of this do you find funny? Oh, I was just thinking back to the last beautiful witch who asked me that same question. She couldn't understand it either. This is who I am though. The wolf only has control 1 night a month. Her confusion just reached another level. Was this beautiful witch your girlfriend, or are you just trying your chat up lines on me? I have to say, being chatted up by a werewolf under the moonlight was not what I had in mind when I crawled out of bed this morning. This actually got a laugh out of the marauder. You're more like serious than you know. The answer to both your questions though would be no. The witch in question was the best female friend I ever had. I certainly loved her, but she was way out of my league for there to be any relationship other than friendship. She was actually way out of James' league too, but he changed enough to catch Lily's attention. When I look at Harry I might see James, but his words and actions are pure Lily, until he goes all goblin on us and charges a bloody basilisk with that sword. Just at that, a massive black dog came charging across the grass toward them. Took you long enough. The dog then transformed and Sirius was wearing a wide smile. Well, Moony, when you're saying goodnight to your fiancé it's just not something that can be rushed. Hey, Tonks, I can take Remus from here if you want. What, and have a werewolf and a grim running around Hogwarts? Not on my watch. I'll escort you both through the wards and into the safe location. That's my job here. Hey Moony, what have you been telling my cousin here? It's as if she doesn't trust me. Oh, she didn't need any help from me with that one. Tonks here is smart enough to figure it out for herself. Beautiful and smart. Are you sure you're not trying to chat me up, Professor Lupin? Not tonight, or Tonks, certainly not tonight. This left Sirius looking at them both with some bemusement. Okay you two, what did I miss? This scheme had seemed fine when Gilderoy had talked it over with himself. It was now blindingly obvious there was something he'd forgotten to take into his calculations. It was bloody pitch dark out here. He wasn't afraid of the dark per it was more about the cover it provided for anything to sneak up on him unawares. Lockhart had no idea how true that would soon prove to be. He was originally going to attempt this from the edge of the Forbidden Forest. There was no way though he would be going anywhere near that dangerous place in the dark. The locked front gates of Hogwarts was about as near as he could get, and, having first made sure Hagrid had spent the evening in the 3 broomsticks, Gilderoy proceeded to put his simple plan into operation. Emptying out the sack of entrails and blood from the butcher's right at the front gate, Gilderoy then cast a sonorous on himself. H-O-O-O-O-W-W-H-O-O-O-H-A-U-U-W-W-H-O-O-O. The howl reverberated around the castle and its grounds, just as Gilderoy had hoped. When they then found the blood and guts in the morning, the werewolf would be kicked out and they would be coming crawling back to him, begging Gilderoy Lockhart to return to Hogwarts. He decided to give it one more howl before beating a hasty retreat, just in case a real werewolf decided to make an appearance. H-O-O-O-O-W, what the fuck was that? The bright flash had illuminated every detail of just what he was doing. Then Gilderoy found himself being asked questions by a witch wearing a strange hat. Normally having his picture taken and being interviewed by the press were amongst 2 of his favorite things, not tonight though. Rita had also cast the sonorous on herself. She wanted as many people as possible to know exactly what was happening here. Gilderoy Lockhart, can you explain why you were standing there with your hands covered in blood while howling like a wolf? The photographer's flash went off again as his camera caught the panicked look in Lockhart's eyes. A panicking Lockhart was only ever going to react one way, by drawing his wand and casting the only spell he was proficient in, also forgetting he still had the sonorous cast on himself. Everyone within a quarter-mile radius heard him scream, "Obliviate," while his wand was pointing at Rita Skeeter. Rita though had been studying her victim for a while and knew his modus operandi inside out. She should, since Lockhart talked about it to himself. With only his portraits for company, Gilderoy would chat away to himself all day long, allowing Rita to discover most of his secrets and be here tonight. Disillusioned in the dark, they had followed and waited on Lockhart putting his scheme into operation before she and the photographer revealed themselves. Knowing her latest victim's modus operandi also meant Rita had talked with her powerful friend on just how to protect her memories. The warm fur hat she was wearing was nothing more than camouflage for the goblin-wrought and charmed protective steel helmet that was under it. That protection very effectively kicked in and blasted Lockhart's spell straight back at him, with the photographer's flash indicating that he'd at least caught part of that action. The photographer's latest picture would actually show Lockhart's curse rebounding and knocking him flying into the entrails he'd spread along the grass. Being a careful man, the photographer took another picture of Lockhart lying there amongst the blood and guts, just in case. Tonks arrived a few moments later and confirmed this evening was just getting stranger. A clearly dazed Gilderoy Lockhart was sitting in a pile of blood and guts, smiling as if he hadn't a care in the world. Oh, hello, you're pretty. What's your name? What's my name? This drew a groan from the Auror. Bloody hell, must be my night for getting propositioned. Can anyone tell me what the hell happened here? The front page of the Prophet informed the entire country just what was going on there. The picture really was worth 1,000 words. Lockhart was sitting in a gory mess of his own making while smiling like a loon. Aurora Tonks had her wand covering him while Rita Skeeter could be seen writing notes. Rita explained that she had been researching material for a book on Lockhart, pointing out that these investigations were uncovering truths that showed a much darker side behind the award-winning toothy smile. When her research uncovered his plot to discredit someone who was quickly becoming one of Hogwarts' favorite professors, Rita had felt compelled to act even though her research was far from over. While she hinted that doing her public duty might cost her in book sales, she never mentioned the large payment from the profit for this story nor the free advertising for her yet-to-be-written book this article just provided. What Rita did clearly state though was her thanks to goblin craftsmanship and ingenuity that protected her memories from Lockhart's attack, an attack that was also clearly displayed in a smaller photograph. Her research had led to the knowledge that the memory charm was really the only spell Lockhart was proficient casting, so she had obviously taken precautions to protect herself. His own spell rebounding saw the once famous wizard now unable to remember his own name, leaving Rita very thankful for her borrowed protection. How a person can accomplish everything that Lockhart claimed to have done in his books while really only being able to cast one spell would be revealed in her forthcoming novel, a true biography of a wizard who had conned all of them. The mood inside Hogwarts was that of jubilation and relief. They were ecstatic that Lockhart wouldn't be returning, ever. There was also a fair mixture of relief in there as well, relief that there hadn't really been a werewolf roaming the grounds last night. Harry's comment to the Ravenclaws that Aurora Tonks securely locked Professor Lupin off the Hogwarts grounds and that Lord Black had spent the entire night watching over his best friend was soon spread around the castle. Rita was correct in that Remus was becoming popular as a very good teacher of his subject. Whether that popularity could have survived Lockhart's attempt to discredit the werewolf is thankfully something they would now never have to find out. That Lockhart was now in St. Mungo's still not knowing his own name was considered poetic justice by most who had ever sat through one of his classes. Roger's comment that perhaps they could post all those questionnaires about Lockhart they were forced to complete back in September to St. Mungo's, to see if it would jog his memory, raised a few laughs. Padma though had to have the last word. Since Rita Skeeter is hinting that most of what he wrote was actually done by someone else, those questionnaires didn't really apply to Lockhart anyway. Bill had worked the four of them hard this morning without receiving one complaint. They appeared to be so glad to see him back in the castle that they just got on with the lesson and did the best. At the end of the class, all four also took time to talk to him about the Marauders and what they had planned for this week. As usual, Bill made a few suggestions that Hermione carefully noted in the ledger they used for club business. As they were getting ready to leave, Harry then totally surprised their tutor. Assistant Ambassador Weasley, your brother Ronald wanted to thank my father for pushing yours away from the killing curse. Could you pass that message on to my father for me please? This so dumbfounded Bill, he really had to ask for confirmation. Ron actually said that. Oh yes, just after he apologized to me for acting without thinking, again. He really seemed to mean it this time too. Well, see you tomorrow. The four walked away, leaving a completely flummoxed Weasley behind. As they headed off to the dorms for a much-needed shower, Neville nodded his agreement of the way Harry had handled that situation. It's a Weasley family matter, Harry. You provided the information without expressing your opinion, it's now up to them what they do with Ron. Had you asked if he could stay in Hogwarts, with your father saving Mr. Weasley they would have felt obliged to say yes. This drew a harumph noise from Hermione. I just don't get all this life debt malarkey, how far do you take it? You and Harry have now both stopped Voldemort, does that mean the wizards and witches of Britain owe you both life debts? Padma just couldn't resist. No, it means they're owed orders of Merlin, first class. Just as well us girls already have our dates snagged for the next Merlin ball, these two would be fighting the girls off with beta bats. Neville was gaining the confidence to tease right back. I won't be going to any balls without my beautiful betrothed on my arm. See, Hermione, get them young enough and any wizard can be trained. Padma was now squealing with laughter as Neville began to chase her along the corridor, leaving Harry and Hermione in their wake. Neville's right, Harry, you did the best you could. In all honesty, you did more than he deserves. Let the Weasleys deal with their own problems, we usually generate enough of our own to be getting by with. Harry slipped his arm around her waist and offered a gentle kiss. I certainly can't argue with that, nor the fact we both need a shower. It was Hermione's turn to chase Harry along the corridor, not for saying she needed a shower but rather for ruining a lovely moment. Ronald Weasley was enjoying a lovely moment, or rather a lovely dinner. What made it especially lovely was that he never expected to be eating it, not in Hogwarts anyway. He was sure Bill was going to smack him one earlier as he verbally tore strips off his youngest brother, just as he was certain that he would be heading home to the burrow today. Turns out Ron was wrong on both counts. Bill though had left him in no doubt whatsoever that he was now standing on the very edge of being withdrawn from Hogwarts. For Ron to remain in the castle would take a marked improvement in behavior, study habits and academic achievement. He had of course agreed to everything but Ron had his own plans that being homeschooled would destroy. If he wished to meet his own goals then his behavior simply had to improve, there was no other option. He would have to try and control his temper, certainly not an easy task. His study habits too would have to be worked on. He needed to be here for 7 years and the only way to do that was to pass some OWLs. Other than making it to 7th year, Ron had absolutely no interest in academic achievement. His intention was to take the easiest subjects he could and scrape passes with as little effort as possible. Ron's master plan for Hogwarts would kick into gear next year, but only if he was still here. He was honest enough to know he would never make prefect, and certainly not head boy, but that left one very important position open to him, Quidditch captain. He would try for the team next year, though didn't expect to be picked, it was more to declare his interest. He hoped to be playing in 4th year but certainly expected to be on the team by his 5th. By 7th year, McGonagall would simply have to give him the badge, there were no other options available to the head of Gryffindor. Neville would probably be prefect but he didn't even watch the Quidditch matches, Dean was still hung up on some muggle game while Seamus was already more interested in booze than brooms. As for the girls, Parvati and Lavender would be more concerned about breaking a nail than catching the quaffle. No, Ron was certain the Quidditch captaincy would eventually be his, all he had to do was stay in Hogwarts until his older competition left. With that captaincy would come Scouts and Ronald Weasley's path to fame and fortune would be right there waiting for him. A decent playing career would open the door to his real goal, a coaching job. Yes, Ron had his future all planned, but first he needed to keep his head down and ensure he stayed at Hogwarts. It was great to get away from Hogwarts for the weekend and see their extended family again. Grimmauld was taking on the mantle of a second home for some of them now. Moa and Lucas were delighted to be back in London and included in that family, with the Vila hugging the children two at a time and finding it hard to believe how much she'd missed everyone. I'm surprised you were all allowed to leave Hogwarts for the weekend. She currently had her arm around Hannah, and that's where her answer came from. After last year, they'll probably make it a school rule that Harry has to be out the castle every Valentine's Day. McGonagall couldn't wait to accept our permission parchment. This drew some laughter, but Hermione wasn't even smiling. Someone trying to poison your boyfriend with chocolates full of love potions is no laughing matter. The people who ate them certainly didn't find it funny. Thankfully, Amelia got the law changed and the new wards at Hogwarts would filter out any parcels that contained poisons. This was something Susan agreed passionately with. It wasn't funny at all. Girls and boys fighting over the same person isn't my idea of a prank. The story was soon explained to those who hadn't heard it before. Luna was particularly puzzled. Why would you eat something if you didn't know who sent you it? She found an arm snaking around her shoulders as Harry gave her a comforting squeeze. That's exactly what I said and did, Luna, something everyone here needs to take to heart. They all moved to put their stuff away in the rooms they had stayed in over the Christmas holidays before gathering for their family meeting. There was a lot to discuss. Emma and Dan had brought the large book of Potter properties to help plan their summer. Some that didn't quite make it last year would certainly be getting considered for these holidays. Harry already knew Rome was out. Sirius had asked to borrow it so he could take Henrika there on honeymoon. It was Sirius who got the ball rolling as all the adults had the diaries out. The Ravenclaws were working off a holiday planner that Hermione had already prepared. The Express dumps this lot back in London on the 19th of June. My fiancé and I are looking to hold our wedding on the 26th of that month. Sirius was being deliberately formal, trying to contain his excitement at the surprise he now had for his future wife. The wedding will be in Lulea, and of course everyone here is invited. Henrika was staring dumbly at her parents for confirmation. Their wide smiles had her heart doing backflips that her future husband would be so considerate and thoughtful. That was until her father spoke. Sirius has been back and forth to Sweden, making sure all the arrangements are in place. He's even rented out half a dozen holiday homes so everyone will have somewhere to stay while they attend. Your mum's not been able to talk about anything else, so of course half the country now knows about your wedding. By the 26th, the entire region of Scandinavia will know every detail. Henrika missed her mother playfully having a swipe at her father. She was too busy rewarding her fiancé. Since Sirius was now otherwise engaged, this left Barcho to fill in the blanks. Lord Black has those properties rented for the week before and after the wedding, with Gringotts supplying the portkeys to take us there and back. You may only be able to stay for the weekend, but it was easier to book the block of homes for the 2 weeks. This was met with nods of appreciation from all the adults. Whether they arrived on Friday evening before leaving on Sunday would depend on what other holidays they planned here. Harry had been thinking about that and offered his suggestion on the matter. I think the way we did it last year was brilliant, 1 week busy and then 1 week relaxing. What I would like to say though is that we should keep those relaxing weeks to just us. Luna, your dad is counted as one of us too, and like his daughter is welcome anytime. Hermione didn't know someone could blush and smile at the same time, but Luna managed it. She then expanded on Harry's suggestion. We've all got friends that could be included in some of our holiday, it's just we want to keep the quiet times to just us. This was where Dan felt he had to say something. I agree with that idea, but we may have to limit the numbers, depending on the amount of adults available. Emma and I accompanied these 4 to Florida last year and had a great time. I really don't think we could keep an eye on 8 of you, never mind anyone extra you might want to add. This again made sense to those sitting around the room, though Hannah, Susan and Parvati all clearly wanted to visit this other world their friends had told them about. Since it will obviously be after the wedding, Moa and I would be more than happy to help out any way we can. Spending time with people you like while seeing different parts of the world is not exactly a hardship for us. Put both of us down for whenever we're needed. This was a very popular announcement, though Harry then gently explained the situation to the Hobsons. It's not a case of need, Lucas, you and Moa are invited to anything and everything that we decide over this weekend. That goes for Luna's dad and of course Alice and Frank. We're just hoping that work schedules can be arranged so that we can all take part in pretty much everything we decide. Hermione's grin was goblin-worthy as she revealed one of their hopes. Can you imagine certain Slytherins coping with Florida? Padma and Neville were holding on to each other while laughing at that image. The rest weren't sure just what Florida entailed, so didn't want to say too much. Parvati though had a question for them. Who do you mean when you say certain Slytherins? We were thinking of Pansy and Draco. Blaze would be your call. We would never make you choose between him or Lavender. We just thought she would appreciate something like sightseeing and shopping in Paris more. Hermione's answer just kicked the excitement in the room up another level as she enlarged then stuck her holiday chart to the wall so everyone could see it. It now had the wedding date confirmed and the blocks either side of it color-coded for Lulea. The ministry ball and a certain joint birthday party had already been fixtures on her chart before today. With the wedding now confirmed, Hermione ran her wand over the chart and highlighted 2 3-week blocks, one in July and the other in August. We hope to spend the week before the ball and the one before returning to Hogwarts in King Usi, leaving us these 2 blocks to plan for holidays. Ideally, we would like to return to Florida for the first week again, and the island after the ball was just wonderful. If we can all agree on what to do for the other weeks, then everyone will be able to schedule their summer. Augusta had really enjoyed her summer last year, with this one already certain to be better. She was first to put her options to the group. Like last year, I would be delighted to accompany everyone on the quieter weeks. Florida might sound fun to our younger members here, but to me it just sounds exhausting. This drew some laughter and Neville sprung to his grand's defense, citing she wasn't that old. I also have another reason. We won't be visiting your mum and dad tomorrow, Neville, they'll be visiting us. The healers want to see how they are after getting out for a few hours, so they're coming here tomorrow afternoon. They should make the ball and may even come on holiday with us, not Florida mind you. Neville was out of his chair and hugging his grandmother. Padma had also followed her betrothed to do the same. There was hardly a dry eye in the house, though Hermione did try to get everyone's attention back. She knew Neville would need a moment to get himself together after that. Okay, so we have Lucas and Moa for all 6 weeks, Augusta for the quiet weeks, and father, will you be the same? Just the thought of spending time with his children, and people he had genuinely grown to like, had Barcho quickly agreeing he would be there for the quiet weeks too. As names began appearing on Hermione's chart, she turned her attention to her mum and dad. We can't really take the whole summer off, but if we make Sweden a weekend, then your mother and I should be able to swing both 3-week blocks. Moa was quick to offer reassurances the children would be fine and well looked after in Lulea, no matter how many decided to stay, or for how long. The Patels were the next names to appear on the sheet of parchment. They too were having to make the wedding a weekend jaunt, though would then accompany their children for the first block of the holidays. They would also be going to the island. No one who'd visited there last year wanted to miss that. Syria's announcement that Lord and Lady Black would be delighted to join the party for the last block had Henrika rolling her eyes while the rest chuckled at her antics. Remus was still in Hogwarts, so his participation would be discussed when they returned, but Amelia also put her name forward for the last 3 weeks too. Hannah rather shyly asked if her parents could be included in Florida, to provide an extra set of adults. She couldn't contain her wide smile when the names quickly appeared on the parchment for that week. One glance at Hermione's chart was enough to see that the adult supervision would be more than enough to cover all the friends spending their holidays together. A few nods and the parents had all agreed to that, creating a real mood of celebration. Then Emma placed the book on the table as Padma emitted a squeal more reminiscent of her twin sister. This saw some glances being sent in her direction, but she was unrepentant. Once you all see what's in that book, you'll be squealing too. As they began to search for another 4 destinations to fill the holiday chart, Padma was proven right on more than one occasion, and not all of those squeals came from a Hogwarts student. Padma enjoyed spending some time alone with her sister. They were both in their room at Grimmauld. What was father desperate to speak to you about? Oh, can't you guess? He's had a few more betrothal offers for me and wanted to know what I thought. Seeing that Parvati didn't seem too excited by that prospect, Padma wondered what the problem was. Her inquiries just received a set of shrugged shoulders. This time last year I would have been talking your ears off about this, and been so excited I wouldn't be able to sit down. I think the diary changed all our lives. Betrothals now don't seem the be all and end all I thought they were. Sorry, sis, I wasn't including you and Neville in that. We can all see how happy you are. I guessed you didn't mean us, Parv, but I thought this was what you wanted. I know father wouldn't betroth you to someone unsuitable, mother would never let him. Sitting with her head down, Parvati knew she owed her twin an explanation. It was my desperation to find someone for myself that saw me trapped by that bloody diary. It also showed me how immature I was being. Being possessed by a Dark Lord is a sure way to make you grow up. Padma now had her arm around her twin as Parvati told the only person she could really talk to about what was on her mind. I now have a famous sister, who has an even more famous betrothed, with best friends people are already trying to get close to. She held her hand up to stop Padma interrupting. I'm not complaining, sis, just pointing out a fact. I also have thousands of galleons in Gringotts, again thanks to you and your friends. Parvati Patil is now very desirable, and that's my problem. I want someone to like me for me. What about Blaze? Oh, we get on fine, and at least he was interested in me before all of this. If he comes to Florida, that will give mother and father a chance to see for themselves what he's like. After the ball, father might approach the Zabinus about a contract between us. With an order of Merlin, first class, in the family, the Patels now have options that weren't open to them before. Parvati's smile robbed those words of any jealousy or hurt. Both sisters were well aware what would have happened if Padma hadn't come down to the chamber. Quote ellipsis. And what do you think about being betrothed to Blaze? This rather caught Parvati on the hop, and made her think about the possibility of that happening. Blaze is really nice and treats me well. With Neville and Harry watching his every move, I can understand that. With you and Hermione snagging your 2 guys, I would place Blaze right at the top of everyone else. That was why I asked him out in the first place. I know I'm the Gryffindor, but I don't think I would be brave enough to do what you and Neville did. My insides were churning waiting on the result of your bonding, so I don't know how you felt. I was terrified. I think Neville was too. When I felt the bond forming, I've never been happier in my life. Getting betrothed was never top of my to-do list. Getting betrothed to Neville was simply amazing. Take your time with Blaze. I'll even speak with father and get him to hold off with the betrothal offer until you feel ready, if you want. I'm sure we could get Harry to invite him for another week too, if you're serious about Blaze. This got a smile from her twin. That actually sounds good, but can we wait until after Florida? Spending a week in his company should give us both a better idea of where we're going. I also want to see how Blaze reacts amongst everyone else. I like our extended family and any boyfriend is going to have to fit in. Veela, Muggles, Goblins and a werewolf added to us being from India might be too much for a Slytherin pureblood to accept. This had Padma chuckling. We are a rather weird lot, aren't we? I wouldn't change it though. Harry and Hermione were currently talking with a couple of those Muggles and a Goblin. They were desperate to find out about their house in King Yusi, but were surprised when Emma was the one doing the talking. She even had some obligatory photographs. The house is badly in need of renovation, but the countryside around it is simply stunning. It reminded me of some Victorian landed gentry who would use it as a hunting lodge for the guests. There were certainly enough stuffed animal heads hanging from the walls to support that idea. While noticing the visible shudders this produced in Harry and father, Hermione still had another question she wanted answered first. Mum, you've seen our house. Barchoke immediately took on the role of mediator. My daughter, you have stayed in our dwelling at Gringotts. I believe the word you used to describe it was Spartan. We wanted to make the house into a home ready for the summer. While we goblins can easily handle all the structural repairs the building required, to do any decoration I needed help. It was certainly a help to get all the carcasses out of the building. We goblins only mount the heads of thieves and criminals as a warning to others, not animals we have killed. Dobby took the mounted heads and sold them. Turns out they were all antique. It gave you two quite a budget for redecorating, though probably not that much where Harry's concerned. Dan's levity lifted the mood once more as both Harry and Hermione hung excitedly on his every word. There's 12 bedrooms, a number of reception rooms and a lovely big dining room. Plenty of room for the people who are here this weekend to stay but not really suitable for a massive party. Barchoke, your mum and I intended to take you both there on Sunday for a look before you head back to Hogwarts. Harry was looking at the photographs while Dan spoke. Their new home would certainly be more than suitable for him and Hermione. After a quick apology to her mum, Hermione was also devouring the photographs with her eyes. The building had a kind of grey, rugged exterior. Then again, it needed to have to survive life in the Scottish Highlands. Her eyes were drawn to all the fireplaces, almost one in every room, imagining spending her evenings sitting in front of a roaring one with a good book. Is there a public room that could be turned into a library? Emma had samples of materials, color charts and even pictures of the style of furniture that might turn this wonderful house into a home. Her daughter's question though just started her laughing while thinking of the old axiom, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Oh, I think you should be able to fit one in. Now, about color schemes, I thought that something like this would work well. At this point, Dan and Barchoke withdrew, wondering if the now totally absorbed trio even noticed they'd gone. The healers didn't want Frank and Alice's first time out of Gringotts to be Longbottom Manor, fearing too many memories might actually hinder what they were trying to achieve here. Getting out of their room and meeting people was just wonderful for the couple, that they got to see their son and his betrothed with all their friends already made their visit a success. Behind their smiles both Dan and Emma thought Frank resembled someone recovering from a stroke. They decided to pass on all the information they could find on that subject to the healers looking after the couple. It might be nothing but they couldn't ignore something that was so obvious to them. Neville was simply ecstatic. For the first time in his life he was seeing his parents outside of a hospital room. That Padma and all his friends were there too just added to his emotions. Hearing of their plans for the summer, Sirius and Henrika found themselves being congratulated on their upcoming marriage. Alice was being carried along with the excitement and enthusiasm in the room, but she had to protect her husband and not commit themselves before they were ready. She would hate to say yes and then have to disappoint Neville. The ball and then a birthday party the following night might be too much excitement too soon for us, but this island sounds like something we could look forward to. Neville would have been happy with a lot less than that, so there were no complaints from him. Nothing was going to put a dent in his good mood today. Rather than crowd the recovering couple, everyone then withdrew to leave the Longbottoms having tea with the Pattles as the two sets of parents began to get to know one another. Harry found himself being wrapped in a tearful Emma's arms after they left the two families to their tea. Harry, every time I see Frank and Alice, I can't tell you how proud I am that you made it happen. There are just no words. Neville would have done the exact same for me if the positions were reversed. I'm also getting to go on holiday with my godmother and godfather. How special is that? What do you make of that, Luna? It looks like I don't count anymore. Everyone could see Hermione was joking, but the witch in question certainly offered no complaints or resistance when her bonded took her in his arms and showed everyone just how much Hermione meant to Harry. Neville may be the happiest person on the planet at the moment, but Harry wasn't far behind his friend. Peter was studying copies of the Prophet he'd lifted out the rubbish on a very rare spying mission to Diagon Alley. They were painting a picture of the British Magical Society he didn't like. The Ministry had finally gotten its act together and their alliance with the Goblins was set to change their world beyond recognition. Peter certainly wasn't the most powerful Gryffindor of his year group, nor the smartest. Then again, he was up against Remus, James and Sirius. Peter was certainly clever enough to see what the Ministry was up to here, and, while he hated what it would force him to do, he thought it was pure genius on their part. The Dark Lord had coined the term, blood traitor, to tarnish those families who had the correct bloodline but didn't agree with his philosophy. The Ministry had just gone one step further. The use of these new goblin wards to stop marked Death Eaters entering the Ministry building was brave, bold and brilliantly executed. By targeting individuals instead of families, they had avoided a blood backlash. Giving those same individuals the chance to take truth serum and say they were forced to accept the Dark Mark under the Imperius left them with nowhere else to go. It was either leave the Ministry or a one-way trip to Azkaban. The Ministry had just created a whole different class of sub-citizen and the wizarding public backed them all the way. These Death Eaters had made the choice and were now no longer welcome in their society. Peter could only see these wards spreading and wondered how long it would be before the first business or shop had them installed. It was also entirely plausible that Gringotts would erect the same wards at the bank that protect the Ministry, denying those carrying the mark access to the gold too. Peter read the issue where just about every reporter the Prophet had was at the Ministry, waiting to see what the first day of the new wards would bring. The Prophet was proclaiming a stunning victory for the Ministry since there was not one incident, everyone marked had stayed away. The Prophet had no option but to proclaim this, since nothing happened and they had no story otherwise. It was time for Peter to leave Britain and he had his escape route all planned. The Channel Tunnel wouldn't officially open for another year, the tunnels themselves were complete though. There would certainly be precautions in place to stop rats infesting the tunnels, but then again, he was no ordinary rat. His main worry was currently that these goblin wards would be erected across the entrance. With the Ministry appearing to be on top of things, Peter thought it would only be a matter of time before someone decided to do it. He would need to leave and find his master, only at his side would Peter be safe. The Ministry wanted him and so did the Death Eaters. He was the one who led their master to his destruction, so he would find no succor amongst his former colleagues. That the public now knew his master wasn't dead meant the Ministry would be seriously looking for him. Peter would have to get to the Dark Lord first, otherwise someone very dear to him would perish, himself. Thanks for reading. 2 While watching The Voice on the BBC last night, something Will.i.am said just really resonated and caught my attention. For everyone that hates, there are far more who appreciate what you're doing. This could become a motto for all fan fiction authors.